Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of our good Naruto Awakens Scorch release with the help of Kyuubi. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Or wasting no time, let's start the story.
As he turned the corner and hid behind a toppled trash can, Naruto let out a deep breath. Ironically, given that he was frequently called trash by the locals and some shinobi in his hometown of Konoha, he chose to hide inside the trash can when he heard someone approaching swiftly. He heard quick footsteps and made an effort to remain as silent as possible. He let out a sigh after a few moments of silence and thanked Kami for saving him from the crowds. They had been getting together on Naruto's birthday for as long as he could remember in order to find him and attempt to kill the demon, as they called him. With the exception of his Gigi taking him out for a bowl of ramen at Tuchi's ramen stand, who had essentially become his second family, he didn't really have a first family. He had spent his 8th birthday, which fell on this day, in relative solitude. He asked Gigi if he could join the academy, where all aspiring shinobi enrolled for 4 years to learn all they would need to know for life as a shinobi, for his birthday this year. Gigi had said, "I don't really think you'd fit that life, Naruto-kun." Naruto had fled in rage, only to encounter a group of inebriated people who yelled at him and started pursuing him through the streets like a common piece of trash. This is how he ended up in his current situation. A passing rogue civilian noticed Naruto peeking around the side of the trash can and yelled at the assembling group of would-be vigilantes. The trash can clattered against the stones as a man picked it up and threw it down the alley before Naruto could react. After being launched from the metal death trap, Naruto's head and arms struck the wall with a sickening CRRK before colliding with his fragile body. As his vision went black, Naruto collapsed to the ground and lost consciousness. Naruto opened his eyes, expecting to see death looking directly at him. He wasn't right, but it was a different perspective than he had anticipated. Seal was written on a piece of paper in the center of a massive set of bars that joined together to form a gate, moldy walls and surfaces that made Naruto's nose wrinkle at the slightest provocation, and leaky pipes that dripped water, creating ripples in the murky water he was sitting in. When Naruto first looked around what would later be known as his mindscape, he saw all of this and more. And bringing everything together was the enormous fox on the other side of the bars, crouching low and growling softly from his throat, which made Naruto uneasy. As the fox's growl became louder, Naruto said, "Hello." He waved in fear. Avoiding direct eye contact, Naruto asked naively, "My name is Naruto. What's yours, and do you know where we are?" The fox merely glared at him while exposing his teeth. As Naruto edged closer, the fox offered up bait, saying, "I know your name, boy. Now if you would be so kind as to remove this annoying piece of paper, or come closer, you look very cold in that water." The fox then pounced, his claw barely missing Naruto's small body as it split his shirt in two. In an attempt to get away from the fox, Naruto fell backwards and crawled through the water. Before he realized that he was more comfortable dying to this giant demon than the Konoha villagers, the fox said, "Oh, so close. Your idiocy leaves much to be desired, but I suppose it does serve its purpose." He then crouching again as a tail came forward, inching across the watery floor, followed by another tail, and another, until 9 tails were inching ever closer to Naruto. Naruto began to cry out and attempt to flee. As the tails came together and touched Naruto's chest, just above his heart, the fox appeared to notice his abrupt change of heart. Through the thin layers of skin, the fox could feel his pathetic heartbeat. He had intended to murder the boy, but after realizing how helpless and death-ready Naruto was, he changed his mind. The fox, who now identifies himself as the Kyuubi, asked in a growl that nearly made Naruto wet himself, "Why do you not run, boy? Do you no longer fear me? Is the mighty Kyuubi no Yoko not a thing to haunt the nightmares of the young any longer?" Naruto trailed off, the Kyuubi, but I thought that you were, as he looked down and saw that he was staring directly into the Kyuubi's eyes, which were an odd wine-red color that was surprisingly regal in comparison to the village paintings. With his tails curling around his snout until only his eyes were visible through the fur, Kyuubi concluded, "You thought what, that I was, dead?" As he sent a small amount of ki at Naruto, just enough to make him tremble like a leaf as he frantically tried to stand, Kyuubi remarked, "As if that sorry excuse of a human could kill me, the powerful Kyuubi. That's not to say that he didn't seal me into a newborn youth. Such a weak and squishy vessel for one such as myself." Naruto looked down at his reflection in the water and said, "I'm sorry." Like Gigi or his hero the Undaime, he aspired to be a great and powerful shinobi, but how could he encourage others to believe in him when he didn't believe in himself? Perhaps once in a lifetime, the Kyuubi were caught off guard by this. Kyuubi's own vanity came into play as he raised his head slightly, as if staring down his nose at the most honorable of people. "Sorry." That must be one of your pathetic human words like regret. Demons never have regrets. When we do something, we have every intention of following things through with no regard to what others think. Naruto approached the Kyuubi's cell as he stood just outside the bar and said, "No, I'm sorry that you got stuck in a weak vessel, something outside of your control." Lifting a claw to Naruto's chest and pressing its tip against the blonde's skin, Kyuubi arched an eyebrow. A drop of blood tinted the tip of Kyuubi's claw, but Naruto's eyes remained fixed and he took another step forward without hesitation. Kyuubi stood on his haunches and dragged his bloody claw through the water as he carved something in the stone. Pity, another one of your pathetic human emotions. Though I suppose your statement and demonstration does bear some merit. It is nothing for a lion to kill a mouse, not enough 1,000 mice, but for a single lion to take down an elephant, it is revered by its pack. I will help you, boy. I will grant you access to a lost power, and grant you permission to use my yuki whenever, but I will not give it freely. If you desire it, you must temper and weather my influences when using it, just as the best blade must be forged by one's own hands. I will help you until you attain that terrible title of Hokage, and then we will fight each other, to the death, and when my power consumes your weak human body, I will be revered across the elemental nations as ruler supreme," Kyuubi said, letting the single drop of blood trickle into the carved seal on the floor before he bit his lip, letting the blood mix with Naruto's in the seal as Naruto felt his body awaken. Kyuubi sighed as Naruto woke up and fell back asleep, whispering to himself, "Good luck, Kit." When he opened his eyes, Naruto saw a steak knife descending toward his head. He crossed his arms in an attempt to defend himself, but a ring of fire shot up from the ground and engulfed him as he screamed in agony, his body twisting and contorting in the throes of death as the onlookers stood motionless in shock and terror and Naruto cried, the screams echoing in his ears. Even when Naruto felt himself being raised, his body tingling, the Shushin's touch on his back, and a soft voice whispering to him, he continued to cry. The Sandame rocked Naruto and whispered, "It's okay now, Naruto-kun, don't worry, the villagers won't bother you anymore. I promise you, on my title as Hokage, they won't harm you ever again." The blonde stopped crying and his body went slack with sleep, but he still held on to the Hokage's robes tightly, keeping him grounded to the world and his dream while he slept. With a faint smile, the Hokage gazed down at him and looked at a picture, pleading for forgiveness for allowing the villagers to do this year after year. He reached into his robes and took out an envelope containing Naruto's letter of enrollment at the academy, where he would begin his first semester in just 1 week. With a grunt, Naruto hit the ground, and his covers encircled his alarm clock as it fell from the nightstand and struck him in the head. The clock, which had just gone off and woken Naruto up for his first day of school, was still ringing non-stop as he rubbed his head and moaned. After attempting to master his new fire abilities for the past week, Naruto discovered that he could hardly light a tiny fire with his fingertip unless he focused all of his energy on his target. Consequently, he had been up for several hours last night trying to solve this issue before going to bed at around 3 in the morning. This meant that he only got 3 hours of sleep for the day as he yawned and reached for his alarm clock. However, Naruto was nearly 10 minutes late for his first day since his clock had gone off an hour later than he had planned, so he jumped to his feet. He picked up his signature orange jacket, black undershirt and orange track pants, the closest clothing he could find. Running out of the room, he snatched his goggles from the corner of his couch and, barely remembering to grab a cup of instant ramen, filled it with water, and used the small flame he conjured at his fingertip to warm the cup and cook the ramen. When he realized he had forgotten his shoes, he had to quickly turn around. Iruka Amino, meanwhile, sighed as he observed the class of this year, while Sakura, the pinky, and Ino, the blonde, argued. Another student, Sasuke Uchiha, a raven-haired boy in the third row, was trapped in the center of the desk, surrounded by a platinum blonde and a pink-haired girl. Iruka checked his roll sheet and saw Shikamaru and Choji, a boy sleeping on his desk, and his partner eating a bag of chips while pieces of the chips flew through the air around him. Beside the two was Amy Gakinjo, a vivacious girl, the daughter of a member of the civilian council, with brunette hair styled in a mountain-like stack. 2 girls, or perhaps boys, who were unquestionably twins were playing cards in the front row. Kiba, the feral boy, Narissa and Farissa, the twins, and a brunette boy with a feral appearance were attempting to attract the attention of either of them as a small white puppy popped out of his jacket. He noticed that someone had written Akamaru, a second name, next to Kiba's on his roll sheet. Iruka could see a boy in the upper right corner, nearly completely encased in a huge overcoat, observing the other students with little to no emotion. Aburame Shino. He was sitting next to a girl with short blue hair who seemed to be watching for something as her eyes darted around and her index fingers pressed against each other. Hyuga Hinata. The twins jumped when the door flew open, and Narissa bumped into Kiba, who passed out and fell into Sakura's lap. Sakura then had a panic attack and punched Kiba in the head while screaming, "Pervert!" and carefully removing Akamaru first. Sakura, however, had been knocked down by Kiba's fall when she headbutted Sasuke, who then fell into Ino, sending the two of them to the ground with Sasuke on top of Ino, who fainted from the force of the blow to her head. As the line of students was removed like a set of dominoes, Hinata laughed behind her hand. Other students mimicked her laughter, with some even laughing aloud. Akamaru's glances around and yipping at his master completed the scene. The entire room turned to watch the person who started the falls, but instead they saw a boy with wild blonde hair and goggles on his head. He looked around shyly and tiptoed up the stairs as if no one could see him as he took the last available seat next to Hinata. His cerulean blue eyes and ugly orange jacket only enhanced his appearance. Naruto said, "Hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki." Hinata blinked and simply stared at him while introducing herself, with Shino following. Iruka said to Naruto, "Excuse me, but could you come down here?" Naruto nodded and walked shamefully down the stairs to the teacher's desk, where he stood feeling like a mischievous child. Iruka crossed his arms and waited for Naruto to offer an explanation, saying, "Who are you? I don't have you on my roll, and I won't accept someone who can't arrive on time." Rather, Naruto requested a moment as he started searching through his clothes and retrieved the following items: 2 paint cans, 1 yellow and 1 red. 3 rubber bands, a peanut shell, an inch long pencil, 1.75 in change, an apple that he bit into before flinching, a pack of cigarettes that Iruka seized, a pipe that Iruka seized, an orange book that Akamaru seized, and, lastly, a box of dog treats that Akamaru confiscated. After giving it some thought, he rolled up his pants leg and reached up as he took out the envelope that held his letter of admission to the academy, which included a list of supplies and directions to this room, both of which were signed by the Hokage. Naruto nodded and hurried back up the stairs, leaving the stack of his belongings in front of Iruka's desk. Iruka received a tick mark before settling into his seat, which was later redone when he instructed the students to turn to page 93 in their textbooks. "Fine, go back to your seat, but know this, I won't tolerate any more tardiness, Mr. Uzumaki. Do you understand?" Naruto said. 10 hours later, after remembering everything he had dropped this morning, Naruto stretched as he walked out of the classroom. Due to Iruka's decision to lecture him on the importance of punctuality, he was the last person to depart, nearly an hour later than the others. As a result, Naruto created a new rule to live by: it wasn't worth learning if he couldn't pronounce it correctly. That being said, he was now deeply engaged in organizing all of the knowledge he had acquired today, including knowledge of Konoha history, accuracy, and sparring techniques. He had the impression that he had stumbled upon a secret library with a vast collection of books on any topic he wished to study. But according to Naruto, the test Iruka Sensei gave them to gauge everyone's understanding of the various facets of being a shinobi was the worst part of the day. With the exception of stealth, where he finished second and even outperformed Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto finished last in practically every category. Shino Aburame, his deskmate, was the only person to beat him, but Naruto didn't care. He was content that he was skilled at something other than getting battered. He took a small book called The Must Know Clans of Konoha from his jacket and sat down on a swing. He opened the first page and concentrated on taking in the information about each of the major clans in Konoha, including some of their most well-known members, like Hashirama Senju, Tobarama Senju, and Tsunade Senju, who were all from the Senju clan, which had very few surviving members. Intrigued by his classmate Sasuke, he read about the Uchiha clan next. He discovered that they were once regarded as the Senju's competitors, dating back to when Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha founded Konoha. The latter, Itachi Uchiha, and Shisui Uchiha were among the well-known members. Because the Uchiha had the Sharingan and the Hyuga had the more potent dojutsu, they were their more recent rivals. The Sharingan wasn't discussed in great detail in the book, probably because it might be clan secret. After turning the page to the Hyuga clan, Naruto heard a cry and hurried to his feet, dropping his book to run in the direction of the cries. As he rounded a tree, he saw 3 older boys, perhaps 9 or 10, gathered around a girl. The boy in the center, who was probably the leader, grabbed the girl's forearm and tried to pull her in, but she resisted and attempted to fight him. "You're a pretty one. How about you go somewhere with me, and we can have fun?" Rather, the leader got in her face while his 2 lackeys seized her from behind and bound her arms to her side. Both boys rolled in the grass as they battled for control, and Naruto reacted by running at the boy as he tackled him to the ground. As the boy attempted to wriggle free, Naruto got on top and punched him across the cheek, but before he could strike him again, one of the other boys put his arms around him and lifted him. From the ground, the leader said, "Just stay out of this, demon boy." The final boy approached and punched Naruto in the face, but Naruto dismissed the blow. Because of his past experiences, he was accustomed to beatings and bleeding, so he spit the blood in the boy's face as he stood up, kicking outwards as the boy staggered back. When the final bully let go, Naruto threw his head back, shattering his nose. The bullies got back up and kicked Naruto in the side as he attempted to curl up and defend his body, causing him to collapse to the ground and lose his breath. He reached for a boy's ankle and, as the boy's pants leg caught fire, he willed a tiny flame to blink into life at his fingertip, causing the boy to fall to the ground. Even though his right eye was nearly swollen shut and his cheek was covered in cuts from the rocky ground, Naruto used the brief pause in the attack to get his hands under him as he rolled to the side and stood hesitantly, raising his fists, ready to continue the fight. As soon as the first boy approached him, Naruto moved forward and struck him in the cheek as hard as he could. The boy fell to the ground, rubbing his cheek and screaming in agony as he spat out globules of blood. The final boy fell backwards as he fled, and Naruto wiped his bleeding face with a sleeve while yelling, "Run, it's the demon." His friends followed suit. "That's right, go away, and stay away." Naruto turned to the girl and swore, his tongue out. Only for an older man, with pale eyes, to be dragging the girl away while glaring at Naruto. After yanking the girl away, the man said, "Stay away from that one Hinata Sama. He's dangerous, and trouble." He then waved to Naruto, who finally understood that it was his classmate Hinata he had just saved. He felt a strange sense of accomplishment at saving someone who, on the surface, at least appeared to appreciate it. Meanwhile, he took out a piece of paper and wrote on it with his bloody nail. "To-do list of improvement" was the title. 1. Study up on the Konoha clans. 2. Develop your taijutsu abilities. 3. Establish a friendship. Next to the third one, he added a smiley face with his signature chibi face. Naruto succeeded. He lived through all the years until today, the Academy's graduation day. Despite finishing third in book smarts and second in stealth, he was still dead last in Shuriken and Kunai practice, despite surviving 4 years of Mizuki Teme, 4 years of Sasuke Teme, and 4 years of unrelenting practice and study to maintain a mid-level grade in his classes. He was dreading today because he was certain that he couldn't pass a jutsu test. Although his Kawarimi wasn't the best, he could perform the henge fairly well, and it would be alright. The clone jutsu, which he was unable to master to save his life or pass finals, was what caught him each time. Naruto wanted to focus on the positive aspects of his academy years for the time being, but more on that later. For example, how he was able to persuade Kyuubi to talk to him and lend him a little more assistance. Kyuubi believed that his record-breaking chakra levels were likely the cause of his clone issue, since creating a clone required so little energy that it was like attempting to separate a single drop of water from an ocean. Naruto spent his free time reading a vast collection of books about the bloodlines and famous clans of every shinobi village. He even found his own clan, the Uzumaki, who were from Uzushiogakure, which had been overrun by Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri during the Second Shinobi War. Naruto had added their renowned Fuinjutsu abilities to his list of things he wanted to get better at. Regarding the first, second, and third items on his list of self-improvement goals, he had made some headway. Since none of the taijutsu styles he had studied truly suited him, Naruto made the decision to create his own, which would undoubtedly win him recognition from the villagers. Along with Hinata, he had also added Shikamaru, Choji, and Shino to his list of friends, albeit insignificantly. Regarding the blue net, Naruto turned his head to look at his female companion and secret admirer, who was averting his gaze. Hinata looked at him, blushing at the way the light caught his eyes as he turned back to glare at the back of Sasuke's head. He never seemed to notice, but the Hyuga girl had a crush on the blonde and had held Naruto in high regard ever since he had helped her with the bullies all those years ago. This might have been caused in part by Naruto's thick head and Hinata's incapacity to assert herself. Perhaps she never imagined Naruto would feel the same way about her and dismissed the looks as a figment of her imagination, which is why she never realized he did. But let's go back to Naruto's internal conflict. He had passed both the written and weapons practice portions of the finals, and he nearly had the taijutsu, but failed because he lacked a real style. He would have passed the finals and become a full-fledged Konoha shinobi if he had passed the jutsu portion. If he wanted to defeat the clone jutsu, he would obviously need to pull something out of his ass. He heard his name called and proceeded to the front of the room to stand at attention in front of his teacher, Iruka Sensei, and his assistant, Mizuki Teme, who had a grudge against Naruto. He stood calmly, mentally preparing himself, holding the pose for 10 seconds. Iruka's eyebrows went up, Naruto hasn't been able to remain motionless for longer than 5 seconds, much less stand at attention for 10 seconds, since when? As he called out the name of the first necessary jutsu, Iruka pondered. With his pen ready to check or X the box next to each jutsu, Iruka said, "Okay Naruto, show us the henge." While most of the females in the room mentally awed, Hinata resisted the urge to rush down and squeeze the chibi Naruto to her chest. Naruto nodded, channeling the necessary chakra as a puff of smoke surrounded him. As it blew away, a childlike Naruto was standing there, along with a stuffed fox tucked under one arm and sucking the thumb of his other hand. Naruto changed back and loudly declared his desire to become Hokage while making the peace sign with one hand and the thumbs up with the other. Sasuke turned to the window and said, "HN," as if the Dobi could be Hokage. He avoided looking at Naruto, seemingly denying his presence. Naruto became enraged by this and immediately launched into the next jutsu. With the Uchiha covered in orange paint, his only distinguishing feature being his onyx eyes on the now solid orange blob, he threw a water balloon up over his head and used Kawarimi to switch places with Sasuke. All of the girls, excluding Hinata, blushed at a shirtless Sasuke after the haughty Uchiha asked him to return to his seat and changed clothes. Naruto was approached by the Uchiha, who instructed him to get out of his seat. Sasuke attempted to punch Naruto after he refused, but the blonde pulled another prank by using the Kawarimi to switch places with another gullible classmate, Sakura, who was rendered unconscious. Naruto was sweating in his head and shouted, "Nice shot, Teme," from the front of the room, where he had taken his place. After controlling the irate Uchiha, Iruka turned to face Naruto and waited for him to use the clone jutsu. Mizuki watched with disdain as he crossed his fingers, hoping that Naruto would make a mistake. As smoke surrounded Naruto, Mizuki's wish was granted. However, 2 dreadful clones appeared as sickly Narutos, with smoke rising from their heads before they puffed themselves to oblivion. Turning to face Hinata, who had chosen that moment to gaze at Naruto, Naruto bowed his head in embarrassment. Before the intense stare, which lasted for no more than 2 or 3 seconds, became unbearable and Hinata turned away, both sides flushed. With tears stinging at the corners of his eyes, Naruto fled the room, taking this as a sign that Hinata was disappointed in him. Mizuki gave him a cunning smile and offered to pursue Naruto while the rest of the class finished the test. In the meantime, Naruto was outside, attempting to hide his internal turmoil while swinging in the tree's lone swing. He heard the Kyuubi grumbling inside his head, but he was also reassured that he couldn't help but be able to perform something as pitiful as an illusionary clone. Although Naruto General made an effort to ignore the demon fox inside of him, he had been improving at assisting him recently. He heard footsteps and glanced up into Mizuki. Tami's face, which was wearing a mask of care at the moment. Mizuki crouched next to him and gave him a pitying look. Naruto had developed the ability to read people, which he had acquired while attempting to live alone, and he used this ability to discern that Mizuki wished he would vanish from the face of the planet. "Hey Naruto, don't let it get you down. Iruka can be a little strict sometimes, but you need to understand that he just wants the best for you. His parents were killed in the Kyuubi attack, and he hasn't had any family since then. I think he may see a little bit of himself in you, both of you being orphans, and he wants you to show everyone that you can be exactly what you proclaim to be to everyone every day." Mizuki said this and Naruto believed that maybe Mizuki wasn't so bad after all. Mizuki leaned close to Naruto and whispered into the younger blonde's ear, saying, "So, how about I give you one more chance? It's a hard test using your applied stealth skills, but I think you can do it. If you decide to do it, I'll put in a good word with Iruka, and try and have him overturn his decision about you failing. All you have to do is..." Naruto's inner warnings went off, but his desperate desire to become a shinobi overcame them. Later that evening, a shadowy figure leapt over the wall enclosing Konoha and across the rooftops of the city. A huge scroll strapped to his back. The Hokage, who was observing the entire event through his magic crystal ball, was still in awe of how he escaped the vast throng of Anbu attempting to capture him. When Naruto landed in a wide clearing, he checked to make sure no one was nearby before lowering his defenses, sitting down, and unfolding the scroll to the first jutsu he had learned. The Shadow Clone Jutsu. Fortunately, he had spent the previous years reading a lot of books in a single night and was skilled at skimming passages for important phrases. Naruto jumped to his feet and made a special cross seal as a perfect replica of himself materialized beside him. "Okay, so I make this hand seal, and let's see if it works." He prodded its face while he was staring at it, and the clone did the same to Naruto before they both jumped with delight at mastering a physical clone jutsu and gave each other high fives. Naruto sat back down and unrolled the scroll to the next entry, saying, "Okay, let's move on. I still should have some time before anyone finds me, but just in case, clone, me." Go keep watch and dispel if you see anyone." His clone nodded and leapt into the tree line to begin keeping watch, and Naruto created a number of additional clones that split off into a wide circle around the clearing as he scanned the next entry. 5 minutes later, one of the clones dispelled as directed, alerting Naruto as he shut the scroll and got to his feet, seemingly leaning on it like a cane, and he started to breathe heavily, pretending to be exhausted as Iruka fell into the clearing. Iruka shouted, "Naruto! Do you know what you've done?" as he moved closer to Naruto, who responded with his trademark smile and peace sign as multiple shadow clones landed in the clearing, supporting Naruto with their own smiles and peace signs. "What?" Iruka paused, perplexed. Naruto was unable to create 2 decent clones just this morning, and now he has 11 encircling him, all of whom appear to be solid clones. He made the connection after spotting the scroll next to Naruto. "You managed to learn the Shadow Clone Jutsu? But that's a B-rank Kenjutsu. It should be impossible for an academy, no even a genin, and most chunin wouldn't be able to make more than 1 shadow clone at best." Iruka was clearly perplexed. "Yeah, but I have really massive reserves. That must be why I can't use the clone jutsu, huh Iruka? Sensei? Anyways, I managed to get the scroll out without being caught, which means I pass, right?" Naruto replied, and Iruka felt his heart drop. Naruto was unaware that his actions carried a death sentence and that he might be exiled from the village for what many would consider to be treasonous. A second voice, that of a white-haired chunin sitting on a tree branch with a Fuma Shuriken in one hand and another strapped to his back, cut off Iruka's sentence. "Who told you that, Naruto? It isn't true. Whatever they told you wasn't true. It was just a trap to." Iruka began. Iruka interrupted Mizuki by throwing multiple small shuriken at him, but the white-haired chunin deflected the metal weapons with his Fuma Shuriken. "Good job, Naruto. I knew you could do it, especially with your natural skill in stealth. It's almost uncanny, the way you managed to always evade the Anbu, like a fox escaping the baying hounds. Then again, that's to be expected from he said. Iruka drew a kunai and prepared to fight to protect his student, saying, "No, don't tell him, Mizuki. It's an S-rank secret, punishable by death." Simultaneously, Naruto recognized that his first impression of Mizuki had been accurate and that he already knew the secret that the 2 teachers, well, the teacher and the former teacher, were joking about. "Hey Naruto, do you remember 12 years ago, when the Kyuubi attacked and killed lots of the people of our village? The Yondaime fought it, but he couldn't kill it, so instead he sealed it into a little newborn. That's right, you're the Kyuubi, and now I'm going to kill both of you and take that scroll and deliver it to my contact in the land of rice." Mizuki responded, and began to monitor Naruto for any mental illness. With a sly smile, Naruto changed into his more appropriate battle mask. "What, you thought I wasn't aware of the fireball inside me? Please, I've known about him for years, and you think I couldn't make the connection when half the population refers to me as the demon brat? Really, I may be dense, but I do notice things, so if you really wanted to shock me, how about you tell how you have the energy to attack us after screwing your mother all last night? Oh wait, you don't have a mother because she gave you up for adoption?" Naruto teasingly turned around and smacked his rear, Mizuki's face getting redder by the second. As he threw the Fuma Shuriken at Naruto, who was able to roll to the side as the Fuma Shuriken nearly severed his head, Mizuki spat out, "Why you little?" He stood up and saw Iruka and Mizuki engaged in combat, the 2 chunin fighting back and forth while exchanging blows that were either avoided or blocked. As he turned to look at Naruto, Iruka said, "Run Naruto, I'm holding him off. Get that scroll back to the village, hurry. I don't know how long I can hold him off before he comes after you." Naruto noticed the blonde's smile, which was typically accompanied by a practical joke. "What scroll? I never had a scroll." Naruto tapped on the smoke engulfed scroll next to him, which was a Naruto clone in place of the forbidden scroll. At that moment, Naruto's smile expanded. When a squadron of Anbu arrived on the clearing, one of them with a katana to Mizuki's neck as he dropped his weapon, Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke, saying, "Do you perhaps mean the scroll that my clone just dropped off at the Hokage Tower? Or should I say, I just dropped off?" Sarutobi, meanwhile, was congratulating Naruto on a job well done back at the Hokage Tower. One thing about Naruto was that, although you knew he would, you never really knew how he would accomplish it. Naruto looked lovingly and admiringly at his adopted grandfather and said, "Thanks for teaching me the Shadow Clone Jutsu, Gigi, and that other jutsu too." The Hokage sat behind his desk and asked, "Always glad to help. Now then, I suppose you want me to let Yo back into the shinobi program?" Naruto stopped grinning broadly, but his eyes remained bright. Leaning forward, Naruto wrote on a piece of paper and slid it in the direction of the Hokage, who chuckled and smoked a pipe. "Well, here's what I was thinking," he said. Sarutobi laughed at Naruto's suggestion and remarked, "I think that can be arranged, Naruto-kun." Sitting upright in his bed, Naruto yawned as he relived the events of the previous week, before discovering that the noise was actually Naruto trying to channel his chakra while avoiding the negative influence. Kyuubi had started whining about all the noise in his head. The young blonde's difficulty escaping the seal left the demonic fox unsure of whether to be impressed or irritated. Although Naruto still had to put in a lot of effort to access Kyuubi's chakra without the fox controlling his thoughts, he discovered that, perhaps as a result of the calming effects of meditation, he could lessen the fox's influence as long as he meditated while he was doing it. Naruto discovered during his training that it was simpler to call forth the fire whenever he wanted to while meditating. He had already enjoyed the little flames dancing around him while he meditated with his eyes open. Returning to the present, Naruto wanted to know how everyone was doing since graduating, even though he already knew who his two teammates were. Today's assignments were team-based. When Naruto held out his hand after putting on his trademark orange outfit, a medium-sized fireball materialized out of thin air. The fireball then dissipated into embers as Naruto closed his hand into a fist. Before he took to the roofs and ran to the academy, Naruto smiled slightly and locked his door behind him, though it wouldn't deter anyone who was determined to enter. He arrived at his destination in a matter of minutes, and opting for a spectacular entrance, he leapt through the door and landed next to Hinata, who passed out from Naruto's unexpected appearance. Naruto felt oddly stalkerish as he looked at Hinata, who was unconscious, and blushed when he remembered how adorable she looked in her sleep. Naruto heard a stampede approaching and turned to see two girls trying to squeeze through the door simultaneously, both yelling for their Sasuke-kun, who appeared irritated by their advances. These two girls just so happened to be the two biggest fangirls in history, Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. When they eventually entered, they both jumped for the final seat next to Sasuke, but Kiba sat down before the two girls ran into him, sending the three of them falling to the bottom floor in a heap. As they took in the scene of the splayed bodies and tangled limbs, the entire class fell silent. Sakura and Kiba were sharing a kiss when an unconscious Ino was lying across the pinkette's back, crushing her down into Kiba. He appeared completely terrified by the situation, and rightfully so, as Sakura appeared to gain super strength. She threw Ino across the room as she slid down a wall, and she clobbered Kiba, who stomped back up the stairs to straighten her dress and sit calmly next to Sasuke, who gave her apathetic looks. Iruka appeared in the doorway at this point, observing the two unconscious bodies of his students leaning against the wall and the apparent ring of empty seats surrounding Sakura. Iruka sighed as he placed his papers on his podium and gazed at the graduating class, not expecting them to become powerful shinobi or kunoichi, though he was not allowed to say that out loud due to school regulations. Instead, he repeatedly slammed his head against the podium, building up the will to finish the day. Without using his big head jutsu to draw the class's attention, Iruka said, "Okay, let's get this over with. I'll read out the team assignments, as well as the team's Junin sensei and number." One girl, Amy, asked naively, "Hey, Iruka. Sensei, where's Mizuki? Sensei?" As Iruka had a realization that Naruto was truly graduating this time instead, if he could find a team that would see past his dobi-ness and treat him as an equal, perhaps he would have a chance to succeed in life. Amy once more glared at Naruto, who appeared completely unaware of the glares, despite the fact that the majority of the class had noticed him. "And why is he in here? I thought this was only for people that passed the graduation exam," she asked. Mizuki was captured a week ago, attempting to steal the Forbidden Scroll. Due to that, he was investigated by Ino's father in the INT department, and was found to have tampered with some of the tests, Naruto's in particular. Naruto was informed of this, and given a different test of Hokage-sama, which he passed. Although, due to Mizuki's tampering throughout Naruto's entire school years, we were forced to throw out all his grades as ineligible. Iruka stated using the account that he was given by Hokage as his basis. Because Naruto only received his graduation exam grade, this regrettable incident led to him still being listed as the class dobi. Mizuki also tampered with some other students' grades, leading to them getting a higher grade than they should have earned, which has led to some issues with the team placements, so just bear with me, and if you have any complaints, get over it. You're now shinobi, you don't have the option to complain. Iruka laughed out loud. Because there were so many fangirls in this class, he had been waiting for this day to reprimand them. Iruka began by saying, "Now then, Team 1, as people became agitated over not being with their friends or having poor team chemistry, which was a real consideration because the Naruto team had to be built on chemistry." Iruka said, "Team 7, Sasuke Uchiha," and the other fangirls sat up straighter while they awaited the calling of their names. The Ravenet in question just hinnied and resumed his brooding and daydreaming about ways to kill his brother. Itachi's death at Sasuke's hands was a recurrent theme, even though he beat Itachi flat out in some instances and in others from behind. Iruka yelled, "Naruto Uzumaki," and was taken aback when Naruto didn't overtly object to the pairing. Nevertheless, a number of girls were disheartened by the idea of playing on the same team as Sasuke. Because she feared the worst for Naruto's team, Hinata actually withdrew inside herself. She knew Rookie of the Year, Sasuke, Top Kunoichi, Sakura, and Class Dobi, Naruto would be the quintessential team dynamic in this situation. She was also aware that Naruto would be despised by that team. When Iruka called out the final member, she was about to give Naruto a pat on the back. Iruka yelled, "And finally, we have Top Kunoichi, Hinata Hyuga. Your sensei will be Kakashi Hitaki." A moment of silence fell as Naruto took out a pair of earplugs and gave the second pair to Hinata, who inserted them into her ears and understood their purpose. Sakura screamed, "What? No, there must be a mistake. I'm supposed to be on Sasuke Kun's team. I'm Top Kunoichi after all." Naruto grinned, unfazed by her howler monkey impression because he was wearing earplugs that his Gigi had given him to aid in his meditation and make it easier to block out the outside world. Sakura was about to yell at Iruka when he struck her in the head, causing her to falter in her tirade as she stared at Sasuke incredulously. "As I said earlier, some students were given better grades than they earned. You had better book grades, but Hinata had better vocational skill grades, which I graded. Mizuki tended to give you a curve when grading your papers. Something about being paid off," Sasuke said, keeping his gaze fixed on the bird circling overhead outside the window. "Shut up. We're shinobi now, so act like one and deal with your problems without yelling. I would never have feelings for someone who complains about every little thing." Ino mentally ranked herself higher on Sasuke's list of possible girlfriends, and she was suddenly relieved that she had kept her mouth shut. A very effeminate Naruto was kneeling down and giving Hinata a rose while a chibi. Hinata danced around inside her head. While Hinata vowed to get stronger so as not to drag Naruto down, she simply blushed outside at the thought of spending so much time with Naruto on a team and showed no concern for Sasuke. The Hyuga Uchiha rivalry between Sasuke and whichever of Hieshi's daughters became the clan heir was the reason her father had cautioned her to avoid the Uchiha. Iruka trailed off, looking at the next name with a disguised sense of sympathy for Kiba and Shino to a lesser extent. Now then, Team 8 will be Shino Aburame, Kida Inuzuka, and Sakura Haruno. At that moment, poor Kiba decided to look at Sakura, whose eyes were replaced with fire and whose hair was thrashing about like an untamed animal. Kiba had the impression that the Shinigami was getting ready to transport his soul to the afterlife. Akamaru sensed his partner's and master's fear, but he couldn't identify what was causing it. The pin-haired girl who smelled good seemed to be the main focus, but that couldn't be true because she was kind to Akamaru and always petted him and sprayed him with perfume, which made him smell good for all the other female dogs at Akamaru's compound, kennel. Okay. Well, in an effort to save Kiba's life, let's move on. Team 8's sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. Now then, Team 9 is still in rotation, so Team 10 will be Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akamichi, and your sensei will be Asuma Sarutobi, Iruka said, and all three of them looked at each astonished. They had all been told about their clan's renowned teamwork and that they were expected to work well together as each other's clan heirs. Iruka smirked at the group of all fangirls' good fortune in catching the short straw of Team Sensei and declared, "Now then, as I mentioned, due to Mizuki's tampering, the remaining 5 students will be grouped together as Team 11 with your sensei being Enko Madarashi. Your sensei will come and pick you up if you wait here. If you don't mind, I have to go meet my new class now. Congratulations to all of you for making it this far, but be advised that things get serious from here on out, and you will be put to the test a lot. Many of you will likely die in the process." "Good luck," Iruka said, practically running down the hallway away from that damn classroom as he left the room with a sly smile on his face. 5 hours later, if the book was to be believed, developing one's own unique taijutsu style was more difficult and complex than developing an original jutsu, which was a Junin task. In other words, if an original taijutsu style was merely for fun, then closely observing and modifying a different, established taijutsu style into an original taijutsu style was the better course of action. Naruto sighed as he finished another book he had been putting away for a lonely day. Looking out at the sun, Naruto saw that it was headed for the horizon but wouldn't make the vanishing act for at least another 5 hours. Naruto threw the book over his shoulder, and it landed on top of the stack of books he had finished on subjects ranging from taijutsu to fuinjutsu to the history of Uzushiogakure, the homeland of the Uzumaki, which Naruto hoped to visit one day. Rather, Naruto started working on his chakra control, concentrating on it as he attempted to climb the classroom wall, but he slipped and fell, hitting his head on a desk. Hinata ran over to check on him, but his eyes had changed to swirls as he muttered something about ramen, and she had to hold back her laughter until Naruto sat up, and then their foreheads were pressed together as they stared deeply into each other's eyes for 1, 2, 3, thunk. Both genin fell to the ground as the blushes overtook them, and they passed out. Sasuke merely rolled his eyes at the pair, and despite his lack of concern, he could tell that they cared for each other, just as his mother, Mikoto, used to stare at his father, Fugaku. Naruto's boredom caused Kakashi to enter the room at this precise moment, only to be buried beneath the avalanche of books. The elite Junin's eyes were replaced with swirls, and only an arm was left, kicking up a tiny dust cloud. 10 minutes later, all of Team 7's unconscious members awoke, looking around as they recalled the events leading up to their fainting spells. Kakashi sweating as he rummaged through the stack of books, and Naruto and Hinata exchanging glances as they joined their sensei and teammates. My initial thought. The three genin blinked at him like owls before he told them to meet him on the roof and shushed away. I hate you, Kakashi said, panting heavily as he struggled to claw his way out of the pile still. It took them a few seconds to act, and when they woke up on the roof, they discovered Kakashi reading an orange book that Naruto claimed to have seen somewhere and recalled his name. Chan Ayame's words. Ayame had warned, if I ever find out you read that trash, I'll tell Hinata about it, and trust me when I say she'll be upset with you. Naruto shuddered at the thought of an irate Ayame and an upset Hinata. Like their Nara classmate, Kakashi yawned behind his face mask and said, well, since we're going to be stuck together, I might as well learn about your likes, dislikes, hobbies, and dreams. You first, Blondie. Kakashi then sat down on the railing in a crouch as Naruto realized both of his teammates were staring at him. Well, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I enjoy reading, eating ramen, and spending time with my Gigi, nay, Chan Ayame, her father Tuchi, and, lastly, my friend Hinata. The group mostly ignored Naruto's glare at Sasuke until he said, my dislikes are arrogant people who judge people before getting to know them, the 3 minutes it takes to cook ramen, and a certain ravenette. My interests include meditation and training. Being a strong shinobi and becoming the Hokage is my dream. With a determined gaze at the Hokage monument, Naruto clenched his fist and said. Kakashi looked at Hinata, who eeped and pressed her index fingers together, and said, okay, you next, Hyuga. The name I go by is Hinata Hyuga. Hinata looked at Naruto, who nodded and gestured for her to continue. My likes are circa cinnamon buns, training, a dot and my friend NN Naruto.kun, she said modestly, adding the honorific to Naruto's name under her breath. I don't like page P. Perverts, fish, bullies, or the Hyuga elders. My interests include D. Dancing, cooking, and J-Juken trail training. Hinata, mentally proud of herself for completing her dreams without stuttering, stated, my dream is to become clan head of the Hyugas, and to become a strong kunoichi. She also noticed that Naruto smiled, which made her face flush. Kakashi pointed to Sasuke, who gave him a stern look for the name, and said, and finally, you emo. My name is Sasuke Uchiha, and I dislike a lot of things, so I don't have many likes. Training and avoiding fangirls are my pastimes. Kakashi, who was already well aware of Sasuke's obsession with killing his brother, nodded in agreement. My dream, no, my ambition is to kill a certain man, and restore honor to the Uchiha clan, Sasuke said. Hello, I'm Kakashi Hitaki, and I don't feel like telling you what I like or don't like. Kakashi stood up and gazed at the sun above. My hobbies are none of your concern, and I really don't have a dream other than to serve the leaf, he said. Well, I believe that's sufficient for today. For your genin test, come see me at Training Ground 7 tomorrow. You'll throw up if you eat, Kakashi said, and the silver-haired man disappeared in a whirl of leaves before any of them could question him. The three decided to split up, exchanged glances, and then turned to return to their separate houses. Unaware that he was going to Training Ground 7 for his competency test, Naruto yawned profusely as he strolled through the village. He only knew that he had woken up this morning to a rumbling stomach, so he ate breakfast, dressed, and made his way to Training Ground 7, where sleep was doing everything it could to reclaim him. He yawned once more and staggered into the opening known as Training Ground 7. He looked around but failed to see his two teammates, so he lowered himself into a loose meditation form and began breathing slowly as he felt the world fade away and the familiar heat of tiny flames appear all around him. He was struck with the realization that, to the untrained eye, he most likely looked like a sacrifice to the Shinigami. When he left an approaching chakra signal, he was startled out of his meditation. There's Hinata, he thought before he realized what he was thinking. He opened his eyes to find Hinata standing there, staring at Naruto out of the corner of her eye. How did I do that? I couldn't have recognized her without looking, but I was able to identify her just by looking at her chakra. Naruto was thrown into a state of inner turmoil when Sasuke approached behind Hinata, his trademark scowl growing more irritated as he looked around. Fantastic. Our sensei is unable to arrive on time, and I am first stuck with the class Dobi, despite the fact that he might have some skills, and Miss Reclusive. As the Uchiha continued to rant for the next 10 minutes, Sasuke grumbled, next thing you know, we'll end up fighting an eyebrow-less freak and a dyke. Hinata and Naruto simply stared at him, blinking owlishly. What surprised Kakashi the most was that Hinata appeared irritated by his tardiness. 2 hours later, Kakashi appeared in a Shushin, waving kindly at his genin team, only to have 3 kunai nearly take out his head. Naruto was understandable, as he needed to be kept busy or he would have found a way to trick whoever was holding him up, and Sasuke was also understandable, as he was prepared to fight and learn powerful jutsu to defeat his brother. At 2 Hinata. From behind a tree, Kakashi spoke, but before he could turn around, another kunai flew at his head. Timeliness is respected by dignified shinobi. You can arrive on time, just as we can, Hinata yelled, gesturing to Kakashi, but she missed Naruto's wide-eyed expression as a flush covered her face and she passed out. As he pulled out a small bottle of smelling salts and held them under Hinata's nose, Naruto said, "Wow, I didn't think she could say a whole sentence without stuttering. Guess you really upset her, Kakashi." "Sensei." Hinata sat up slowly and looked around, realizing that she had just fainted in front of her crush, but before she could cover her blush, Naruto grabbed her wrist and forced his own blush down while helping her to her feet. Pulling 2 silver bells from his pouch, which tinkled softly in the breeze as they collided, Kakashi said, "Well, now that we've got all that sorted out, we can get to the purpose of this test. Your job is to take one of these 2 bells from me. Anyone left without a bell when this alarm goes off will be sent back to the academy." Kakashi said, "Come at me with the intent to kill." Genin was shocked to see the 3, but Naruto broke them out as he added his own words of encouragement. "All right, so we'd better not lose." As Kakashi's eye grinned at the 3, Naruto added, his face erupting in a self-assured grin that was mirrored by Sasuke and a more playful and gentle one on Hinata's. "All right, get ready and go." The 3 genin hopefuls disappeared into the surrounding foliage when Kakashi called out to them. "Well, at least you know how to hide." Kakashi nodded, approving of their cunning. He pulled out his small orange book and taunted, causing a nearby tree to rustle. One eye widened as he leapt back, several shurikens slicing through the air right where he was standing moments earlier. "Found you," Kakashi said, tossing a shuriken into the tree as a flock of birds took flight. Kakashi appeared perplexed at the tree limbs, having been certain he had felt a chakra signature coming from the tree. Kakashi chuckled twistedly as he turned the page of his book, annoying Naruto, who leapt at the Junin, before he could attempt to discover the origin of the metal weapons. Naruto appeared with his typical self-assured expression on his face as he positioned himself in a brawler taijutsu style. He began with a straight punch that Kakashi easily parried, but Naruto pulled himself up with that hand and kicked at Kakashi's face, causing the Junin to lean slightly to the side as his foot flew past. Kakashi released his fist and raised his free hand to push Naruto's overextended leg, sending the blonde to the ground in a heap. He closed his eyes and tried to track Kakashi, just like he did Hinata, but Naruto caught himself, pushing off from the ground as he backflipped away, feeling the Junin suddenly appear behind him, gathering chakra into the seal he was holding. As he employed his most vicious technique, Kakashi said, "You really shouldn't let an enemy get behind you, Naruto." Secret Konoha Taijutsu. 1000 Years of Pain. With the intention of sending Naruto flying with chakra, Kakashi yelled and pressed his fingers into his butt. However, Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke, to be replaced by a log that was covered in explosive seals that caught fire. Kuso. Kakashi swore and leapt away from the explosion that Naruto's 2 teammates had noticed from their hiding places. He landed close to Sasuke's, searching for something before he leaned over to retrieve his orange book. Sasuke used the opportunity to throw a few shuriken, which lodged themselves in Kakashi's side and pinned him to the tree, but like Naruto, he disappeared in a puff of smoke as a log replaced him, this time with explosive seals on it, the shuriken protruding. It turned out to be a trap. Sasuke hissed, "Now that he knows where I am, I better move." He then turned and leapt away, landing in a clearing alongside Kakashi, who was still laughing strangely at his book. "Well, then, Sasuke, it's your turn." He was a proud Uchiha who refused to be treated like a piece of trash. He would show Kakashi what he was capable of, and that would show him. The silver-haired man said, looking over the top of his book at the enraged Uchiha. Kakashi's one eye widened as he shoved the genin back, and Sasuke dug his feet in as he slid back several feet. The Junin smirked and threw up a hand to block Sasuke's knee, which he then pivoted off of to punch at Kakashi, which was also blocked. "You nearly got a bell there, huh?" Unconcerned about Sasuke, Kakashi returned to his book and acknowledged, "Very impressive for a lone genin." As he ran through a brief series of hand seals, smirking, "Well, I'm not like most genin." Kakashi smirked and ran through his own set of hand seals, exhaling, "Fire style. Great fireball jutsu." A huge fireball rushed at Kakashi, who just stood there, as Sasuke exhaled. Sasuke searched for Kakashi's burned body after the flames had gone out, but he was unable to see him. "Where is he?" "Left, right, behind me." The Uchiha turned to look, but he couldn't find him. "Above?" Again, he couldn't find his sensei. "That only leaves, below." Sasuke realized too late, after a hand shot out of the ground and pulled him into the ground until only his head was left. Knowing that would keep Sasuke busy for some time, Kakashi set out to find his final genin pupil. Although her father had told her that she was the weakest of the three members of her team, Hinata took a deep breath to calm herself as she watched Kakashi beat Naruto and Sasuke in a methodical manner. Nevertheless, she would do everything in her power to win her father's approval if it meant supporting her crush. As she, eeped and leapt from the tree to search for him, Kakashi said, "Boo." Then she heard the bushes rustling and took a kunai from her pouch, ready to take her turn with Kakashi. As he crawled out of the bushes, with shuriken and kunai scattered across his back and blood streaming from his numerous wounds, Naruto yelled, "Hinata, run." Hinata dropped her kunai and hurried to Naruto's side, attempting to assist him, but Naruto's breaths began to come in ragged bursts. "Why are you so weak, Hinata?" Hinata felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes as she gazed at the dead body of her crush, whose final words were a curse at her weakness. I. Cough. "Might have survived had you been stronger," Naruto said. "What? No I. Nah. Naruto.kun, please W. Wake up. I'm not weak at all." Hinata spluttered as she held Naruto to her chest, his blood smearing her jacket, but she didn't care. She laid Naruto down with composure and struck the tree beside her with the juken, one of the most fundamental techniques in her clan's taijutsu style. Forcible palm. 8 trigrams. He chose to leave as an emotionally driven Hinata started methodically destroying the forest to find Kakashi for torturing her. She yelled, striking the tree, which happened to be the tree Kakashi was hiding in, casting the genjutsu, only for the tree to suddenly lean sideways, a black handprint scarred into the trunk. Hinata pursued the Junin into a clearing and engaged him in fierce combat using her knowledge of the Juken. Kakashi was only just able to outmaneuver Hinata's female rage fueled blows, but he did take a few blows that rendered his left arm incapacitated. When Hinata finally relaxed her taijutsu, he threw kunai at Kakashi, who was weaving around the flying metal when he felt a kunai prick at the back of his neck. Kakashi. "Sensei, what was that about allowing your adversary to support you?" Naruto smirked, but Kakashi returned the smirk, vanishing into a puff of smoke as a log took his place. Nevertheless, Naruto and Hinata didn't have to search far for their renegade sensei, who returned with his left arm somehow restored, and continued to read his perverted book, although it was almost a shame that they were going to be sent back to the academy. Initially, Kakashi fought Hinata, but Naruto kept getting in the way whenever it seemed like Hinata was going to lose, reminding the Junin that he was now fighting 2 people instead of just 1. Eventually, Hinata overextended with a palm strike, and Kakashi ducked beneath it, sweeping her legs out from under her as he charged Naruto. However, the blonde fought harder now that he was sure he could handle his fire powers. A tiny flame appeared out of nowhere, almost removing Kakashi's head as he leapt back, forcing him to use a water-style jutsu to protect himself as steam began to flood the field. Hinata chose to remain in place, knowing that her Byakugan would be useless in this steamy field, but would keep a careful watch in case Kakashi tried to escape. Naruto rolled forwards, aiming to grab the bells, just as Kakashi grabbed him, falling for Naruto's trap. With a sly smile, Naruto made 4 more shadow clones and they dove into the steam. They used their newly acquired and improved senses to locate Kakashi and attack the Junin while they had some sort of advantage. As he fought off the attacks from various directions, Kakashi was attempting to escape the steam. Great, he knows the shadow clone jutsu, too. What was that fire technique? I've never heard of it before, Kakashi thought as he struck another clone in the back of the neck, driving them away. When a huge fireball landed in the clearing, the steam was abruptly blown away. The heat caused the steam to evaporate, leaving Naruto vulnerable as he attempted to approach Kakashi covertly. The Junin caught him and threw him away as Naruto grinned. Though his movements were obviously slower than before, Sasuke re-engaged the Junin before Kakashi could follow up, proving that a genin shouldn't use two C-ranked fire jutsu in the same battle. Sasuke was easily defeated by the silver-haired man, who removed his feet from beneath him, grabbed his leg, and threw him across the clearing. He bounced across the ground and collided with Hinata as the two of them were flung into a tree before collapsing to the ground in a heap of limbs. Kakashi laughed merrily as he moved toward the two, one of them with multiple cuts and likely a concussion and a bruised ego, the other moaning loudly from bearing the brunt of the impact with the tree, and just as he was feeling so hopeful for them, Kakashi moved toward them, flipping a kunai in his hands while he gazed at the fallen genin. In an attempt to frighten them a little, he threw the kunai at them, aiming for the tree behind them. However, because his arm was feeling better, his aim slipped a little and struck Sasuke in the chest. The cold metal dug into Naruto's shoulder as blood gushed from the wound, and he cringed, clenching his teeth as he grabbed the handle, pulling the kunai out and tossing it harmlessly to the side. Or at least it would have if Naruto hadn't appeared in front of the kunai. On this wound, I swear, my teammates won't perish as long as I'm alive, Naruto swore as he grasped at the ripped jacket material, feeling the tissue start to sew itself back together and letting blood trickle out between his fingers. He was taken aback when Hinata stood up and stood in front of him with her arms outstretched, saying, "IF. Feel the same, Naruto. K.Kun." Hinata got out, but Naruto caught her and held her up before she could fall because her right side was achy. "As though I'd allowed the Dobi to outdo me. Dobi, I won't leave until I defeat you." As his team helped one another and their confidence and excitement spilled into the clearing, Sasuke joined in. "Well, nice as that is, you still have to get the two bells from." Kakashi was interrupted by a soft tinkling as Naruto handed the two bells to Hinata and Sasuke, both of whom seemed shocked to have actually passed the test, even if it was rather roundabout. However, Naruto.kun. Hinata pushed the bell back into his hands and Naruto cocked his head to the side, saying, I don't want Y.U to be sent back to the A Academy." "You don't know, do you?" Hinata flushed as Naruto gazed into her eyes and asked incoherently. "KK no WH. WH. What?" A gentle smile spread across Naruto's face as she stammered. "They're unable to return me to the academy. The other teachers wouldn't take me, and Iruka already has a new class. Gigi simply gave me the all clear to report for duty. I'm a Konohagakure registered genin. You see, taking out his ninja license," Naruto said. "You mean you weren't required to take this test? Why would you assist us when you would have been a genin anyhow?" "Stupid blondes," Sasuke asked, now perplexed. Kakashi laughed as a smile crept up his face to his eye as Naruto said, "I thought we made this clear. I'm not going to take the easy road while my teammates, my comrades, my friends, suffer." "Well, I suppose that concludes it. You pass," he said with a smile on his face as the three members of what is now Team 7 applauded before collapsing in a dogpile as their weary bodies failed them. A certain pervert thought as he cut off the flow of chakra to his crystal ball, returning to the bane of his kind, paperwork. "You're so much like him. And her, it's almost unbelievable. Just how far will you go, Naruto Uzumaki, when you find a place to call home in someone's heart? Gigi, I insist that you assign us a more captivating, demanding, and interesting mission." The Hokage puffed on his pipe and hit Naruto's desk, but Naruto grabbed it out of his mouth and threw it out the open window. The third Hokage jumped from his seat to the window and grabbed for the falling pipe, but missed, causing a single tear to roll down his cheek and fall to the ground below. The blonde's two teammates were staring at Naruto in amazement and shock that he could get away with disrespecting the village's Hokage so easily. Had he not had his head buried in the Icha book in front of his face, Kakashi probably would have ordered Naruto to apologize, not even realizing that Naruto had practically assaulted the Hokage. "Puffy. Shan," Sarutobi said sadly, trying to hide the tears as he retook his seat. "All right, if you want a more thrilling mission, I give you the task of recapturing Tora," the Hokage said smugly, pointing a finger at Naruto, who deadpanned back. Sasuke was mentally cursing Naruto for his disrespect, and Hinata and Sasuke hung their heads in despair at having to capture the elusive ninja cat Tora, who had apparently escaped once more. In the meantime, Hinata was imagining that she and Naruto were alone in the forest, with Hinata smearing her special healing cream on Naruto's cuts to help them heal, and then, Hinata's face turned red and she passed out. Fortunately, Naruto saw her fainting and placed her on the couch at the side of the office, preventing her from hitting the desk. As he glared down at Sarutobi, Naruto shot back, how about no, in his mind. Sasuke was cursing the blonde even more, but he was cursing himself much less for letting her continue to dig the hole deeper. Would you dare refuse your Hokage? Naruto reached forward, grabbed the object, pulled something free from it as he handed the third's pipe back to him, then handed over Tora. The third demanded as he raised himself to his full height before something crashed through his open window, landing squarely on his desk as it turned the organized surface into a warlike battlefield. I replaced the foul smelling material in your pipe with catnip. Tora would smell it and come running as soon as you lit it up, I knew. As Sarutobi stared at the blonde incredulously, Naruto held out his hand and said, "Mission pay please." Behind Naruto, Sasuke was in a similar state, and Kakashi simply gave a perverted giggle while continuing to ignore the situation. Naruto said, "Now then, I believe I was trying to convince you that we're ready for a C-rank mission." His easygoing demeanor vanished as he conveyed with his body and eyes that he was absolutely certain his team could pull this off. Sasuke nodded silently behind him, still in disbelief at Naruto's confidence and cunning, still mentally cursing the blonde for outwitting even the Hokage. "All right, Kakashi, do you think your group is prepared for a C-rank operation?" the Hokage asked, maskily smiling at Naruto's grit and steepling his fingers in front of his face to conceal his grim expression. Kami knows that Sarutobi never did that, so if the boy ever became Hokage, he would need it to challenge the civilian council. Yes, just perfect," Kakashi muttered, laughing away as Sarutobi sighed, and Naruto scowled as Sasuke smiled at the idea of embarking on a C-rank mission. Bandit attacks were common on C ranks, and Sasuke wanted to test himself to see how far he'd come since that night, in addition to proving himself superior to the blonde. The Hokage yelled, "Sigh. Fine, send in the client, Masumi." The secretary, Hyde, and the office door opened to reveal an older man with a small backpack on his back and a hat to protect his head from the sun. Naruto took one whiff of the man and winced, covering his nose because he smelled like a walking bar, aided by the bottle of sake that was clearly in the man's hand. "What? Is this the only value of my money? A flaky blonde, an emo, a light-hearted girl, and a giggling cyclops?" The man grumbled, "I think I'd do better with that team of dogs I saw walking around the streets." Naruto snapped his fingers, glared at him, and muttered something under his breath as the man yelled and dropped the sake bottle. Holding the bottle back up to the man, only Naruto was able to catch it because he knew what was going to happen. "Something the matter, drunkard?" Inquiring innocently as he came up with an attack plan, Naruto reluctantly returned the bottle and thanked the blonde for saving his life. "This is Tazuna from Nami no Kuni, a bridge builder for Team 7. The Hokage handed the scroll to Naruto, who was looking distracted. To be honest, Naruto thought about burning the book to get his attention, but he wasn't sure that would help. Instead, he just, accidentally, dropped some of the still smoking catnip on the book as Tora leapt from the desk onto Kakashi, who yelled as the cat started viciously mauling his book. He's asked a team to protect him while he finishes a bridge. "So, Sensei, can we continue with the mission now that you've finished reading your smut?" With a grim nod of his hand, Naruto turned back to the Hokage. "What?" Naruto asked, and Kakashi sighed, giving up on saving his book because all that was left were pieces of paper that looked more like confetti than the book it once was. "See you in a few weeks, Gigi." "Goodbye." Naruto assured the Hokage, "I swear we'll do our best." Sasuke nodded next to him, and Hinata did the same as she woke up from her dream. Kakashi disappeared in a shushin after saying, "Okay team, meet at the gate in 1 hour." Naruto turned to face his two teammates and held out his hand, and they imitated him by throwing their hands in the air before heading out to prepare for their mission. "Dear Hokage, target has been sighted on the bordering shoreline with Mizu. After a short engagement, the target escaped and is currently heading towards Nami. We're in pursuit, but chances are low that we'll catch the target." As they departed, Sarutobi produced a scroll sealed with the symbol of an Anbu communique, which he read with a sigh. He advised Hokage to prevent any Genin or Chunin teams from entering the area. The target mentioned in the message was an A-rank noob. Nin for a reason, but hopefully she had moved on. Since he hadn't received a second message, it was likely that she had eliminated the Anbu team in pursuit, and he had no way of knowing her whereabouts. A month earlier, a small team of Anbu had sent it patrolling the borders of Hai no Kuni. He sent up a silent prayer to the former Hokages to watch over the team that had just left his office. "What would you do if you were me, Minato? Even though I can't continue to spoil Naruto, I still don't want to expose him to things he isn't yet ready for." The third steepled his fingers before proceeding to the next message because he had to rush to finish all the dreaded paperwork. "You were always the rational one. Kushina would have probably beat us both and then followed Naruto," he said. "After a day. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? It would have hurt, but my hand would heal quickly, and the tree seemed to be losing whatever battle the two were having. Naruto cried as he punched the tree in front of him. As she searched the little grove of trees for him, Naruto heard his crush murmur, "Naruto-kun." He sighed and clenched his fists, but it was still clear that he was torn by the way his eyes darted around, attempting to avoid Hinata's stare. Naruto said, "I'm over here, Hinata-chan." Because of his shifting eyes, he was unable to see how Hinata blushed at the friendly greeting, but she forced her blush down as she put a hand on his shoulder, attracting his attention to her when she saw the single tear that ran down his face. It seemed like such a strange sight. Naruto, her hero and crush, upset and depressed. Before she could think, she put her other hand on his other shoulder as she pulled him in, encircling him with her hands, and hugging him. Naruto blushed violently at the physical contact and slowly raised his hands as well, embracing the equally flushed brunette. "What's the issue?" Hinata murmured softly, but Naruto could still hear her breath tickle his ear because of how close she was, and he gave an uncontrollable shiver before they parted ways, staring into each other's eyes. Their faces gradually drew closer together without either of them noticing, until a bird screamed, startling them both into parting with blushes that were bright enough to illuminate the night's darkness. "I'm to blame. If I hadn't said what I did, Sasuke," Naruto trailed off before continuing again, attempting to better control his feelings. "I promised not to allow my teammates to suffer harm while I was in charge, and instead of defending you, I'm the one who caused Sasuke's harm." The image of Sasuke's prone body with his arm bent at an odd angle, one that it most definitely shouldn't be able to bend it, was displayed as Naruto uttered, "I hate this feeling, of knowing that I hurt someone precious to me. I never want to feel this again, never want to see my precious people hurt because of me." As Naruto was too preoccupied to hear, Hinata trailed off, adding the honorific under her breath, "Naruto-kun, tell me, go through it with me again, and show me what you did wrong." This was a rare moment of Hinata's life as she became determined to convince Naruto that he was innocent and that Sasuke's fate wasn't his fault. Naruto said, "Hinata, I can't." In response, Hinata grabbed him and made him look her in the eye. He was shocked to see that, instead of looking at him accusingly, she looked at him as if he were a child who had broken something. She was completely convinced of his innocence, and even if he did do it, she forgave him. "No, you'll do it because, if you're at fault, this is your punishment. If not, you have nothing to be afraid of. Sasuke probably blames you, but he can go screw himself and his inflated ego. I don't blame you, and neither does Kakashi. Sensei." When Hinata realized what she had said about her injured teammate, she blushed profusely. Her walls were actually being torn down by Naruto. "Okay, as you know, it started when we walked past that puddle. It was the most freeing and limiting feeling a soul can have, the feeling when the last breath leaves your body, when your soul tries so hard to breathe again, to last another second, but it isn't possible because death comes to everyone without question or resistance. No matter how hard you try to beat death or escape death, the truth is that every victory is meaningless because death only comes when you can no longer fight. This was the fate of every single person that death claims, the conclusion of the amazing journey called life. The point, you ask, was that death had come and claimed them, Zabuza and her. The voice had been there for the past week, ever since the battle between Zabuza and Haku. Team and had returned to Konoha late yesterday afternoon and had reported to the Hokage, who reprimanded them for continuing on a mission beyond their capabilities, followed by a congratulation for finishing a mission beyond their capabilities. Naruto sat up, breathing heavily, sweating profusely, and the voice reverberated in his head before gradually fading into blackness. However, that didn't make Naruto feel any better. Not even Hinata's kind words could make his heart stop hurting for his departed friend. You could call him weak for demonstrating sympathy for the enemy, stupid for caring, and useless for not saving his friend, but all of these accusations were true, and it didn't matter because Naruto knew deep down that being weak and caring was detrimental to the shinobi lifestyle. Despite the civilians' best efforts to portray him as anything other than a human, he welcomed them with open arms. His tense muscles relaxed as he stretched, and his joints popped as he worked them. He gave his neck one last roll, put on his clothes that a shadow clone had washed during the night, and left his small apartment. He turned to his alarm clock and saw that it was almost 5 in the morning. He moaned as he rolled out of bed and decided to go for a walk as the sun rose. In order to avoid being noticed, Naruto zipped up his orange jacket and used it as stealth training as he made his way through the village. When he arrived at the outer wall, he sat down on it and watched the sunrise in the distance, which turned the entire village ginger as it rose into the sky. The ball was the same shade of orange as Naruto's jacket. Naruto closed his eyes and relaxed, applying chakra to keep himself stuck to the wall as he mentally opened them, sighing as the light swept over him. He could have pushed out the range of his sensory sight, but the more he pushed it, the blurrier it got, and the more of a headache he would end up with. Several chakra signatures were visible beneath him at the gate, most likely the 2 gate guards and a returning, or leaving, shinobi. After Gigi mentioned something about an upcoming Chunin exam, Naruto opened his eyes once more and took out a book from his pocket. Naruto didn't anticipate that they would participate because of Sasuke's health, but you never know with the Uchiha, so he bought a book on Kumo. If he did participate in the exam, Kumo would likely be the most formidable opponent for Konoha, and Naruto had a slight grudge. Kumo, Kiri, and Iwa had all participated in the attack on his clan, but Iwa was notorious for not participating in Konoha's exams following the last Shinobi War when the 4th Hokage destroyed their army all by himself. Kiri didn't have much of an army anymore because of the Civil War, so they probably couldn't afford to send very strong shinobi to compete, and there were rumors that the daimyo had cut off funding to their village, so this was the ideal opportunity to prove themselves. Due to Kumo's well-known security, the book itself didn't contain much information about them. The only villages with more stringent security were Taki and Ain, both of which were small villages. There was one chapter in the book that really piqued Naruto's interest: the storm release. Naruto had grown cautious of strong Suiden users and water-based Kenkai Genkai after he was unable to fight effectively in Wave due to the mist. Haku's ice release was acceptable because Naruto could partially counter it with his fire, but not against someone who could use electrified water in the form of a laser. The only real place he could use it was inside the village, because the technique required him to block out all the familiar chakra he sensed around him. Naruto was deep in thought when a familiar chakra entered his sensors, causing his head to whip around to find the owner below himself and his book to snap shut as he pushed it back into his pocket. His sensors all changed from the broad range he usually employed to a more refined field that could stretch from the wall to the Hokage Tower, at the cost of being able to sense only one chakra signal. He let go and closed his eyes as he fell backwards, until he stuck his hand out and the limb lit up with chakra as he attached it to the wall. His fingers dragged furrows into the stone as he slowed his descent until he dropped down silently. His body drifted freely towards the ground below, his hair whipping around him as the wind sliced coldly into his skin. Glancing around, he jumped from roof to roof on his way to the well-known chakra, his senses warning him of its approach as he returned to his wider spectrum after he had pinpointed the spot. He stopped on a nearby rooftop and leaned down to catch his breath while observing the meeting taking place below. "Get moving, Pinky. Look out where he's going, that brat." As he moved to circle Sakura, a man gathered around him. He was dressed in a black jumpsuit that covered his entire body, had 2 pointed ears that resembled cat ears, and had multiple purple lines on his face that Naruto assumed were war paint. There was a big bundle next to him, but Naruto could feel multiple chakra strings between it and him. Naruto considered taking the book out to check, but his interest in Sakura's skill overrode the thought. Maybe I should have read that chapter on Suna after all. Naruto was excited for the Chunin exams to see how his classmates had adapted to being real shinobi and kunoichi. Previously, he wouldn't have been concerned about Sakura's skills, or lack thereof, but she seemed to have improved since graduation. Her reserves weren't particularly large, but they were easily as large as one of the clan heirs like Kiba or Shino. Returning to the altercation on the dirt street, Sakura stepped in to block the male, who scowled as he stiffened and began to brush past her. Sakura then grabbed his arm and pushed him back a little, taking the boy by surprise for just a moment before using multiple hand seals and casting a genjutsu over him. As the girl who was with him approached and dispelled the genjutsu by punching him over the head, Naruto remarked, "It seems that she's taking after her sensei." She wore a pale blouse that was loose and long enough to pass as a dress, her sandy blonde hair pulled in 4 ponytails, a large metal weapon on her back that made Naruto wonder how strong she was to carry it around all the time, and a headband around her waist. However, neither of them possessed the chakra signature that Naruto had detected, and a fast scan of his area showed that the third shinobi he was seeking was concealed in the trees above. "Baka, when we're not here to fight, don't just agitate a kunoichi," the blonde remarked as the girl reprimanded him and the man rubbed his head, appearing somewhat embarrassed. The boy said, sarcastically, "Yes, Tamari, I won't do it again." The girl didn't seem to notice. As a young redhead leapt from the trees and landed silently next to his fellow Suna.nin, a third voice said, "Kankuro, Tamari, shut up before I kill you." His arms were crossed and his gaze swept over the street with an indifferent glare. "How come there are 3 Suna.nin in Konoha? You can't just waltz in here whenever you want, even if we are allies," Sakura insisted, and Naruto sighed. Apparently, old habits did not die easily. Sakura.san, they're here for the Chunin exams. Consider whether the gatekeepers would let a wild raccoon and 2 genin without a sensei into the village. As Naruto lowered himself, Sakura and the two Suna ninja turned on him in shock. Sakura was taken aback, but Kankuro and Tamari were just shocked that the boy was aware of Gaara's burden. What if they sneaked into the village undetected or killed them? Sakura looked at Naruto with a superior attitude and said, "Honestly, Naruto. Baka, you tell me to think, but you don't consider all the facts." Well, maybe her personality hadn't changed much, but at least she wasn't worthless in a fight. Indeed, the Hokage is allowing the two shinobi that I detected from the wall to sneak past two trained chunin and roam the village in a senseless manner. And, if I recall correctly, the children of the Cage, not even 3 unnamed shinobi. Although Sakura didn't acknowledge her mistake, she at least had the grace to blush when Naruto said, "Yep, totally snuck in." Naruto didn't press the issue. Gaara. Well, the redhead seemed almost gleeful as desired to fight Naruto now, and he would make a wonderful offering to Mother. The two older siblings were practically shocked at this point, not only because they had been caught off guard by a genin who had located in the enormous village, but also because he knew their true identities and Gaara's burden. As Sakura hurried off to the hospital, Naruto complained, "That said, I have to go, Kakashi. Sensei should out of the Junin meeting on the Chunin exams, and with my luck, Team 7 is probably signed up, despite Sasuke's hospitalization." Well, that was quick. With Konohamaru following him, Naruto said apathetically, "Anyway, see you guys later." Naruto smiled softly, not realizing that this encounter would be remembered as the first time he had been unable to sense Kyuubi's hatred toward him. Naruto sighed as he drew aimlessly on the back of his test, absorbed in his thoughts about something that had occurred to him after witnessing his teammates' altercation with Rock Lee. He could feel the tension in the air around him as everyone attempted to solve the challenging questions on the paper, but Naruto didn't really care. They had gotten up early to meet at Training Ground 7 to make an agreement to do their best in the exams, and Hinata was just relieved that she hadn't fainted or stammered when Naruto had grabbed her hand. Naruto was quite pleased that he had correctly guessed that Team 7 had been entered into the Chunin exams, with the test in front of him being the first part. Naruto could sense that they were using a henge to hide their appearance, and based on their chakra reserves, they were on the high end of Chunin, but they had arrived at the academy with plenty of time to spare, only to find a large contingent of hopeful chunin in front of a second floor door, with 2 genin blocking the door and warning everyone off. "Hey, people do have places to go, so please move." With anger on their faces and several pointing accusing fingers at the 2 henged chunin, Naruto grumbled as the group turned to face Team 7. "For the chunin exam, they won't let us in. If we don't enter quickly, we won't be allowed to compete." One genin screamed, and others followed suit, pushing past the person obstructing the door once more before being pushed back. He didn't have time to waste getting rid of these weaklings, and besides, he wanted to save his energy for the real tests, so he growled out, sending an especially nasty sneer towards those who appeared ready to beat his face in. "Not out problem, now move aside or we'll move you ourselves." "Yeah, if you believe that a basic genjutsu like that will trick us, you're such fools." Sasuke heard a soothing voice behind him, and when he looked over his shoulder, he saw Sakura standing there, tapping her foot impatiently. Although she didn't look particularly different from the outside, Sasuke could see the subtle differences, like the fact that she didn't blush or flinch when he looked at her. Instead, she met his eyes evenly and smiled slightly, but he didn't show it if he was impressed. Naruto moaned as the genin around the door looked up and awed before going upstairs to the next floor. "Baka, don't say that. Now we'll have more competition to get past until I can beat Tami's face in." Even though Akamaru believed his master was a fool for confronting the fox smelling boy, he yipped in agreement when Kiba said, "Shut up, Naruto, I doubt you even knew it was a genjutsu." Naruto snarled, "Yes, that's why I was trying to get past them to the next floor." Before anyone could realize it, Kiba and Naruto were facing each other with their heads pressed together and lightning blazing between them. "Oh, you probably thought you were on the wrong floor because you couldn't even read the sign correctly." Kiba shot back, grinning wolfishly. "Hey, that's rich. If my memory serves me correctly, I didn't misspell my own name on the graduation exam." Naruto threatened, and Hinata became increasingly concerned that a fight might start in the hallway. "Now, how about you scamper off, and go hump something, mutt?" The owner of the fist, however, was careful not to strike Akamaru, who blinked owlishly at his fallen master as he started barking quickly to wake Kiba, who moaned and uttered something about, "Stupid, Kura." Suddenly, however, 2 fists planted themselves in Naruto's and Kiba's heads. A giggle reverberated down the hallway as Naruto stirred at a chakra signature that felt almost poisoned, and he saw Hinata passed out and patted her shoulder. The brunette stirred as she sat up and saw something that made her look fearfully down the hall as she hid behind Naruto. Hinata ran over to check on her crush as Naruto sat up, and the two of them repeated their twin fainting spells. "Ah, Sakura-chan, what terrible power. Be my girlfriend," a voice said as a boy knelt down and gave Sakura a rose. Sakura blushed at the gesture, and the pinkhead glanced at Sasuke, who appeared bored, out of the corner of her eye. She sighed and turned back to respond to the boy, but she was frozen by his enormous eyebrows. "Your face looks like it has two caterpillars on it," Sakura screamed and grabbed her stoic teammate as she pushed the Aburame in front of her. She detested bugs and thought dogs smelled awful, but perhaps because Akamaru allowed her to bathe him in shampoo all the time, he didn't smell awful. With her hair pulled into two buns that gave her a panda-like appearance, a girl appeared next to the boy and said, "Lee, stop scaring the poor girl. I told you those eyebrows freak normal people out." Lee pulled out a kunai and lit it up for a moment before pointing it at Sasuke. "Yes, Tenten. I understand what I must do." Lee called, "Uchiha Sasuke. I challenge you to a fight for Sakura-chan's heart." Sasuke smirked briefly, something inside of him urging him to fight Lee. "We have no time for this, Lee." As a second male, who was undoubtedly La and Tenten's last teammate, appeared behind Naruto, he said, "You can have your little fight later. Right now, we have to get to the third floor. However, I'm curious about this year's Rookie of the Year, so have your little spar, but make it snappy." Sasuke grinned. Lee, Tenten, and Neji's sensei, Maeda guy, who resembled Lee, broke up their fight after they had been fighting for roughly 5 minutes. "I've heard of hero worship, but to take it that far," Naruto thought as he shook himself out of his reverie. Naruto reflected on the incident that nearly killed his teammate and how he blamed himself, thinking, he did rather well considering his condition. Rewind. "Scaredy cat, are you alright?" Naruto asked mockingly as he crashed into the side of one of Zabuza's water clones, causing it to scatter into water droplets that were invisible due to the thick fog. The fog appeared to sense the will and started to clear. As he charged past Naruto, leaping in front of him with a kunai, Sasuke grabbed Naruto's collar with his free hand and attempted to lift the blonde off the ground. Had Naruto been a typical malnourished child, he probably would have succeeded, but Naruto had a few people who took care of him, so he was well nourished, which is what he had to be if he wanted to be a shinobi. "That's it, Dobi. Your attitude is getting to me." Spittle flew from Sasuke's mouth and splashed against Naruto's cheek, who slowly wiped it off before punching Sasuke in the face. "You are a nobody compared to me, Uchiha, you understand," Sasuke said, stumbling backwards and dropping his kunai as he fell on his butt. "Look at how a simple punch brought down the all-powerful Uchiha." Naruto responded apathetically, then his eyes widened and he leapt to the side, saying, "Move it, Uchiha. I'm sure your clan would be so proud." The Uchiha sneered at Naruto as he let out a bark. "Orphan Dobi, it's as if I'm going to listen to you." When Sasuke responded, a second water clone emerged from the bushes and headed straight for him. Sasuke's eyes widened as he stood to avoid it, but he slipped on his dropped kunai and fell forward. The clone easily hefted his enormous blade and brought it down on Sasuke, who screamed. However, as Naruto emerged, breathing heavily and holding out a kunai, his ambush barely made it in time, and he was soaked with water. Sasuke's eyes were still the size of dinner plates as he went unconscious, the shock too great for the Genin Uchiha, and a paper thin cut appeared on his neck where the blade had touched him, as if in agreement with this fact. Flashback termination. His eyes were the distinctive red of the Sharingan when he had woken up from a feverish nightmare a day later. Sasuke claimed that his fear of dying had enabled him to activate the dojutsu. Kakashi had made sure Sasuke was battle-ready by having him visit the psych ward when they got there. Considering where they were, he had apparently been given a clean bill of health, but Naruto was still deeply affected by the fact that he nearly killed his teammate due to his honorable but foolish Nindo. Curse it completely. Though she always seemed frightened when he was around, Hinata had told him about Neji, the final member of Team 9 and her cousin, calling him Neji.ni.san. It had seemed as though she had wanted to say more, but she had said that was not her place. That led them to this point, where Naruto was bored to death and made the decision to try to get acquainted with some of the competition while also meditating. He was supposed to be cheating on a test to answer questions, but he had no real way to do it without being caught, so instead he was secretly setting people's tests on fire, which had been, at least to Hinata, quite amusing when everyone started acting like the room was haunted. Why in Kami's name was his mindscape a freaking sewer? Naruto disliked sewers, and from what he could tell, it was supposed to represent his mental stability, which was complete nonsense because he was well educated and structured. He felt the noise fade away as he fell into the blackness of his mind, until he felt himself impact something wet and slimy. He rubbed his head and got up to find himself in his mindscape, which was still a sewer, which annoyed him greatly. The Kyuubi's voice reverberated through the deserted stone walls, "Hee, silly human." For some reason, Naruto became enraged at the Kyuubi's laughter at him. The fox was imprisoned inside a weak human, as Kyuubi liked to refer to them, and he still had the gall to make fun of Naruto? Someone was going to pay. Stupid fox. Stop talking. Naruto yelled at the monstrous demon fox, which ignored him in favor of chuckling at him. Hey, I said shut up. When Naruto tried again, he was still ignored. Stop talking. You Ngoli fuck. The fox merely twitched its ear in response to Naruto's shout at the top of his lungs. Naruto sighed and sat down, concentrating on the task of putting an end to the fox's laughter. Isn't it unpleasant when it occurs to you? Naruto was interrupted from his meditation by the Kyuubi's question. Naruto gritted his teeth and growled, "What are you talking about? I don't go around laughing at you and disturbing your rest." "No, but I've only heard, sniff, sniff, my friend is dead, wah, for the past 2 weeks. Kyuubi growled and glared at Naruto, who retreated a step in spite of the hate directed at him. "Well, I had to kill one of my friends, so what do you want me to do, Demon Fox? I'm not like you. You can kill and move on right away." When Naruto shouted back, "I'm a human, I grieve," the fox snorted, causing Naruto's jacket to fluff. "Hardly, I wouldn't consider you a close friend if you had only known her for 3 days. Now, you might have a case if it had been that Hyuga girl or perhaps the Uchiha, your other teammate. And since it's equivalent to killing bugs to you, Ninjin, I can move on. Grieving for someone close to me will never be an issue for me because I don't have any friends. Now stop wallowing in your own foolishness." As the cage's bars shook but withstood the 9-tailed Biju's fury, Kyuubi roared. "You have no friends because no one would want to be friends with you, so stop talking, you dumb fox." The Kyuubi couldn't help but perspire when Naruto said, childishly, "And I did almost get Sasuke killed, so there, I have a reason to grieve." "But you saved him, so he didn't die. When they save someone, what stupid creature lets out a cry?" Kyuubi said casually, "To be honest, I couldn't live with myself if I cried over every little thing." As he turned to go, he had to make one last jab at Naruto before his voice reverberated throughout the room as his body disappeared into the darkness. "You weep because someone you knew for 3 days passed away. Sasuke's older brother killed his entire family, but you don't see him crying all over the place. No, he has vowed to become strong enough to exact revenge on his clan. Maybe you would be wise to follow suit." Kyuubi fell silent at that, and despite his intelligence, Naruto was unable to think of a response, so he also fell silent while thinking about what the fox had said. He is correct. His past demonstrates that Sasuke will sacrifice everything in order to become stronger. No more mourning over death, but I won't be the same. Death is our bedmate and constant guardian. I am a shinobi. I will never again be seen as weak by them because to mourn over such a thing is weakness. I am Naruto Uzumaki, and I will sacrifice myself to defend my beloved people. The room vanished as Naruto roared and fled the chamber, oblivious to the Kyuubi's faint laugh as he did so. "Why do you look so alike, kid, old man? Namikaze, Naruto Uzumaki, what makes you unique?" He was covered by his tails as Kyuubi muttered. Hinata was shaking Naruto in an attempt to wake him when he finally woke up. "Well, let the dobi doze off while we're taking the Chunin exams." Sasuke glared at Naruto, who surprised him by returning the glare with equal vigor. "Oh well, at least we didn't fail. Come on, Naruto-kun. We need to get to training ground 44 quickly." Hinata said anxiously, "We'll be disqualified if we're late." Naruto moaned, extending his body and letting go of the tense tension inside of him. "No, Team 7 will lead the way through hell. I'm done being the one who looks out for others." The 3 of them sped off, pursuing the eligible genin teams, after Naruto clenched his fist and held it out. Sasuke sighed before bumping fists, and Hinata glanced between the 2 competitors before joining them with her fist. Anko yelled, "Okay wimps, behind me, you'll see a chain link fence, which is the only thing separating training ground 44 from the general populace. For the next 5 days, you'll have to survive inside of here, while heading for the tower located in the center of the forest, approximately 5 kilometers from the outside, an easily task for any half-decent shinobi, so maybe a few of you will make it." The genin gathered in silence as she read the instructions for the second section of the exams. Silently, Naruto and the other members of Team 7 disappeared into the crowd. "So, you'll also need to collect 2 keys to get into the tower. You'll need 1 heaven scroll," she said, pausing to lift her arm and reveal a scroll to the audience featuring the kanji for heaven on the outside. "And 1 earth scroll," she repeated with her other hand, "from each other. she concluded, grinning at the genin's dissatisfaction. In what was meant to be a peaceful exam, it was to be expected that not every member of the team would be ready for battle. The blonde took his time to arrange the special cases before the others, and Naruto closed his eyes as his sensory bubble expanded over all the genin, his mind straining to commit as many to memory as possible. This group included a certain Grass.Nin, Gaara, Neji, and Kabuto. Naruto's thoughts turned to his encounter with Kabuto as he examined the chakra signatures. Rewind, Naruto remarked, FWW, we made it in time. His teammates agreed, though Sasuke didn't seem overly concerned, his conceit evident as he believed the exams would be postponed for the last Uchiha. How mistaken he was. Sasuke.kun. A loud, desperate voice yelled as Ino bounded out of the crowd, moving much more quickly than anyone had ever witnessed her do, and threw Sasuke to the ground, rubbing her cheek against his chest as he gave the platinum blonde homicidal looks. Her voice was dripping with enough sugar to kill a diabetic. Oh, I've missed you so much, and I was worried about you, sweetie. Naruto snorted as he abruptly pulled a Sasuke, putting his hands in his pocket in half, closing his eyes as he glared at a wall. As much as I loathe admitting it, Sasuke doesn't need someone worrying about him. He can handle himself, pig. Ino yelled back, shut up, Naruto. Baka, someone has to worry about Sasuke, especially when he has a teammate like you. Her hold on Sasuke tightened gradually as the Uchiha sensed his oxygen supply running low. Ino was shocked by Naruto's hiss. What is that supposed to mean? I could protect him better than you ever could. Why, a strong breeze would probably break you in half, hone. Ino growled back and was about to say something offensive when Naruto gave a sly laugh. Wah. Whatever, Baka. No guy would find a fat girl attractive. I'm only watching my weight so Sasuke will love me. As Naruto turned to go, he heard Ino worrying about her, precious Sasuke.kun. I don't think it's working, considering you squished him. Maybe you should try something different, or Sasuke will never find you attractive. The room seemed to quiet down as the blonde boy raised his head and Ino yelled, well, at least I didn't almost get him killed on his mission. Naruto froze in mid-step. Naruto looked over his shoulder at Ino as he went on, that's right. I heard around the clan grounds how my father had to perform a psyche evaluation because you almost got him killed. As Ino turned pale, Naruto said, first of all, medical records are considered private and spreading them around can be considered treason, and depending on how important the patient is, possibly execution. Considering the council practically licks the Uchiha's feet clean, I don't favor a lenient sentencing. I'm obligated by law to inform an unbiased Junin about this. Thank you for your help, Ino. Chan. Ino got up to chase Naruto down, tell him to forget it, and threaten him if needed, but he had disappeared into the crowd, and Hinata oddly disappeared into the crowds as well. Stupid hone. Pig. I hope she breaks a nail and maybe loses a few teeth too, for all the trouble she causes me. I almost pity Sasuke if he upsets her, although he could probably tell her to bend over for every man in the village, and she'd be glad to. Naruto was enraged, even though his face was emotion. Naruto heard a voice behind him say, I agree, she does need to be put in her place. He slowly turned to see who it was, and he saw a white-haired man who appeared to be about 17. Naruto didn't trust him despite his friendly smile and round glasses. His reserves were approximately at high Junin level. Naruto was the Hokage if this man was a genin. Naruto Uzumaki introduced himself, holding out one hand while keeping the other in his pocket. True, but I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting someone who shares my views on some of my classmates. Kabuto took Naruto's hand and said, yeah, I know. I'm Kabuto Yushi, a 7-time failure at the Chunin exams. However, before Naruto could ask him anything, a loud voice yelled out. Okay, you maggots. End of flashback. As the teams were split up, each signing a waiver and obtaining a Heaven or Earth scroll from the assistants staffing the tiny booths, Naruto reflected, no one introduces themselves as a repeat failure unless they're trying to throw off suspicion from them and or their skills. Even I only took 3 times to get through the graduation, and that's only because the teachers hated me. After Naruto said, okay, we got a Heaven scroll, so we need an Earth scroll. And I can't sense Neji or Gaara, so they're at least in a different area than us. However, I can sense that creepy Grass.Nin nearby, so we'll have to be on guard. And Kabuto appears to be talking with the Grass.Nin. Just great, now we'll have to watch out for him too, although I already didn't trust him. There was a brief period of silence before a loud explosion marked the beginning of the second section of the Chunin exams. 5 days left. Naruto turned to face his 2 countrymen, even if one of them did not acknowledge him, and the 3 of them came to a halt after 10 minutes of running. Hinata nodded as she created the activation seals for her own dojutsu. Okay, I can sense a team in that direction who we probably could take, but, Hinata, I would like you to use the Byakugan to verify how many there are, and see if you can tell what scroll they have. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, then shook it off and took out some kunai in preparation for battle when Naruto asked, Sasuke, I can also sense a second team heading this way, think you can handle them, oh high and mighty Uchiha? With his hands full of shuriken, the first one rushed through the bushes, intending to drop the surprise team. Instead, he was hit by a kunai in the shoulder, and as he hissed and dropped his shuriken, another swiftly followed, cutting his arm shallowly. The second one, with his leg already moving as he attempted to kick Sasuke's exposed side, caught him off guard. As he took off, Sasuke's eyes widened, but the genin wasn't prepared for him to burst into smoke. Instead, a broken log appeared. He barely had time to say, Kawarimi, before Sasuke reappeared, kicking the genin into the tree trunk and knocking him out as he fell to the ground with his teammate. Far more cautious than her teammates, the third and last member of the attacking team threw multiple shuriken at Sasuke, who used his Sharingan to weave through them before firing back with 3 kunai, which the genin avoided. She then shot at Sasuke, who managed to block her slash with his kunai up in time, the two weapons grinding against each other. Sasuke was so close that he finally saw their headbands, which had a snowflake on the metal, and his perspiration fell. Is Yukigakura also a competitor? The girl pressed her advantage, too preoccupied to react to Sasuke's taunt, and Sasuke jerked back, saying, that seems foolish, considering we live in the land of fire, and you use snow to attack. But Sasuke sidestepped her attack and swept her legs out from under her, sending her tumbling to the ground below, where she impacted the dirt and sent a cloud of dust into the air as she lay there, knocked out cold by the fall. Sasuke smirked, his arrogance finally showing as he searched through their bags and clothes. After locating his target, he went back to his teammates, who were gazing into the night as though they were seeing something invisible, which was conceivable given the two of them. So, Sasuke, I assume you managed to deal with them? Naruto asked cynically, knowing full well that Sasuke could manage the trio, which is why he sent Sasuke alone. Yuki was foolish to send shinobi to compete, but they were much too weak to pose a threat to Uchiha. I searched through their belongings and discovered another scroll. Sasuke held the scroll up after checking it. Naruto didn't feel the need because Sasuke wasn't boasting about it. The real question is, do you think you can handle a shinobi with some actual training? Good job. I assumed you could handle them. The Uchiha would always believe he could handle anything, even after he almost died to Zabuza's water clone. Naruto asked, again sarcastically, since he already knew Sasuke's response. Feeling that Naruto was disparaging his abilities, Sasuke snarled back, of course, none of these weaklings can hope to compete with me. All right, let's begin, shall we? After saying this rhetorically, Naruto leapt into the trees with Sasuke in tow. Hinata nodded to herself as she trailed behind, but soon the three of them were side by side as they leapt through the trees, making their way to their targets. As one of the genin was literally urinating behind a tree when Naruto dropped down, a kunai pressed to the rein. Nin's neck before he sighed, slamming the genin's head into a tree and sending him into sweet, blissful unconsciousness. It appears that the genin weren't expecting competition so soon. Sasuke, meanwhile, was avoiding a shower of needles from the lead Rain.Nin, the obnoxious genin who would not stop throwing the deadly umbrellas into the air. He was avoiding most of the sharp needles, but it still reminded him of the Uchiha's battle with Hiku, who was able to turn the boy into a hedgehog before killing him. Apparently this Rain.Nin was attempting to do it again. He smirked and made a quick series of hand seals before not one, not two, but 3 umbrellas full of needles went spinning into the air, their cargo swiftly slicing downwards towards the Uchiha. At last, he slipped through the rain and nailed the genin in the gut with a kick that sent him skidding back, his arms crossed to block the standard kick. The Uchiha clenched his fists, navigating through the field of needles as he went through his own hand seals, and he exhaled a large fireball directly at the Rain.Nin, which exploded on impact, sending the Rain.Nin flying backyards into a tree. Sasuke snarled in rage as he used a quick Kawarimi to escape the rain of death, the log looking more like a pincushion than wood. With a smug smile on his face, Sasuke crossed his arms and gazed at the battered Rain.Nin. HNN, I finally got the rhythm of your dance down. Finally, Hinata was in a somewhat heated taijutsu battle with the last Rain.Nin, who was smiling almost manically as he charged Hinata down, his kunai moving to block the Juken strikes, with Naruto's crush and the only female member of Team 7. Neither side could gain the upper hand because Hinata was skilled enough to repel his frequent attacks, but the Rain.Nin was no pushover either, as he kept slipping out of Hinata's range with only a few centimeters to spare. Following one such encounter, the Rain.Nin halted the recurring assaults by leaping back and hurling his kunai at the brunette Hyuga. Hyuga had crossed her arms to shield her body, but the kunai sped past her before she could recognize it was a diversion as the Rain.Nin charged at her, launching a straight kick that sent Hinata reeling back. She was gasping for air and wiping her mouth because blood was streaming from the side of her mouth, but as she stood up, the Rain.Nin attacked again with one of the kunai he had taken from where he had thrown them. She was unable to dodge in time and attempted to jump back, but her eyes widened and she was pressed back against a tree as the kunai came straight at her. When she opened her mouth to scream, a thick hand viciously grabbed her throat, slamming her into the tree, her vision swimming from the sharp impact. She had closed her eyes in anticipation, but the kunai had sliced through the front of her jacket, leaving the two sides hanging limply to the side, her fishnet shirt showing underneath the cream-colored jacket. "Would you mind taking a look at this one's body? After you've been properly broken in, of course, I believe you'll sell for a good price," the Rain.Nin said, his slimy tongue slipping out to lick Hinata's cheek and wiping away the tears that started to fall. "That pretty little mouth will look so sexy wrapped around my meat, or screaming my name night after night." "Oh, don't cry, darling. I can assure you that it will feel wonderful," the Rain.Nin whispered to Hinata. "Just wait, baby, until I get rid of those annoying pests of your teammates." Hinata attempted to yell, but her voice came out as a distorted croak. With his spare hand reaching down and his slimy tongue hanging out of the corner of his mouth, he said, "Oh, you feisty minx, if you didn't want to wait, then you should have just said so." Hinata reacted in complete terror as his fingers dipped beneath her pants, her foot leaping out to make contact with the rapist's jewels, sending him tumbling to the ground as she was dropped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "I got a sadistic lil slut today, oh ho ho." He let out a groan. "Your kind is always the most fun to break." Hinata rose slowly, her bangs obscuring her eyes as she clenched her fists, the knuckles turning a chalky pastel. "How about you? Stop talking." With blood streaming from his now broken nose, Hinata screamed and swung her fists out to strike his face. Despite this, she continued to attack, striking wherever she could before gaining a small gap between them and the man massaging his now bruised body. "I'm going to find your teammates, cut off their adorable heads, and hang them over my doorframe as soon as I finish taking care of you, you little whore. Then, I'm going to..." He didn't get very far before Hinata activated her Byakugan seamlessly and slammed her Juken palm into the man's chest. The impact caused the man's eyes to widen, and he wobbled a little before collapsing to the ground with blood dripping from his clenched teeth. It seemed to eat away at her hands, like some intoxicating acid, and she shook them, crying out as she crawled away from the dead form of the Rain.Nin, who even in death seemed to mock and terrify the young Hyuga. Hinata breathed heavily as she glared at her rapist before her actions caught up with her. When Naruto arrived, he saw Hinata curled into a ball, pressing her body against the tree behind her, vainly trying to distance herself from her first kill. He ran to her side, dropping the Earth's scroll they had been rewarded with, and quickly wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him while rocking her and whispering words into her ears that were mostly ignored except for the occasional, "I'm here now," and "I'm sorry." Even Sasuke appeared to understand the situation, as he leaned against a tree and crossed his arms. The three remained in this position for perhaps an hour before Sasuke took the initiative and left for a few minutes before coming back with the two Rain.Nin that were left, who took a moment to rush to their teammates' side. Following a brief argument between Sasuke and the two Rain.Nin picked up the body and stalked off, but not before promising to exact revenge on their teammate. 3 days left. 2 days had passed and Hinata still hadn't spoken to her two friends, while Sasuke was completely indifferent to his female teammate, even though she had taken care of him during his trauma in Wave, and Naruto was beginning to worry about the girl despite his crush. As was customary, Naruto would wake up to find Hinata whimpering and turning fitfully, and he would pull his sleeping bag next to her, pulling her over to rest her head on his shoulder as the two drifted back to sleep peacefully, but not tonight, because someone had other plans. The three had fallen asleep that night, with Hinata turning fitfully as she did every night, until Naruto saved her, his presence at her side fighting the nightmares away. He felt an evil chakra rapidly approaching the small camp the team had set up for the night, and as Naruto got up to take a pee break, his chakra sensors went off, blaring like a klaxon horn. His drowsiness kept him occupied for a few precious seconds, trying to identify the signature before his eyes widened, his mind's eyes conjuring up the eerie grass.nin from days ago. "Kuso," Naruto muttered to himself as he hurried back to the camp to wake his teammates. "I'll just have to hope we can get out or make it to the tower in time. We can't hope to fight this guy." Naruto stormed into the camp, hissing through gritted teeth. Awaken, Hinata and Sasuke. The two other members of Team 7 complained as they sat up, Sasuke glaring at Naruto, and Hinata instantly scrambling to her feet at Naruto's terrified expression. Naruto shouted out, disregarding caution because it appeared that the chakra signature already knew where they were. "What is it, Dobi? Were you frightened by a shadow?" As Hinata followed his lead, Naruto started packing and gathering items in response to Sasuke's scathing question. "I felt a strong chakra signature coming directly at us, Sasuke, if you must know. We must leave now." Naruto gave the order, and Sasuke sighed as he sat up slowly and gathered his belongings, making fun of Naruto's warning with his slow work. When the fire had burned down to little more than embers and the three of them had finished packing up their tents, they jumped into the tree and made their way to safety in the middle of the forest. Naruto sensed the signature approaching rapidly, not even stopping at their camp for more than 10 seconds before continuing the pursuit. Even though the team consisted of 2 heirs, 2 experienced shinobi, and Naruto, who essentially trained in his sleep. As Sasuke and Hinata stopped a few branches away, the blonde sighed and abruptly stopped, turning to their teammate as he pushed them on. Hinata looked between the 2 men who were staring at each other, then tensed her legs and leapt back to Naruto, grabbing his wrist and pulling on him, but the blonde resisted and wouldn't be moved. Sasuke moaned, crossing his arms, "Come on, Dobi, stop being so dramatic. No matter who owns it, we are rapidly catching up to the signature." In spite of his sometimes carefree demeanor, Hinata could tell that Naruto had a quick mind, and he slid into the leadership role with such ease that she was momentarily taken aback. "I'll stay here and stall them for as long as I can, while you and Hinata get to the tower, and bring reinforcements," Naruto ordered, and Hinata looked at him almost in awe. "Well, I don't think a genin, or even 3, needs a Junin's assistance. We will fight them off if we are unable to outrun them." With his hand moving to the pouch on his hip, Sasuke remarked, "After all, I'm a Uchiha, and I won't lose to any genin, no matter how strong they are. No, except for the Hokage, I've never felt a chakra signature this big. Neither Zabuza nor Kakashi made me feel this uneasy." Naruto left the statement open. Ended, saying, "I don't think we could stop this guy even if we were Chunin or Junin, but maybe if you can get some Anbu or the Hokage. You just stated that even if all 3 of us were Junin, we couldn't win, but you're going to stop this guy? Do you really believe that one genin will make a difference?" Naruto gave him a look that made Sasuke stop talking instantly, which is not often the case. "I only said that I would slow him down, not that I would stop him. If we divide up and each of us takes a scroll, he won't know which one to pursue because he won't know which of us has it. Therefore, you take the 2 scrolls and run like you've never run before, running as if the hounds of hell were on you because, if you don't get away, they might be." Sasuke had to turn away for a moment when he saw his brother and Naruto's soft smile as he said, "This is my good. Bye." Beside him, Hinata muttered, "Naruto," and Naruto's resolve seemed unfazed by her first words since the accident. Before Hinata fell forwards and was caught by a Naruto clone, Naruto said, "I'm sorry, Hinata. I won't let you get hurt again for a demon," he said. "Sasuke, take Hinata with you. My clone can't fight because he doesn't have any more chakra than is necessary to keep him alive, but he will carry Hinata so you won't be slowed down." Naruto turned back to face the approaching threat, his hands slowly joining together as he formed a single seal, his eyes closing as he calmed his roiling chakra, and the shadow clone nodding to Naruto as it followed. Hinata's limp body clutched to his body bridal style. Sasuke remained silent as he leapt away. He sent out a mental tendril to his inmate, the tendril floating idly in front of the demon fox, because he could not afford to fight recklessly in this fight, and it was definitely reckless to fight a higher level opponent without fear. As he opened his eyes and saw his mental cage, Naruto muttered to himself, "I had hoped that I wouldn't need to use this technique ever, although I knew it would be needed eventually, but all the same." The night's sounds and animals vanished. "Hi there, Fox," the blonde said, his face devoid of emotion, his soul appearing almost at peace with his decision. "I assume you know what's going to happen here, and what I've come to say." "Yes, and I have to admit that I'm shocked that you gave in so easily," Kyuubi asked mockingly, "but I also have to ask, do you think you can handle it? You haven't had much success with weathering the hatred." Kyuubi was deeply let down when Naruto gave a gloomy laugh. "I will embrace insanity in order to defend my beloved people. You see, Kyuubi, if I'm only perceived as a demon, what good is my sanity?" As a single tail slithered out of the cage and gradually wound around Naruto, the fox mimicked his dark chuckle. Meanwhile, Naruto was sitting on a branch outside, meditating. "Look what I discovered tonight, Kekekeke." A small fox in the woodland. Before Naruto could respond, a huge snake emerged from the shadows, its jaws agape as the blonde was completely ingested. "You need to be more careful, little fox, or something may make a meal out of you," the voice said. The animals around it fell silent in terror as the snake's master grinned from its head and it leapt off, heading for his fugitive target, sticking its forked tongue out to taste the air and hissing loudly into the forest. Within seconds, the enormous snake was reduced to a charred husk as Naruto slowly walked out from it, his eyes closed as a fiery red chakra cloak surrounded him, gradually changing colors to a more vibrant blue. The snake gave a low rumble as it started to writhe around as soon as he left the clearing, and if it had been able, it probably would have cried out in pain, no, agony. Well, if I had been the untrained Dobi that everyone believes me to be, that most likely would have been my demise. But I'm not that untrained Dobi. No, I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, and I have a bit of a fiery temper, Naruto said as he completely emerged from the hole he had burned into the snake. 3 tails, each about the size of Naruto's head, were visible behind him, swishing wildly, with a white ball of fire on the tips. Naruto mumbled 2 words that would later become a battle cry that would inspire hope in his allies and complete fear in his enemies, and as the chakra cloak completely changed color, he smiled, revealing his long fangs that had somehow become serrated. He said, "Nitrous mode." It was so calm and straightforward that you might think it was a weak move, but in fact, it was because Naruto's fire had reached his core and burned away all of his emotions, including fear, apprehension, mercy, pity, desire, bloodlust, and even rage, exposing him as a nihilistic shinobi. Naruto slowly turned in the direction his target had gone, took a slow step forward, and then vanished, leaving behind only the scorched earth he left behind after each step forward. 2 days, 23 hours left. Orochimaru grinned like a snake when he saw his target, Sasuke Uchiha, who was leaping through the trees in a desperate attempt to get away from the Sannin that was pursuing him. The Uchiha probably didn't even realize that he was going to be attacked because the snake appeared to emerge from a tree right in front of him, licking the air with his tongue. Naruto's clone paused next to him before jumping aside to avoid the battle, which Orochimaru was relieved to do for the time being because he could see his target. Sasuke did everything he could to leave a lasting impression of the Sannin, even melting the grass. Nin's face off, but at last the snake appeared to grow tired of the battle, and his neck abruptly grew longer as his fangs sank easily into Sasuke's neck. The Sannin then pushed some of his chakra into the wound, leaving a small black mark on the last Uchiha's neck. Unable to stop the Sannin, Sasuke moaned and grabbed his neck as he crumpled down, turning to face Hinata, who was twitching in his arms, and Naruto's clone. "Well, it looks like I'm lucky today because I got both a Hyuga and a Uchiha." It was with great disappointment that he pulled his head back to his body as a glowing blue boy got between him and his other target. "I can think of all the fun we're going to have together," Orochimaru said as his neck extended once more to leave his mark on Hinata, only to have a claw suddenly burst from the tree, heading straight for Orochimaru's head if he continued on his projected path. "Kiki, it looks like you have some tricks up your sleeve as well. I thought you would stay down, little fox." Orochimaru hissed, "Oh well, it is of little consequence. I will beat you quickly and finish up here." Naruto could feel the slight urge to beat the smug smile on his face, but the intense fire within swiftly put out the feeling. The snake moved swiftly past Naruto, but Orochimaru's eyes widened as he noticed that the blonde was outpacing him despite Naruto appearing to follow him. Orochimaru glanced around and saw a single leaf fall, very slowly, and realized how foolish it was to abandon the boy. Although the Sannin's eyes were trained for fast-paced combat, his body simply couldn't respond quickly enough with his current power levels, much like Sasuke's eyes could track Rock Lee's attacks. In a matter of seconds, Naruto was in front of Orochimaru, his clawed hand slowly sweeping across his face as the snake Sannin was able to stop himself in time to prevent the claws from cleaving his face into ribbons, but the snake could feel his skin starting to blister from the intense heat Naruto was emitting. His face remained the same emotionless mask for the entire 3 seconds, but that didn't mean he was prepared when Naruto's other hand came right at him, the claw grabbing his face as he was slammed into the tree, then being pulled out and chokingly slammed into the ground below, Naruto's arm extending into a pure chakra limb. The blonde left his arm embedded in the ground as he looked around for his target before his sensors went off, and he grabbed onto something beneath the earth, pulling up a massive root just below the surface. Naruto pressed his attack, his fist coming together to form a point as he leapt down, thrusting straight into Orochimaru's chest cavity, only for the Sannin to be transformed into mud. Though the wood was covered in moist dirt, his own fiery nature caused it to burst into flames, the fire licking hungrily at the tree attached to the root, the same tree Orochimaru had attempted to hide inside as the snake emerged, and Naruto rocketed at him, barely able to contort his body to avoid it, his sword appearing in his hand to cut into Naruto, only for the foxfire Naruto's tail to shoot out and sink into another tree, drawing Naruto to the tree like a grappling hook. Ordinarily, Naruto would have smiled at Orochimaru's frustrated expression, but this Naruto was all business, though as he taunted the snake, his dominant personality seemed to show a little. You can't defeat me in your current condition. Your chakra levels, however, will notify the village of your presence and direct the Hokage to you in order to at least match me. However, if you really think about it, since my chakra is the Kyuubi's chakra rather than yours, my own chakra levels are accomplishing the same thing, if not accelerating their mobilization. In any case, Naruto threatened to leave him smoldering if he didn't increase the heat. He grabbed 2 pieces of wood, pulled them out, and crushed them into splinters while his claws dug into the tree he was affixed to. He then leapt through the air, slinging the splinters at Orochimaru, who managed to avoid the raining wood with ease, though one came a bit too close and left a shallow cut, giving him the impression that a hot iron had been pressed against him. He only needed to make sure that wherever the splinters touched the ground, a tiny flame appeared and the wood vaporized. Kiki, the little fox, believes he can defeat the snake simply because he is the king of the jungle. Okay, this fight can go to the little fox. Once again, the snake will return to his hole, wait, and then, when the little fox is least expecting it, strike and strangle him to death. Orochimaru's rage at Naruto's expressionless face, which made him look too much like Itachi to Sannin, was evident in his voice. After saying his piece, Orochimaru disappeared into a tree, taking his chakra with him. Before his body pitched forwards and the fire vanished without a trace of smoke, Naruto blinked twice, glancing at the spot where the snake had left. As he fell to the branch below, his body was covered in third-degree burns. There are 24 hours left. Maybe if she were stronger, she could have helped protect her teammates, and maybe Naruto wouldn't have had to knock her out. Hinata Hyuga scowled as she pressed a wet cloth to Naruto's head, a great fever seizing his body. Next to him, Sasuke lay, an equally powerful fever burning throughout his body, his cells rebelling against the cursed seal on his neck. Hinata swore under her breath, a true testament to how bad things were to her right now, at her own weakness. It had been about 2 days since she had woken up to find Naruto and Sasuke unconscious with burning fevers, and when she had seen Naruto there, covered head to toe in those terrible burns, she had nearly fainted again, but she knew that Naruto was relying on her, so she kept her wits about her, hiding the 2 boys as she assumed the role of caring for them. However, that was neither here nor there, as Hinata left to fetch water from a nearby stream, her 2 male teammates hiding inside a hollowed-out tree trunk. Am I weak? Naruto-kun. If you didn't think I would obstruct your path, why else would you knock me out? As she filled the collapsible bucket with river water and carried it back, Hinata muttered to herself, a little heaving under the weight of the bucket. As she approached, she heard voices but dismissed them as a passing team. However, she dropped her bucket, splashing water on her feet as she ran towards the tree, when she rounded a tree root and noticed the 3 Nin arguing in front of the tree where her team was hiding. Hinata managed to slip around the edge of the clearing and slunk into the trunk to check on her 2 patients. Naruto was moaning in his sleep, his hands clenching and unclenching. Whatever dream he was having, it was rapidly becoming a nightmare, and Sasuke was the same as before. Knowing that her supply pouch was filled with kunai and shuriken, Hinata decided she would have to hold off the 3 Nin alone. Although she was skeptical of her chances of winning or even making a difference against 3 opponents of unknown skill, Hinata had a duty to defend her special Naruto-kun. Look, there's the pitiful loser. I think we should have a little fun with her before we finish off the Uchiha. One said, pointing at Hinata, who winced slightly at the insult and pointed out that the person pointing had a hole in the palm of his hand. He went on, but all he could do was shoot a shuriken in the air thanks to Hinata's extraordinary aim. The veins around her eyes widened as she used her clan's dojutsu to activate her Byakugan during the brief pause. You little freak, grr. Why are those eyes so ugly? Oh, is the little freak baby going to cry? The lone female among them said, and Hinata turned away, shielding her eyes as she recalled being teased for having pale eyes in elementary school. As she held them in the air, the girl's hands drifted down to her own pouch, revealing multiple senbon between her fingers. Hinata shouted back, "Shish. Shut up you," and tried to think of a clever insult to throw at the girl, but she couldn't think of anything very original because insulting wasn't in her nature. Shut you up you sound SL. Slut. Even though the name was simple, Hinata's opponent seemed infuriated by it and threw the senbon, which Hinata was able to block with her juken palms. The brunette's eyes widened as she quickly bowed backwards at the waist, dodging the senbon attack, but letting the girl get behind her as she grabbed at Hinata's hair. Hinata charged the girl, attempting to engage her in a taijutsu battle, a stupid idea when facing a Hyuga, but the girl managed to dodge her strikes for a few seconds before launching her senbon point. Blank at Hinata. In an attempt to stand out from the other girls and attract Naruto's attention, Hinata wore her hair short. However, it was too short for him to grasp as she stepped back and assumed the 8 trigrams stance as her opponent snarled in rage. "Stop playing tricks on Kin and kill her." The third one, who appeared to be the team leader and had multiple bandages covering his face, said, "We have more important things to deal with than playing with a little girl." Kin snarled a curse at him. "Stop talking, Dosu. I'm attempting to kill her. You worthless mother, why don't you come over here and assist me?" Kin growled back, and Dosu gave her a disinterested look before extending his arm to Hinata. The blue net barely moved, but her Byakugan made it possible for her to see the chakra. Infused sound waves coming her way as she dove sideways, the attack escaping unharmed, but as she turned to confront her assailant, Kin was able to get close enough to punch Hinata in the face, knocking her to the ground, and Kin went up to the Hyuga, pressing a few senbon against her neck to hold her in place. "Freak, you can't flee right now," Kin hissed at her, but before anyone could realize what was happening, the boy who had not yet been given a name raised his arms and sent chakra infused airwaves to the female pair. The boy smirked and an explosion of dirt was sent into the air, hiding both girls. "Zaku, you fool, you allowed her to escape after I had her," as Kin yelled. "I'm going to shove these senbon straight up your," followed by a shrill exclamation of 8 trigrams. 32 palms. She was trucked by the attack, hurled out of the dust and dirt cloud into a crumpled heap on the ground, and silenced. "Even though I'm weak, useless, a freak, and constantly stutter, I won't allow you to harm Naruto-kun. Because, you see, I really value him." The cloud dissipated as Hinata yelled, her Byakugan adding to her intimidating appearance as she glared at the Auto.Nin with a determined expression. "Would you pay attention to her? I think I'm getting more pathetic with all that mindless drivel she's saying," Zaku taunted, raising his arms in preparation for a second attack. He finished as he fired off a second shot, which Hinata rolled to the side to avoid, but Dosu caught her off guard despite her Byakugan, his arm already in motion. But the trio wasn't finished as Kin picked herself up and threw several senbon into Hinata's legs, bringing her to her knees, and then Zaku came forward, his kick catching her under her chin as she fell backwards, laying on her back as Zaku stood over her, his palms facing each other as he fired an attack from both sides, the air compressing. Hinata raised her arms in defense, knowing that it would not do much to stop the sound-based attack as it struck her, causing chaos throughout her body as she felt her lunch rising. "I've been wanting to try this attack for a while. Freak, I suppose this is my lucky day." He sobbed as Hinata noticed the chakra accumulating between his palms. He tensed his arms to launch the attack at the helpless girl, but he was sent reeling back from the surprise attack when a blue-sandaled foot struck him squarely in the face. "I believe she said, to go away." Naruto hissed, and despite his damaged appearance, he managed to put enough Ki into the order to cause the Auto.Nin to take a step back. Hinata looked up slowly to see Naruto breathing heavily, his jacket completely shed, but his skin had returned to its normal shade. "Like we'd pay attention to someone who is a failure like you." In an attempt to rally his teammates, who didn't seem to support the idea, Zaku yelled, "Fine, you wimps. I'll beat them myself then." He then raised his arms in attack, launching a double decapitating airwave at Hinata and Naruto. Perhaps a demonstration would be necessary. Naruto would have been relieved when a black flash appeared in front of them, backhanding the attack away like a straggling fly, except that A, it was Sasuke, and B, the left side of his face and body appeared to be covered in black markings that suspiciously resembled flames. Naruto growled at the Uchiha after Sasuke said, arrogantly, "HN, figures you 2 losers couldn't beat 3 weaklings without my help." The Uchiha ignored the blonde and charged Zaku, hitting him with a snap kick and catching his arms before the boy could fly away, but the opposing forces still put strain on Zaku's arms. "You stupid Uchiha jerk, let me go so I can murder you, ever the mediator," Zaku yelled. Sasuke didn't appear prepared to follow any instructions from Zaku, but the raven-haired boy flipped over Zaku, putting his foot directly on the back of Zaku's head and pushing it into the dirt while using the leverage to pull harder on Zaku's arms. "Hey, hold on a minute." Pop! Zaku's arms dropped limp to the floor as Sasuke let go of them, his task completed, and he started to attack Kin, but Naruto intervened. "I said wait, you deaf teme." When Sasuke attempted to get past him to continue his attack, Naruto snarled at him and grabbed the Uchiha. As he grabbed Zaku's leg and threw him at his teammates, Naruto yelled behind him, "I may not like you pieces of crap, but unless you want worse than your friend got, I suggest you get lost." Kin and Dosu appeared to be shaken out of their shock. "Uchiha, I'll make you pay." Dosu took out their scroll and dropped it as payment as they made a quick retreat, ignoring Zaku's threat. Although the blonde tensed up his body to react in time, Sasuke's stance seemed to encourage him to say, "Move, Uzumaki, or I'll beat you down too." "Fine, be that way." Sasuke charged the blonde, throwing a jab that Naruto blocked by weaving to the side, his knee rising to knock Sasuke's air out, only to be blocked in turn by Sasuke's knee. Though Naruto dropped into a defensive stance, ready as Sasuke came at him, the blonde used the knee as leverage to leap back from Sasuke, shooting several tiny flames at the ground in front of Sasuke to stop him from pursuing. The Uchiha rotated his ankle, using his free foot to send a second kick straight at Naruto's face. Only Naruto's instincts prevented him from being hammered by Sasuke, who smirked as he pushed Naruto to the ground. The blonde was unable to raise his arms in time to block and was sent tumbling back from the powerful blow. Sasuke continued to follow the blonde as he rose, delivering several blows into Naruto's blind spots. "Naruto, where has all of your strength gone?" With his arms extended as though to challenge anyone to approach him, Sasuke yelled, and Naruto stood slowly, cleaning a rivulet of blood from his broken lip. With a familiar smirk, Naruto remarked, "You seem to have grown stronger thanks to that Hiki Orochi Pito gave you, but you seem to forget Teme." Sasuke was taken by surprise when a shadow clone grabbed him and threw the Uchiha across the clearing using a traditional judo throw. Sasuke righted himself in midair, his hands flying through hand seals as he used the signature Uchiha Jutsu. Grand Fireball Jutsu in fire style. Though Naruto had been using fire for years and wouldn't be taken by surprise by such a basic fire jutsu, Sasuke thought as he blew out a fireball larger than any before, the extra chakra provided by the seal giving extra fuel to the jutsu. Grand Fireball Jutsu in fire style. The twin fireballs collided, resulting in a huge explosion, but neither opponent let it stop them from coming at each other again, this time using kunai that sent sparks into the air as they attempted to overpower the other. Naruto imitated Sasuke, his own fireball matching Sasuke's as they did so. "Stop." Hinata's voice was lost in the clashing metal as she said it, a little louder but still overpowered by the taunts being hurled like shuriken. She felt her eyes heating up as she looked between her two fighting teammates, and it wasn't from the fiery attacks being exchanged. "Cease. Quit. Please stop." The two men halted in front of each other as Hinata yelled, startling them with her high voice. "Hinata. Chan?" Beside him, Sasuke had frozen, clutching his head tightly as he tried to will the seal back under his control. Naruto seemed to take advantage of the situation with a brief prayer before striking Sasuke across the jaw, sending the boy to the ground in blissful unconsciousness. "I'm confused by her distressed appearance," Naruto muttered to himself. As he lifted Sasuke up and threw him over his shoulder like a bag of bricks, Naruto exclaimed, "Welp, now that that's taken care of." Hinata appeared to swallow in terror, but her fear vanished when she saw Naruto's beaming face. "So, am I missing anything worthwhile?" With his trademark smile, as though he weren't toting his teammate's lifeless body over his shoulder, Naruto posed the question. Despite Hinata's best efforts, she couldn't help but giggle. 16 hours left. "So Sasuke got all revenge after I came in to save the day?" Hinata nodded in agreement with Naruto's succinct explanation. "Yeah, but you could probably elaborate on what transpired when you two were so severely injured and I was unconscious." Naruto began to respond to Hinata's question when he became aware of something. Naruto snarled as the surroundings appeared to shimmer before turning into a smirking pinkette, with her two teammates on either side of her. "Sakura, as much as your skills amaze me, I'm not in the mood right now." Though she didn't anticipate Naruto shrugging his shoulders, Sakura pointed out the unconscious Sasuke and said, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to hand over your heaven scroll, Naruto." "Whatever became of Sasuke-kun?" Sakura inquired, and although the girl was unaware of it, Naruto saw that Kiba appeared to wince behind her. "Oh, you know, it was really traumatizing, and Sasuke couldn't take all the girls flinging themselves at him. However, I don't feel like fighting right now, and Hinata doesn't have the strength to harm her classmates for no other reason, so come on," Naruto said, grabbing the extra heaven scroll with his free arm and throwing it to Sakura, who caught it. "You're giving up your heaven scroll in an instant. Dobi, you are aware that you must pass this?" Akamaru yipped out of his jacket as Kiba said that. "Me and Sasuke had to take a break for a few days, and Hinata-chan here managed to gather quite the collection from people who tried to mess with us," Naruto said, seemingly grinning as he unzipped his orange jacket with his free hand, sending many earth and heaven scrolls to the ground. "In relation to that, have you seen Shikamaru or anyone else you would like assistance from?" Sakura and Kiba's eyes were still sized from the stack of scrolls when Naruto said this. Shino's eyebrow went up 1/4 of an inch, showing as much surprise as the stony-faced Aburame ever seemed to display. Sakura stammered, then looked from the pile to the blushing Hyuga, saying, no one that So Hinata huh? Sakura remarked, I guess she can be pretty protective of you Naruto. Naruto grinned and glanced at Hinata to deny the remark, but the girl was getting red enough to pass for a lobster. Does Hinata have a fever? I wonder? I hope I didn't spread the infection to Kami? Sakura's team had already disappeared, making their way toward the tower just ahead when Naruto snapped out of his frantic thoughts. 12 hours left. You want the honor, Hinata, because you helped us pass this section of the test. Naruto remarked, I doubt we could have done it without you. The girl looked anxiously at the ground before nodding slightly and taking out 2 scrolls. One for heaven and one for earth. From her torn jacket. As she threw them out, a plume of smoke emerged from the intersection of the scrolls. Well guys, I got worried there for a bit, but I'm proud to say, congratulations, you've passed the second part of the Chunin exams. The third Hokage leaned on the metal fence that separated the ground floor from the platform above and said, Now then, if we are all here, I'll go ahead and begin the third part of the Chunin exams by telling you the reason behind them. What is the purpose of the Chunin exams? However, Kankuro stated, bewildered, as he gazed at the Hokage seated above and the Junin senseis of the remaining teams standing next to him. But I thought they were just for a genin to rise in rank. As a few genin paused to consider what he had said, Sarutobi laughed lightly and said, Yes, that is one reason to the less informed, but to those that have witnessed the alternative, the Chunin exams serve a different purpose. The third paused to see if any of the gathered genin could get it right. During wartime, genin and chunin are promoted by their acts on the battlefield, or in some cases, off the battlefield, said the only person who actually voiced the true motivation behind the exams. Genin can demonstrate their skills and the power of their village more safely through the Chunin exams without having to worry about mass murder. As he often did when responding to questions, Naruto stated, the Junin exams serve much the same purpose, while being vastly different. Yes, Sarutobi grinned, that is almost exactly what I was going to say, excluding the part about the Junin exams because they have nothing to do with today. However, aside from that, you're right, Naruto. The third said, and Naruto grinned slightly while wearing his shinobi mask. Nevertheless, when one's kage complimented them, one always showed gratitude. Sarutobi started to say, now then. But a man stepped forward and interrupted. Lord Hokage, may I explain the next part? With a sword strapped to his back that bobbed as he bowed to his leader, the man asked. Okay then, unfortunately, due to the large number of genin that have managed to get through the second part, preliminaries must be held to weed out the weaker half of you. The man turned back to the gathered genin, and Sarutobi merely nodded in assent. However, the man was met with a shout of anger and disbelieving looks. Hey, we put a lot of effort into navigating that forest, and now you simply enter and warn us that we might still be eliminated. Man, what's the big deal? Sakura sighed next to Kiba as he yelled, and then she slammed her fist into his head to stop the Inuzuka from rage. Nobles and daimyos, along with the kage of every finals participant, attend the public third part of the Chunin exams. Only a small number of shinobi and kunoichi are permitted to compete in the finals due to the time constraints for each. The man pointed to the enormous board on the wall behind him and said, to make the finals more manageable, about half of you will have to go. After going through the remaining competitors, the board will choose 2 to compete down here for the privilege of making it to the finals. So, before we get started, are there any of you who can't go on? Dropping out now will not disqualify your teammates. From this point onwards, you are all on your own to compete. When no one responded, he added, this time, one hand shot up as everyone turned to see who was dropping out. Kabuto Yuhi raised his hand and grinned shamefully, saying, I'm sorry, guys, but the last part really got to me. He was led away by 2 unremarkable shinobi, and his only explanation was, I wouldn't be able to fight properly anyway. The man turned back to the board, which was rapidly cycling through names, and said, okay then, if there are no others, we will move on. Both people smirked as the board stopped on 2. Yaoi Akkad vs Sasuke Uchiha. Now, as everyone else goes to the walkway above to observe, will the 2 chosen please stay down here? The Junin remarked as everyone did as he said, moving to the walkway above where they divided into separate groups. The Sand siblings left to watch from a different location, while the Leaf.Nin divided into their teams but stayed close to each other. The Junin looked at the 2 fighters to make sure they were paying attention. Now then, before we begin, I'll go over the rules, he said. You may use any and all weapons, jutsus, etc. at your disposal, but if I deign the match over, both of you are to stop fighting immediately. I will intervene, along with the other Junin, and you will be eliminated if you keep trying to fight. I forfeit. Is that correct? Simply raise your hand if you wish to forfeit at any time. He merely gave two identical nods in response to his question. Glancing between the two, Hayate said, "All right, my name is Gecko Hayate, and I will be the referee for the matches." He then jumped back and yelled, "Hajime." Yoroi and Sasuke smirked at one another as they both threw kunai at one another, causing the weapons to collide in midair with a loud clang. Anyone could see that they were only prodding at their opponent's defenses, not really putting any force behind the attack, as this seemed to signal the two to charge at each other, attacking with punches and kicks that both of them easily blocked. The boy responded with a straight kick that Yoroi had to block with only one arm, sending him skidding back, and Yoroi finally swung a quick jab that Sasuke blocked, knocking the boy's arm aside. As he activated his Sharingan, the boy frowned and began a brief series of hand seals that Sasuke attempted to mimic. However, the curse seal reacted to the chakra used in the dojutsu, causing Sasuke to freeze as a searing pain shot through his body. Sasuke shook his extremity to break free, but Yoroi had a firm hold on him as he grimaced in agony. Yoroi took advantage of his brief opening to tackle Sasuke to the ground and place his glowing blue hand on the last Uchiha's head. As he sliced at Yoroi, Sasuke finally grabbed a kunai from his pouch on his hip, fending him off as the boy jumped back to avoid the metal knife. Yoroi smiled as Sasuke held his head as he slowly climbed to his feet. As his trademark frown appeared on his face, Sasuke trailed off, "Yo. You," which only served to reassure Yoroi that his plan had been exposed. "You saw, huh?" Yoroi smugly said, "That's right. I have the special power to absorb another being chakra through touch, so you better think of something or I'm going to drain you dry." Sasuke then threw his kunai at the boy's face, causing him to sidestep without realizing it was a trap when he turned to face Sasuke. As Yoroi was lifted into the air, he thought, "Where did he?" But his thoughts were interrupted when Sasuke appeared beneath his guard, kicking straight up before flipping over and landing on all fours as he launched himself upward after his target. That action. Knowing the move from the one he used on Sasuke in their brief spar prior to the first section of the exams, Lee said. He copied it from a casual glance he once caught. How good is the Sharingan of this boy? Even though Kakashi could still hear him, Lee's sensei muttered something next to his mini.me. Since the Sharingan is Uchiha's dojutsu, what can you expect from someone who possesses it? Reflexively reaching up to touch his own Sharingan eye concealed behind his headband, Kakashi explained, though it still sounded more like a question than a response. As he emerged beneath the floating Yoroi, Sasuke said, "Thanks for letting me copy this jutsu, Rock Lee. It will serve me well in killing my brother. I copied that move from someone who fought me, but from now on, this is all me." Sasuke kicked outwards, smugly blocking the kick, but what he didn't anticipate was that Sasuke would kick off of him and use the momentum to slam a kick into his opposite side as he was sent back towards the ground. Sasuke flipped end over end after Yoroi, catching up to him just before he hit the ground, and began, Lion's Barrage. As he finished, he delivered a second kick to Yoroi's chest, causing blood to flow from his mouth. Sasuke flipped off, smirking as he landed safely on his feet. Then he faltered as a hand suddenly landed on his neck, covering his red, glowing curse seal. Hayate sounded almost sad that the Uchiha had won. Winner, Sasuke Uchiha. A second later, Sasuke began to collapse as Kakashi seemed to catch him, but Shushining moved away to start sealing the curse seal. Joy, I wonder how long it will be before we hear the end of that. The Teme made it to the finals. Naruto complained, and Hinata giggled softly next to him at his pouting face. However, it seemed that Ino didn't think he was cute, because she growled and began to strike Naruto over the head with a clenched fist. Stop talking, orphan. Nobody is interested in what you think anyhow. Her initial daydream was interrupted when Naruto started gagging next to her. Hinata's giggling became louder as she raised a hand to block it out. You're only jealous because you know you can't even hope to make it to the finals with Sasuke-kun. Naruto said, "Hey, does anyone else smell something rancid, almost like a, oh, hello pig." His greeting was so sincere that Hinata's attempts to contain her laughter were overpowered by it. Kiba was guffawing at Ino's stunned expression, or perhaps he knew someone was going to be smashed into the concrete. Sakura crossed her arms in a way that challenged anyone to argue with her, saying, "Shut up, Naruto. Dobi, it's not like you have many redeeming qualities either." "Thank you very much, but what do you mean? I'm full of positive traits," Sakura was yelled at by Ino. The platinum blonde screeched, waving her hand around as she glared daggers at Naruto, who didn't seem to notice, and said, "Being easy isn't a good quality." Naruto mumbled loud enough that the immediate company heard him as Ino attempted to beat him over the head, which probably would have worked had the blonde not moved to avoid Sakura's own fist. Instead, Sakura punched Ino across the face, and Ino punched a solid metal pole. Naruto pointed to the board that had completed choosing the next fighter pair and said, "You two want to team up on me? Fine. How about you work your issues out by fighting each other?" Sakura Haruno versus Ino Yamanaka. After exchanging anxious looks, the two girls made their way to the ground floor, while Naruto watched them with a menacing smirk. Kiba tried to give his teammate a high five, but the bug user ignored him. "Good job, Shino," Kiba yelled. "What happened, huh?" Why Kiba was congratulating Shino when he had done nothing perplexed Naruto. Shino quickly concluded his battle. After the first sentence, Kiba said, "That Zabu guy didn't even stand a chance against my buddy Shino, although I and Akamaru could have beaten him with moments." However, nobody was paying attention. "Oh, you fought already? Oh, dude, I wanted to watch so I could prepare for a future fight with you." Naruto said, "What am I talking about? You're an Aburame. You use bugs. What else would I need to know?" Shino turned to watch his female teammate fight with her friend, seemingly unoffended by the offensive tone of the statement. Hajime. As Sakura and Ino gazed at one another for a moment before each of them withdrew two shuriken and threw them, the metal weapons clashed in midair with a loud clang, Hayate remarked. Then, with the kunai in their hands, the two friends jumped at one another, attempting to gain the upper hand by pushing her opponent back. After a few minutes of crashing into one another, they both jumped back and threw the used kunai at one another, the weapons colliding again as they scowled at one another. "Please, Sakura. It's obvious that you don't take this seriously. I'll never understand what Sasuke sees in you, because how could anyone like someone with such a huge form?" Ino jumped back to avoid Sakura's angry axe kick, but this didn't prepare her because Sakura landed evenly instead of hitting the stone floor, using her momentum to launch herself at Ino as she reared back to intentionally punch her friend across the cheek again. Sakura's eyes widened just before the fist collided, though, and her open palm slapped Ino across the cheek instead of a fist, and the blonde staggered back, staring platter-eyed at Sakura, who was mirroring her eyes. "Have you just slapped me? You really don't want to fight me, huh?" Ino asked, Sakura searching for something else to look at instead of Ino's face like a kid trapped in a cookie jar. Everyone fell silent as Ino muttered, waiting for Sakura to respond. The pinkette nodded slowly, and Ino sighed as she relaxed and held out her hand to Sakura. The pinkette slowly took the hand after looking at it fearfully, and Ino said, "Fine, we won't fight anymore." Sakura grinned, but Ino's incredible upper body strength caused her to flip her shoulder in a judo throw, causing Sakura to hit the ground painfully and lose her breath. As the girl started to scratch at Sakura, Ino leapt on top of her and straddled her. "Just take it, forehead, and we won't have to fight ever again." As Sakura started to slam the pinkette's head into the stone floor, Ino yelled and grabbed her hair. "Sakura!" Kiba yelled. His knuckles whitened as he clutched the fence between the fighters and the onlookers. On a rare occasion, Naruto felt the same way as Kiba, witnessing the insane blonde ruthlessly attack her former best friend. "You pink-haired fucka, I'm going to make you so incredibly ugly that no guy would ever want to interact with you." Sakura sounds like a cheap whore's name, so what kind of name is it? Ino yelled as she threw Sakura to the side and then drew a kunai to deliver the final blow. "Stop the match." Hayate began to move forward, but a hand shot up, knocking Ino back and causing the kunai to clatter harmlessly to the side. "Oh no, I apologize, Asuma." As the neighboring Leaf.Nin turned to stare at her in confusion, Kurenai remarked, "I'm afraid Ino is about to find herself on the wrong side of Sakura." The girl was an expert user of genjutsu because she possessed and still possesses extraordinary chakra control. That's probably why she was initially assigned to my team. However, when Sakura was cornered by multiple men seeking amusement, my team's D rank turned rotten. Kurenai trailed off, leaving the statement incomplete. "I tried to get to her in time, but I was too late," but instead of finding her she was covered in the blood of the men, who had apparently gone insane and slit their own throats to try and escape whatever they saw in that alley. The group turned back to watch Sakura appear to scramble to her feet like a deranged zombie, a slasher. Grin slicing her face in half. Kurenai said, "While this isn't abnormal when a weak-willed subject is subjected to genjutsu, what was most terrifying was, well, watch." But as Sakura raised her face, as Kurenai had imagined, heavy streams of tears were streaming down her face in a waterfall. What was even more horrifying was that the tears were ink black. "But why do you despise me, Ino?" Sakura's voice had the quality of a child who has been sobbing for hours at a time. Before she seemed to bum rush Ino, Sakura appeared to move erratically, as if her joints were rusty, grabbing the blonde by the neck and pinning her to the ground while staring straight into Ino's eyes as the black ink tears started to fall. Ino attempted to close her eyes, but Sakura screamed and fumbled for a kunai to slit them open. "Ino, why won't you give me a look?" Sasuke believes that I'm attractive. Do you agree, Ino? Whatever effect Sakura's words had on Ino. The girl started to shake and the wailing cries reverberated throughout the room as the black tears spilled into her eyes. The platinum blonde was forced to bow on her knees as Sakura kicked her legs out from under her and flipped Ino over before anyone could realize what was happening. Bow down for the most beautiful princess in all the land of fire. Sakura let out a frantic cry and eventually found the kunai she was seeking. You have such stringy hair, Ino, Sakura said, yanking the girl back like a horse while keeping her foot firmly planted in her back to hold her down. Sakura interlaced her vice grip in Ino's platinum locks. It reminds me of slimy, odorous ramen noodles. Cutting your hair will make it grow out fuller, according to my mother's constant advice. Ino, do you want me to make you look beautiful? Sakura said, causing Ino to wriggle as she pressed the kunai's edge against her ponytail. Stop this, Sakura, please. Stop it. Stop her. I give up, Ino shouted, and after Ino gave up, Hayate moved to break up the fight, but Sakura appeared to grimace as she yanked the kunai back, slicing off most of Ino's hair before thrusting it into her mouth. Eat it. You squealing piglet, eat your awful hair. Before Kurenai intervened and drew Sakura away from Ino while the medics attended to the sobbing Yamanaka, Sakura screamed. As she looked around in bewilderment, Sakura appeared to come to, but then she noticed the trail of inky tears on the floor and the broken Ino, which triggered another round of hysterics, this time causing clear tears to fall from her eyes in a thick river. As Sakura sobbed, she felt herself suddenly pulled against a man's chest and grabbed at his clothing, smelling the distinct scent of dog. Her comforter turned out to be Kiba, who crooned in her ears. My intention was not to do that. Ino, please don't hate me. Am I a monster, Kiba? Do you find me attractive? Despite his roguish demeanor, Kiba smiled softly as he held the sobbing girl close while Sakura seemed to mumble in a continuous loop. As Sakura smiled and looked up into Kiba's eyes, Kiba said politely, Yes, I think you're beautiful, Sakura, more so than Ino could ever hope to be. Sakura cried until she finally passed out in peaceful unconsciousness, saying, Thanks, Kiba, I think you're beautiful too. Well, it should go without saying that Sakura Haruno won the match. The medics can take care of your student's health if her sensei wants them to, Hayate said, glancing over Sakura's eyes as he would an abused animal. Kurenai replied, No, what she needs right now is to be near people who won't judge her. Kurenai bent down to pick Sakura up, but Kiba picked her up and carried her up the stairs while their shared sensei led the way. When they got back, Kiba gently placed Sakura against the wall and carefully held Akamaru in her lap as the little puppy nuzzled against Sakura. Asuma began, Kurenai, but Kurenai's palm interrupted her, causing waves of silent rage to emanate from her. Asuma, don't defend her. You aren't that heartless, so I don't blame you. I know you wouldn't do this. That being said, Kurenai said, I doubt if I'll ever forgive Ino for forcing my student to endure that pain. Asuma sighed and lifted a cigarette to smoke, but it lit up instantly without the need for a lighter as Asuma glanced at it bewildered and then shrugged it off. They just listened to the names cycle through before stopping because nobody seemed to have anything important to say. Against Gaara no Suna, Rock Lee, even though everyone was on the edge of their seats wondering who would win, the match seemed to end in a matter of minutes. When Gaara finally emerged victorious, he cruelly attempted to crush Lee in his sand, but because of his injuries, he was only able to crush his arm and leg on one side. Nevertheless, the medics declared that Lee's shinobi career was over unless a miracle worker fixed his broken body. When all was said and done, nobody saw that Naruto's hands had actually sunk into the metal in anger, and that the metal had yielded to his clenching fists as the temperature slowly rose. His anger had been gradually increasing, going from a few tiny bubbles to nearly reaching a rolling boil, and as he dragged his eyes away from Lee's body being carried away, they saw the next two fighters. His hand then pulled the metal off, and the surrounding metal changed from charcoal black to cherry red just by his touch. Neji Hyuga versus Hinata Hyuga. How is he not affected by the heat? I can almost feel my skin blistering? Was the most prominent question of the Leaf.Nin, who looked at the cherry red pieces of metal that Naruto was holding and the molten metal that was dripping to the ground. As the girl turned to go, Naruto muttered, Hey, Hinata. She had a terrified expression on her face at the thought of fighting her cousin. As if to delay the inevitable, Hinata responded, Yeah, Naruto. Give him a butt kick. Naruto smiled, almost like a fox, as though he was thinking of something ironic to make fun of. Hinata nodded and did her best to smile at her crush. Oh, okay. But I want you to forfeit if it becomes too much for your safety, okay? I would much rather have you alive than lose. It vanished at the second part of Naruto's request, even though Hinata immediately responded to the contrary. Promise me you'll come out of that arena alive, please. Did he care more about her than her fighting prowess? Yeah, Naruto, I promise. Hinata muttered, her face briefly turning red before it vanished with her inner turmoil. Her face never revealed her inner thoughts as she descended the stairs. Even if you care more for me, I'll still stand beside you and fight, even if I have to pierce my heart to stand beside you, Naruto.kun. Lady Hinata, why do you try to fight so hard? I've already been proclaimed the winner of this match by fate. As Neji's arrogant demeanor reached Hinata, he said, no matter how hard you try, you will lose here today. Can I really defeat Neji.ni.san? How can I oppose him when he is a prodigy and I am not even the deserving heir? Though her inner turmoil was trying to take over, Hinata decided to fight for the time being. Stop talking. Neji.ni.san. If fate has already proclaimed you the victor, you have no reason to be afraid of me. As soon as she slipped into the taijutsu stance of their common clan, the Juken, Hinata spoke before she lost her composure. Neji looked at the blue net across from him with a mixture of surprise and disdain, the latter of which was almost imperceptible, and whatever he had expected her to say, her assured reply wasn't it. Before the match started, Neji gave Hinata one last jab. Just give up, Lady Hinata. These eyes have seen the truth of the world, and the future that awaits you, Lady Hinata, and all that awaits you is pain and loss. Neji growled and imitated her stance, causing the crowd to fall silently as they awaited the match. Neji smugly remarked, I can tell you don't want to fight me, so your strikes will not get through to me. However, this time, Naruto yelled back in place of Hinata. I think the woman told Neji to stop talking. Therefore, stop talking, Naruto yelled, and his fellow onlookers let out a soundless chorus of laughter. Well then if you're both ready. Hayate looked at each fighter, who gave a nod. Hajime, leaping back, both of them activated their clan's dojutsu with a single seal. The two Hyugas then started to circle each other, assessing each other and determining who would attack first, until the tension reached a breaking point and Neji leapt at Hinata, his palm outstretched to strike his cousin, who quickly bowed back, avoiding any damage from his attack. As soon as he sent another open palm attack directly at her lung, Hinata used her free left hand to deflect it, spinning her body around in the process. Then, before he could exploit her exposed back, she used her hands to handspring away to safety, twisting her body in mid-air to land with her front facing Neji once more. She immediately retaliated with 3 quick jabs with her fingers, which he swatted aside, leaving her right side open. Lady Hinata, no matter how hard you try, you can't stop it. Neji taunted, I will get you. It's only a matter of time until you run out of cute tricks. Hinata scowled a little, remembering his words, but she wasn't about to give up just yet because Naruto was always able to turn the fight around with his little tricks. Neji was about to taunt her again when she suddenly charged him rashly, her hands floating listlessly behind her as she ran, but he was caught off guard because her silence seemed to reassure him that he was approaching her. His eyes grew wide as he tried to predict which tenketsu or chakra point she would target this time. However, she left her arms unguarded, nearly slipping past his defenses. He smirked and aimed a jab at her heart, but Hinata fell to her knees and slid beneath him. Neji leapt to avoid getting caught up with her, but he realized his error too late when Hinata smirked, a rare sight, and looked him in the eyes before launching a quick series of jabs into his torso, blocking all of the tenketsu from being used. Her momentum carried him to her feet with ease, and she looked at Neji as he landed, gasping heavily from the sudden attack. His eyes, however, showed that she had deliberately avoided hurting any point close to his internal organs. This was her error, and Neji knew exactly how to teach her the difference between them. With his plan in mind, he glared arrogantly at Hinata, who appeared to shrink from his glare. He returned to the Juken stance, and a few seconds later, Hinata mimicked him. With a slight nod, both fighters charged at one another, intending to end the fight as it started, but then, as if in a flash, it stopped. Hinata was breathing heavily from the intense fight, but she could still see the stance Neji took when he landed, with his arms forming a curved downward slope and his knees bent slightly, just as she knew she needed to stop him. Neji leapt back, putting a little distance between the two Hyugas. Even though Neji should not have known any of the higher Juken techniques because he was a member of the branch family, she simply chalked up his smirk because he was about to use one of them. She was quickly corrected when she struck at him, but the branch family member turned slightly, changing her target to his heart. I knew you didn't have it in you to actually injure me, Lady Hinata, she said, stopping abruptly as she realized her error. Everything seemed to move slowly after Neji said, Fate has delivered me a victory today in your weakness, Hinata. You still avoided hitting my organs after that sneak attack, even though if you had, you could have ended the fight easily. 64 palms. 8 trigrams. Just 1 palm. With Hinata powerless to stop him, Neji yelled as he made a single blow to her front. 2 palms. 4 palms. 16 palms. There are 32 palms. 60. 4 palm trees. Neji roared as Hinata was flung backwards in a limp heap, her jacket torn in multiple places, and some of her exposed skin scraped against the rough stone floor. Neji turned to go, but he stopped when he heard multiple rough coughs coming from behind him. You're done, Hinata, just give up on being a shinobi. Neji.ni.san, you speak so casually, but I can see the truth with my own eyes. In actuality, your heart is screaming and attempting to resist your unavoidable fate. Hinata stood hesitantly, her hands returning to the Juken first stance as she attempted to demonstrate to Neji and to herself that one could alter one's destiny. I swear, I will help you fight that fate, and I'll never go back on my word, that is my nindo, my way of the ninja, she said slowly, stumbling forwards and barely preventing herself from falling as she coughed up some blood that stained the floor crimson. The brunette closed her eyes as she looked up at Naruto, who appeared to smile at her. I forfeit. Sad. You don't know what you're talking about. Neji sneered, lunging toward the female Hyuga with the intention of striking her heart, but a blonde blocked the blow as Naruto stared into his eyes, his gaze penetrating Neji's soul. I think you were told not to meddle in any of the matches, sir. The proctor said, come back to the viewing platform, or I'll have to eject you from any more matches, and your chance in the finals will be forfeited. However, Naruto turned against him as Hinata gasped behind him and her vision wavered. Stop talking. Don't give me instructions, don't you dare tell me not to help my most valuable person? Do you understand, or I'll show you why I earned my nickname. You can tell me to shut up, forfeit me, or eject me, and I won't care if you decide to permanently make me a genin. Everyone on the platform was taken aback by this Naruto, who had never appeared in the academy years, as he yelled, getting right in the proctor's face, his face a solid red with rage. He was so overcome with rage that he didn't realize he had just confessed to Hinata, had she not fainted before he began his tirade. At that moment, Hinata fell forward, but Naruto was beneath her as she fell on his back, hooking his arms beneath her legs and effortlessly lifting her as he handed her off to the medics. After she was gone, Naruto directed his anger at Neji, and the words he said further shocked his friends and the Junin who were watching. And you? I regret ever deciding to become a Konoha shinobi after what you did, intending to kill not only a family member but also another Konoha shinobi. However, if you wait, I will force you to pay for all of the insults, put-downs, and burdens you have placed on Hinata. Chan. I will force you to endure them. Naruto screamed, and before he knew it, he was standing in front of Neji, making the boy meet his eyes. You believe you have the ability to see fate? Well, look here. Your destiny is to be crushed by me. TME, don't you see it? As flames started to appear all around Naruto, it appeared as though the temperature was either rapidly dropping or rising from the observer's point of view. Naruto hissed. I can make it happen, so just wait until I get you, and then we'll see who's laughing. Tell me, Teme, what it's like to have your blood boil inside your veins until it's so hot that you're cooked from the inside out. As his entire body glowed like a human torch, Naruto screamed. Even from this distance, I can feel the chakra constantly rising and filling the space. From his position far above, Sarutobi thought, but I can't sense any of the Kyuubi's chakra in it. This is purely Naruto's rage taking form. He was about to intervene when he noticed the girl on Naruto's back start to writhe. The temperature vanished as if it had never been there, and Naruto just gave Neji a final glare before shushing back to his spot on the viewing platform, putting Hinata down gently and using a blanket he took out of his bag to support her head as he leaned her against the wall. Tenten appeared to look at him pityingly, as though he knew what fate awaited him too, but Neji's fear overcame his desire to speak and he remained silent, returning to his place. All right, then, should we go on? Gazing at the board above as it started to filter through names once more, Hayate posed the question rhetorically. On the walkway, Naruto's classmates were staring at the happy blonde with fear in their eyes. Their main question was, is this really the same Naruto who was held back twice? However, some of the Junin in attendance were curious about the part of Naruto's speech that asked, how did I earn my moniker? Hi, Naruto. When you said that you regret being a Konoha shinobi, did you mean it? In case Naruto decided to jump him as well, Kiba cautiously asked from next to his Junin sensei. Sigh. No, I just meant that I couldn't hold some of our traitors accountable for their departure if Konoha shinobi were all like that. I hate hypocrites and perverts, but you're neither of those, are you, Kiba? Naruto spoke in a sickly sweet voice. When Kiba shook his head violently, Naruto laughed and clung to the fence's edge, scaling it. Good, I'd hate to have to kill you, unlike some people. Naruto said, jumping to the ground below, leaving a bewildered Kiba in his wake. Where is that fool heading, and what did he mean by that? Kiba asked out loud as Kurenai laughed next to him and gestured toward the board. Kiba then turned pale, matching Akamaru's fur color. Kiba Inuzuka versus Naruto Uzumaki. What? That guy is not someone I want to fight, Kiba said, but he was hesitant to confront the blonde in battle even though he moved slowly down to face Naruto, who was grinning kindly as though he hadn't nearly turned the tower into a kiln. Don't worry, Kiba. Kurenai will definitely take over if things get too heated for you. Kiba spluttered before responding. Besides, imagine Sakura waking up to see you fighting so hard. Naruto teased. What about you and Hinata? How are you going to get even with her if I beat you? Kiba said, anticipating a similar reaction from Naruto, but the blonde merely grinned. Since you don't seem to be doing so well at teasing, was that meant to be the end of it? Akamaru responded by dropping to the ground next to Kiba and exposing his tiny fangs at Naruto, who smiled, after Naruto's smirk seemed to ignite something inside Kiba, causing him to growl. As the boy stood motionless, waiting for Kiba's first move, which came just before the match started, Hayate jumped back, not wanting to be caught between Naruto and his target, Hajime. When the Inuzuka launched a roundhouse punch, Naruto dodged it and swept his legs beneath Kiba, who just leapt back. Naruto then used the momentum to spin to his feet and made the "bring it on" motion with his hands. This infuriated Kiba, who charged at Naruto headfirst. Naruto smirked and jumped back, copying Kiba, but was taken by surprise when Akamaru appeared behind Kiba and landed on his back. He then leapt at Naruto and grabbed onto the arm that Naruto had used to shield his face and neck. While attempting to free Akamaru from his bleeding arm, Naruto swore a series of curses, avoiding any serious blows from Kiba, who continued to strike without stopping. When the puppy finally released his hold, Naruto threw him across the arena, causing him to bounce off the ground multiple times before finally stopping a few meters away. Akamaru! Kiba yelled as he hurried to his partner's side and swiftly examined him using methods his clan had been taught to look for injuries in their partners. The puppy stood up again, growling at Naruto, who let out a loud hiss as a tiny flame appeared over the wound, almost instantly stopping the bleeding. Do you believe that we should advance, friend? As Akamaru yipped softly, Kiba asked in a low voice so Naruto could hear him. Kiba grinned at his partner's excitement. As Kiba handed Akamaru a food pill, he said, "Okay, here buddy." Akamaru swallowed the pill whole, his fur turning brick red and ruffling out like needles. All right, Naruto, I hope you're prepared for battle because Akamaru and I make the greatest team ever. Kiba shouted, getting down on all fours, Akamaru jumping onto his back as Kiba made a hand seal. Ninja art. Man. Beast clone. The two were hidden by a puff of smoke that vanished a few seconds later, exposing two identical Kibas, with the same feet, elongated canines that gave him a more bestial appearance, and fingers that now had claws. Gatsuga. When one of the Kibas yelled, the two appeared to start spinning like a drill and headed directly at Naruto, who was unable to dodge their blows in time and was launched into the air as they attacked him mercilessly, the blonde being battered by their frequent strikes. As the silver-haired man finally reappeared, looking around in confusion, Kurenai remarked, "I think your student is about to lose, Kakashi." What did I overlook? He asked, not seeing Hinata at all. He was aware of Sasuke's location and could see Naruto being repeatedly struck in the battle below, but he was unable to spot Hinata. The woman is sleeping behind you. She nearly bit down there, Asuma said, with Guy nearby looking dejected. He sighed as he turned to look behind him and saw the girl sleeping peacefully. Guy's guilty expression suggests that she fought Neji, don't you think? All three of the Junin nodded in response to his statement, and he sighed again. Well, thanks for filling in on time. Kakashi remarked, I doubt Naruto would have forgiven me for leaving Hinata undefended, and something tells me that an angry Naruto isn't a pretty sight. However, he was taken aback by Asuma's sharp bark of laughter, and a moment later, Kurenai gave her a sharp elbow. Have I said anything amusing? Kakashi inquired. Yes, in a way. We never had the opportunity to stop Neji. He was on the verge of killing Hinata when Naruto intervened. He never even left his spot up here, as far as I could tell. Naruto then gave a speech fit for a Hokage, and you truly missed it, Kakashi, Kurenai remarked with admiration. Asuma continued, only to be elbowed again. Of course, he nearly cooked us all extra crispy. What? Usually it took a lot to confuse him, but when it came to Naruto, the norm seemed to take a vacation, so Kakashi asked again. It appears that the boy has a unique affinity for fire. His anger erupted into flames all around him without a single hand seal or utterance. I promise that the power of that affinity extends beyond just summoning flames whenever Kurenai feels like it. She thought of something else, but Asuma beat her to it. Yes, he did mention his nickname. You wouldn't be familiar with what he's talking about, would you? Asuma inquired, and Kakashi merely gave him a perplexed look. The three Junin nodded in agreement as Kakashi said, I have no idea, although if you really want to know, I would suggest we wait until the end of the match. Recalling a technique he had learned in Wave, Naruto was concentrating on the fire that was growing inside of him. Rewind. Kuso. When the attempt failed, Naruto snarled and closed his eyes while letting his chakra sight spread outwards. I can't get the fire to come with all this mist around, he said, leaning back against a tree and attempting to will the flames to appear with his outstretched hand. As a teenage girl emerged from the tree's cover with a basket in one hand, Naruto remarked, I can sense you, no need to hide. No, I apologize. I discovered you sleeping while looking through the forest for some herbs to help my friend. The girl said, I just didn't want to wake you, even though it looks like you weren't asleep. She held out her free hand, which Naruto saw was gloved at arm's length. Do these plants have any poisons? Naruto asked, pointing to the girl's glove when she appeared perplexed. Oh, no, the touch of the mist just bothers me. It makes me feel cold and sweaty, the girl said with a kind smile that caused Naruto to reciprocate. Yes, I do comprehend. I can usually light a fire to stay warm, but this mist keeps putting it out. Do you have any ideas? Despite the girl's conventional appearance, Naruto sensed that she was a skilled shinobi because of her large chakra pool, which was almost a third of Kakashi's but far smaller than his own. He formulated the question as though he were starting a typical fire. Naruto considered how he could apply the girl's advice to his own predicament. I would say that if your fire is dying out too quickly, you'd need more tinder to make it stronger at first so it can survive long enough to become bigger. I'll have to give that a try, thanks. Do you live nearby? My name is Naruto. Naruto extended his hand and said, I would like to send a gift to the person who helped me with such a vital problem. The girl gave him a kind smile. Haku took his hand and said, Yes, I live about a mile away. My name is Haku, pleased to make your acquaintance. Flashback termination. Naruto focused the fire through his chakra pathways towards his hands as the tunneling attack approached him. However, this time he was prepared. With a snap of his fingers, a tiny explosion the size of a beach ball appeared, striking the tunneling pair and sending them in a different direction. Snapdragon display, he called out. However, he had no such plans as his hands started snapping at high speed, with explosions popping up all over the place like a fireworks display, consistently blocking the two attacks in succession as they tried to break through his defensive flames. This seemed to irritate them, and they split up, presumably to attack him from two different directions this time. Before the twin fangs could pin him between them, a plume of purple smoke erupted from the spot, obscuring all three fighters. They never made it through, and Naruto landed evenly on his feet, pausing briefly to regain his bearings. As they awaited the outcome of the attack, the crowd stood in silent anticipation. The cloud eventually blew away, revealing three identical Kibas standing there, each of whom appeared to be staring at the other two with disdain. Naruto, do you think this will trick me? He turned and nailed one in the face, sending it rolling backwards into a wall. You. I can easily smell which one is, he said, his nose as strong as a dog's at the moment. Kiba's eyes widened as he rounded on the other one, and the hit Kyuubi disappeared in a cloud of smoke, revealing an injured Akamaru. I don't know how you did that, but you'll pay. Kyuubi struck the fake Kyuubi in the cheek without waiting for him to defend himself, sending him flying through the air and landing hard on the ground, knocked out cold. He then exploded in a second plume of smoke, revealing an unconscious Akamaru. You're right, Kyuubi. I can't fool your nose, but I can fool your eyes. The first Akamaru said, looks like it's just you and me now. He leapt to his feet and disappeared in the same cloud of smoke as the first time, exposing an almost unharmed Naruto. You are a jerk. Since you injured Akamaru, I will beat you. Kyuubi yelled and charged at Naruto, who smirked as he sidestepped Kiba's rage-filled blows. Kyuubi growled and threw himself at Naruto, who sidestepped the attack as Kyuubi slid behind him and whirled on the bare-faced blonde. Strangely, I don't feel scared of your threats, mutt. Naruto taunted. I have you now, Kyuubi yelled, lunging towards Naruto like a wolf charging at its prey, which was appropriate given their respective animal spirits. Naruto, like his animal, was naturally cunning, as he dropped a tiny ball just before Kyuubi could get to him, causing a huge cloud of yellow smoke to burst out as the two surviving fighters disappeared. Hey, didn't I just say you, Naruto? What's this awful stench, Kami? As Naruto leapt out of the cloud, gripping his own nose until he landed, Kyuubi let out a howl. I assumed you were more wolf. Like in that state, with your senses being hyper-aware. When you attacked me earlier with that cloud of smoke, I first understood the plan. I was able to swipe one and change it with some sulfur I had lying around. Sulfur has a number of characteristics, including the volatility of sulfur when exposed to fire and the rotten egg smell. Naruto grinned while extending one hand as the gathered shinobi looked on in anticipation of his next move. Let me use one of my strongest attacks to finish you. Most of the Junin were unaware that Naruto had made a single shadow clone beneath him as he ran at the wall, attaching his feet with chakra as he sprinted up the wall. A single finger snap set off a massive explosion that sent Kiba skyward, his body still reeling from the smell and sound to defend itself. He finally got to his desired height and kicked off, flipping backwards to slam a heel into Kiba's gut and sending him back to the ground. But Naruto grabbed hold of him in a way that was strikingly similar to a certain taijutsu move, cutting off his momentum. The two spun quickly, mimicking Kiba's earlier attack, and Naruto muttered, "Sorry for stealing your moves, Lee." The clone below disappeared as the dropping pair got closer to the ground, and Kiba was replaced by a log covered in exploding tags as Naruto did the same. A mushroom cloud of flame covered the Naruto clone just before both of them hit the ground. Naruto said, "Flare bomb." With his foot firmly planted in Kiba's back, the Inuzuka was rendered unconscious. After a few seconds, Hayate emerged, perspiring from the extreme heat brought on by Naruto's last blow. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki. With that, Naruto disappeared from his position atop Kiba and resurfaced beside his female teammate, who was starting to recover. "Hey, how are you, Hinata-chan?" In an attempt to comfort the hurt Hyuga, who was unable to speak due to her lobster-red face, Naruto asked tenderly as he started to dote on her. Eventually, Kakashi was able to persuade him to watch the next few matches so he would have some ideas for the finals. Despite the fact that the following bouts were brief and dull and did not showcase many of each character's skills, Naruto complied. Nara Shikamaru vs Tsuchikin Shikamaru used a cunning move with his shadow possession jutsu to defeat her in a matter of minutes. Tamari no Tsubaka vs Tenten put up a good fight, but Temari's superior wind powers ultimately made it a bad matchup. Shoji Akamichi vs Dosu Barbecue provided Shoji with a lot of motivation, but Dosu's sound-based abilities ultimately turned his best jutsu against him, another poor matchup. Kankuro no Tsubaka vs Masumi Tsurugi. When Masumi believed he had captured Kankuro's body, Kankuro deceived him by setting up a trap in which he offered to spare the man, but Masumi rejected his offer, causing Kankuro to break his neck. Comparing Farisa and Narissa Suin, given that both twins were placed on the same team and that Naruto knew very little about their skills, he was genuinely interested in seeing this match. However, it appeared that they had reached a prearranged understanding, as Farisa forfeited before the match even started. Hayate then took the stage and said, "The last competitor will face one of you who have already fought because of the odd number of contestants." After a moment to process what he had said, Hayate said, "If you lose, you will be eliminated from the finals, regardless of the outcome of your previous match. Do any of you want to volunteer to fight again?" There was silence for a few seconds before Hayate nodded and turned to face the board. "All right, let's just proceed the conventional way," Hayate said. "Final match. Up, spin the names." The entire Genin crowd listened to the names that cycled on the bottom line with rapt attention. The crowd went white at the pairing when it finally stopped. Hinata Hyuga vs Amy Gakenjo. On the one hand, most of them hoped she was completely destroyed, but on the other hand, she could be pretty vicious with her words, and Hinata wasn't known for her killer instincts. The matchup left everyone in shock, and their memories brought back the fangirl who had made every other female's life in the academy, Hinata's in particular, a living hell. Fortunately, one had seen where the blue net went, and they turned almost in unison to see her reaction, but she was nowhere to be seen. "I'll go get her. I believe she's outside." As Amy took her place on the stone floor, Hayate nodded in the assent and said, "Be back in a few minutes." Her eyes spoke of a defiant spirit, and her arms were crossed. In many respects, her current attire was even smuttier than it had been as a teenager, with slight curves to her body. She had shed the short skirts and plunging necklines of the academy in favor of a nearly black top that exposed her navel and a fishnet undershirt, with a pair of bike shorts covering her legs and leaving little room for interpretation. As Naruto stepped out of the walkway through a tiny door, he saw Hinata standing outside with her characteristic nervous expression on her face, her fingers pressed together. "Hey, how are you?" The girl jumped when he asked, putting a gentle hand on her shoulder because she hadn't heard him approach. "Yeah, I'm all right." Naruto began to lean over the rail with her, his eyes searching the horizons as the burnt vermilion globe started to touch the earth in the distance. She began. "Yes, I was present. Don't fight her if you don't want to. You only did this so Sasuke and I could try to increase our numbers, and I know that very well," Naruto said. "Well, my rank." Hinata's startled expression met his sidelong glance. The blonde's only reaction to Hinata's assurance was a quiet laugh. What N.No, I wanted T.To fight. Hinata, you're not good at lying. You detest conflict. We were in the same class for 4 years, plus the same team since then, and you think I don't know that about you by now. If I were allowed to be completely honest, I would say that you didn't really want to be a kunoichi in the first place, but that you're held to higher standards because you're the clan heiress. Naruto responded to the assumption with silence. Hinata started to say, no, but was stopped by Naruto's compassionate, kind blue eyes as she saw him staring at her face and felt her cheeks suddenly flush. But I guess I should include this if I'm going to be honest. That's why I love you. Naruto said, his amendment making Hinata's eyes widen as her face reached a new shade of red, not yet discovered. Love. Hinata struggled to stay conscious and sputtered, but she felt as though she was floating on air. I've cared for you for years, always watching in class as my first real friend, other than Gigi, of course. However, it wasn't until recently that I realized that my feelings were love and not a schoolboy crush. Naruto continued, as Hinata felt her heart thundering her chest. If this was a dream that Neji had sent her into when he finished her off, or real life, she didn't care. If you don't feel the same, of course I can understand. Naruto continued, rambling, I didn't expect you to after all and... Hinata grinned. Hinata said, Naruto, shut up. The blonde was taken aback as she kissed him, and the sunset made it seem like something out of a fairy tale. They withdrew, gasping at how quickly their hearts were beating. Not really knowing what to say at this point, Naruto spluttered, we should return inside. I have to do something, and I'm not going to give up just yet. With a confident tone that was more appropriate for Naruto's stern face than her gentle face, Hinata declared, I'm going to fight her, Naruto, and I'm going to win, because I will stand beside you every step you take. Nevertheless, he silently followed her back inside, pausing only to whisper in her ear and tuck something into her pocket before they went inside. Are both fighters prepared? Both women nodded in agreement when Hayate asked, and then he jumped back, knowing from past fights what to expect. Hajime. It was obvious that tensions were high at this point, and both girls were coiled springs, waiting to be released as a person, identity unknown, coughed, and both girls shot at each other, clashing with Kanai as they tried to gain the upper hand. Both girls simply seemed to glare at each other, and the spectators were silent as they awaited the start of the fight. In a twisted way, the spectators were like sharks in the water or dogs in a pit. They sat and waited for blood to be spilled before cheering and calling. One would hop back every few seconds, only to re-engage before either could catch their breath. Any second, one could make a mistake and the first blood would be claimed. Hi there, slut. As she landed, her hands had already formed the seal as her veins around her eyes bulged, signifying her clan's dojutsu. Amy called, and Hinata could only grit her teeth and push against her, sending her skidding back as Hinata leapt away, trying to put some distance between them. But since her eyes were now active, Amy wasn't going to let her get too close, so she took a whip out of her pouch and let the brown leather unfold on the ground. The grip was comfortable in her hand as she gave it a test swing, and the whip snapped in the air. But it wasn't the weapon's familiarity that unnerved her opponent, rather, it was the whip's tip, which had been replaced with a crystalline tip with sharp shards protruding, like Amy's tongue, ready to tear into her. As if I'm going to allow you to get close to me with those grotesque eyes, most likely, you would infect me with some repulsive blind illness. When she called, even Neji became tense as he waited for Hinata to respond. Although he might lash out at her with insulting remarks and derogatory remarks, it was considered treason to the clan to offend a Hyuga's eyes, and the same could be said for failing to seek retribution. You stupid cow, stop talking. You can't say such things and expect to get away with it just because I'm an outsider in my family. With her whip flashing through the air to deflect the kunai, Hinata said, hurling a flurry of kunai at the brunette, who simply grinned. The tempered metal did not even chip the tip of the crystal. That's rich, huh? I call a spade what you're calling me, and perhaps if your clan had any value, you wouldn't be cursed. When Amy cackled, her whip suddenly flashed out, and Hinata just managed to jump back before it slashed through the air and returned to Amy's side a few seconds later. As the most aristocratic clan in Konoha, we deserve their admiration, Hinata muttered, and I am the clan heiress besides, before lunging towards Amy and dodging her repeated attempts to grab her with the whip. However, the lacquered leather of the whip easily deflected her attacks, and Amy was able to wrap the weapon around her wrist as she pulled firmly, the razor. Sharp crystal slicing through Hinata's flesh before she could escape. Yes, everyone applauds the Hyugas, Konoha's most inbred clan, and their princess. Amy's venomous statement caused Hinata to pause for a moment. This was a big mistake. Instead of sending the whip sideways, Amy sent it straight ahead, causing the crystal to tear into Hinata's jacket and her stomach to bleed. But before the blue net could get away, Amy swung the whip again, this time encircling the Hyuga's neck as the slack was pulled, the tip of the whip painfully digging into Hinata's neck. When Hinata resisted, Amy yelled, "Bow down to me, and maybe I'll let you go with some shred of worth left." The girl fell hard to the stone, feeling her teeth rattle from the impact to her chin. Amy ordered, "Do it, bow down to me, princess, and say my name." Hinata managed to respond with another retort in spite of the increasing pain. "At least my own father didn't sell me on the street and use me for his own amusement. A cheap corner cocksucking cumdump is all you are." It was enough that Amy stared at her bewilderedly for a few seconds, her face reflecting that of most of the onlookers, before Hinata yelled, her mouth burning from the insult. If someone had looked, though, they would have seen that a certain blonde was back to his old tricks, with the metal pipes surrounding him glowing cherry red once more. "Good thing I know how to handle a rabid bitch," Amy calmly said. "Huh, I didn't think you had it in you, princess, but it seems the dog has some bite left." Then, she slammed Hinata into the floor once more and pulled the whip tight enough that Hinata gasped for air. Amy then released Hinata as she allowed the girl to gag on the air filling her lungs. Amy growled as her whip whirled through the air, popping every few seconds, and Hinata gasped, "Gasp. Just because. Gasp. You let one screw you, gasp. Doesn't mean you know how to handle a dog. After you figure out what's best for you, you'll stay down one day. Even though you Hyugas enjoy suffering, how could you not do so with that huge stick in your ass?" Amy screamed as she slashed at Hinata with her whip, who was unable to withstand the constant assaults. Her blood was now streaming freely as the crystal tore out pieces of flesh with each blow, leaving her body covered in cuts. Amy leaned down to put her whip around Hinata's neck again, putting her knee in the girl's back as she pulled upwards, Hinata's neck objecting to the force. "Now, I want to hear you beg for mercy." Amy slammed Hinata's face into the concrete one last time, giving it a quick stomp for good measure. "All you have to do is beg me for release, and I'll give it to you, princess." However, the civilian with the whip didn't give her a chance to reply, likely having learned her lesson by now. "Fine, you glutton for punishment, I'm bored of playing with this broken doll anymore." With her jacket in ruins from the numerous whip attacks and her once beautiful midnight hair tinged red from the blood accumulating on the floor, Amy stood and walked away from the fallen, defeated, and broken Hyuga doll, not even bothering to pick up her whip again before heading to Hayate to receive her reward. Hayate looked down regretfully, worried about the Hyuga's safety because of the numerous wounds the civilian had inflicted on her, and he cleared his throat, wanting this to be over as soon as possible so she could receive medical care. He began to say, "Ehem, the winner is," but stopped when Amy let out a raspy cry behind her, and both of them turned to stare at the owner in shock. With blood dripping from the corner of her mouth, Hinata pushed herself to her feet and said, "No. Why don't you simply remain on the ground?" As Amy screamed, Hinata smiled and unwrapped the whip from around her neck. "I never backed down from a commitment I made to win. In addition, I can't allow you to defeat me in front of my special someone." With the accompanying smoke hiding the girl, Hinata said, taking a scroll from her pocket and unrolling it as she opened the contents. Her tattered jacket vanished, replaced by Naruto's signature zipped up jacket, and she looked more confident than Neji could claim to have ever seen her before it dispelled. The way the blonde looked at Hinata seemed to answer the unasked question, but it also raised a new one. For the first time since he had returned, the spectators looked at him and noticed his smug appearance and conspicuous lack of a jacket. "How long have you two been together?" Kurenai trailed off as Naruto's smile eased the tension she had appeared to be experiencing moments earlier. "I expressed my feelings to her when I went outside to pick her up. The fact that she was as devoted as I was astounded," Naruto said, his arms hanging loosely at his sides, his once gritting teeth now turned into a face splitting grin. "But just watch, things are about to get good." Below, Hinata clutched the handle of the whip that, thanks to the fiendish girl across from her now, had torn into her body just minutes earlier, and she smiled softly as she wound the whip around her waist and used it as a belt to pull Naruto's oversized jacket in. When Amy hit her, she finished and jumped away, her hands flying out to knock away the metal projectiles that accompanied her pointless attack, and then she landed silently and danced around Amy's next few attacks, hitting her body fluidly without taking a hit. In order to end the one-sided fight, she positioned herself behind the brunette and hooked her foot around Amy's as she pushed her forward. Hinata jumped back, innocently placing her hands behind her back, and the civilian's face hit the ground. As she scrambled to her feet, Amy said, "I don't get it," her hand ghosting over her face to make sure nothing was broken. "You couldn't even get near me just moments ago, and now you're beating me like it's nothing," she said. What did you do? Furiously pounding her fists against her thighs, Amy demanded. Being pitied isn't enjoyable, is it? However, if you must know, I had nothing to do with it. Hinata's admission caused Amy's face to flush with anger. You little scumbag, how dare you? When Amy threw out more kunai, Hinata leaned to the side to avoid it. The metal slid loudly across the ground, but Hinata didn't seem to notice. And obviously it has to be something you did. I'd never help you, she yelled. Hinata fingered the fabric of her new jacket and said, no, my help came with this gift. That ratty thing, what? Sewer rats have better content, in my opinion. And as for its owner, Amy began, but before she could finish, Hinata appeared, her palm thrusting into Amy, sending the smaller girl flying backwards as if it were nothing. You dirty little peasant. You've denigrated me, my family, and civilians everywhere, but I won't stand by and let you do the same to my Naruto. Hinata growled, and though only Amy could see it, her Byakugan eyes changed color, turning from pearlescent to opalescent like a ripple in a pool, making her appear completely blind. I don't know why you're defending that demon, Amy said, glaring at Hinata as she staggered to her feet with a thin line of blood trailing from her mouth. How could anyone love that thing? It's not like you truly love him. The council, the village, and even his own parents don't care enough for him to stay with them. Instead, they leave him in a ditch, which is a fitting location for a demon spawn like him. Before realizing that Hinata was staring at Naruto rather than her, Amy screamed again. Hinata turned back to the civilian and slowly brought her hands together as if in prayer, her head lowered in reverence as the blonde nodded, a sad expression on his face that Hinata mirrored. Neji, are you aware of what she is doing? Assuming that the prodigal Hyuga would be aware of the method Hinata was employing, Guy questioned his pupil. No, Guy. Sensei, it's not like anything I've ever seen, but I get the impression that it's one of the methods that the main branch alone can employ. Neji added under his breath, this also means I'll have a new technique to learn before finals, but Guy could still hear him and frowned at the hate in the boy's voice. As she recklessly charged at the Hyuga, Amy yelled, what are you doing? You reject, praying ain't going to help you any. Pardon me, mother, for what I did. Time seemed to slow down as Hinata whispered, I only hope father approves of my reparation claimed from this treasonous witch. One tear was streaming down her cheek. Grand trigram palm. 8 trigrams. Hinata yelled, her open palm slamming into Amy's bare chest. The civilian froze as Hinata appeared to spin on her heel and slam a second open palm into her stomach, the impact of which was equivalent to a cannonball striking her. This went on as Hinata hit 5 more points before slamming into the girl's temple with both hands. The last trigram. As Hinata shouted, the civilian's eyes rolled into the back of her head, causing her body to bend back and hit the ground painfully. Hinata quickly stuffed her hands into her pockets to conceal them from view. As Hinata nodded and bowed to the referee, Hayate yelled, winner Hinata Hyuga. She then ran back to Naruto's side on the walkway above, tears streaming behind her. Naruto held her close, and the girl's sobs reverberated as she buried herself in Naruto's chest. With a sigh, Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and looked around the council room at everyone with narrowed eyes. He was aware that the 2 elders and his old teammates, Hamaru and Kaharu, would be by his sides. Danzo sat like a hawk directly to his left, observing the events with bias and waiting for his turn to dominate. Except for 2 seats near the center of the table, which were occupied by Toshiro Gakunjo, the father of Amy Gakunjo, and Mibuki Haruno, Sakura Haruno's mother, the other seats were occupied by the many clan heads of Konoha. Sarutobi responded once more, the salt dot and pepper. Haired civilian frowning at the repeated refusals to exact revenge on his daughter. For the 3rd and final time, I will not force the Hyuga clan to pay reparations for their clan heiress putting your daughter into a coma. It was a sanctioned fight monitored by several Junin, as well as myself. If we thought she was being unfairly brutal, we would have stepped in. The Hokage's harsh tone cut off any resistance that might have been building into Shiro's throat. Now then, unless some new evidence arises, such as the cause exactly of Amy Chan's coma, then consider this matter dropped. The civilian expressed his displeasure by pushing his chair back, leaving the room, and slamming the door behind him, even though he was unable to respond sharply. When they looked at their leader, most of the other inhabitants didn't even bat an eyelid. The other shinobi gazed expectantly at the 3rd, and Hiyashi asked, if I may be permitted, why have we been called here, that insufferable man especially? Several of us have to get back to training our children for the finals. With Danzo looking at his rival with one half open eye, Sarutobi told the assembled parents, I needed to speak to several of you about the preliminaries, but I also wanted to say to all of you that I have high hopes for the coming generation. Given a few years, I can see some, if not all, of your children leading the village into an era The will of fire burns strongly in a few, stronger than is customary for their age. Hiruzen got up from his chair, his aging body objecting to the gesture, and said, "That said, I need to see several of you in my office. If Hiyashi, Inoichi, and Mibuki would follow me to my office." He laughed softly as the three asked Rose too, and he followed them into his office, an Anbu falling from the rafters to block the door. He started by settling into the soft chair behind his desk and said, "Now then, I guess I'll begin with Haruno-san." The woman nodded as she moved forward. Sarutobi added, pointing to Hiyashi and Inoichi, "I suppose I don't have to say that whatever is said inside this room must remain here. You may speak of it to anyone, not even each other. This applies to all of you." "Yes, Lord Hokage." Everyone said the same thing. "Now, Mibuki, during your daughter's match, she was subjected to more mental strain than physical, although she was thoroughly beaten. However, why I requested to speak to you is that she seemed broken during the match, and shortly after this, she began to express inky tears, and became much more maniacal than should be healthy. I would like to know if you have any idea what she may have done." The Hokage responded, leaning back in his chair as he adjusted his hat so that his eyes were hidden. Any hope he had of receiving answers, however, was dashed when Mibuki gave him a distressed look. Mibuki was clearly upset, but her voice didn't falter or crack as she said, "No, I had no idea she was capable of such a thing. As you know, both I and my husband are civilians, not trained in the shinobi arts beyond knowing what chakra was, or what our daughter mentioned to us during her schooling." Sarutobi waved the civilian council member away after saying softly, "That's what I was afraid of. I'd like to request that she be placed under observation, and that she go to an appointment with a Yamanaka to have her mental welfare assured." He commanded, "Inoichi, step forwards." The blond man silently obeyed, placing his hands behind his back. Inoichi's only response was the hardening of his Hokage's face. "If you'd like to request that I perform the check on Haruno-san, I'll do it. Considering Sakura and Ino's relationship, it may help her to have some familiar faces. If by that you're asking to have your daughter at the check, I'm afraid that would only make things worse. Judging from your statement, I'm going to assume you were unaware of your daughter's fight in the preliminaries." Hiruzen replied with a confused Inoichi. Inoichi shot back, his face hardening as suspicions raced through his mind. "What do you mean? If you're referring to my daughter's hair, I'm already aware, and while I find it more befitting until she learns to fight properly, it's hardly reason to forbid her from being with her friend during such a troubled time." Despite the tenseness of the conversation, the platinum blonde gave a low laugh as the elderly man said, "I dearly hope you don't fully believe the words coming out of your mouth, or else I'm going to have to order that the entire Yamanaka clan report for mental welfare checks." Inoichi sank into a chair and started to explain, Sarutobi staring stonily as he said, "No, I was afraid of having this conversation one day, Lord Hokage. From a young age, Ino was always different, very possessive of her toys and such. We finally decided to have her checked when she was 7. My late wife, she took Ino's favorite stuffed toy to wash it. Perfectly normal, right? Well, apparently not to Ino. She felt that my wife had stolen the toy, and called her Ino called her a list of things. Kami above, I didn't know a little girl could say such things with such venom. My wife, she withstood the berating by Ino, considering it was her own child, but things became worse when Ino began starving herself, refusing to eat anything until her toy was returned." Inoichi stopped and took a deep breath before going on. "Naturally, my wife gave in, caring only for her daughter's well-being. It was the next day that I got a day off and delved deep into Ino's id, that is, her inner dimension. There I discovered the problem, like a worm eating away at an apple from the inside. My sweet daughter, my dear Ino, possessed a spirit of avarice unparalleled by any other mind I have ever had the chance to enter. I found in my little girl's memories, recollections of tormenting other children, girls she had called her friends purely out of jealousy. So, I did something that I regret dearly," Inoichi said, rubbing his eyes once more, preventing any tears from leaving as. "I used a forbidden jutsu known in our clan to plant a seed of hope in her fragile mind, in desperate hopes that it would, in time, grow to consume the festering darkness in my daughter. I know now that this was the wrong thing to do, but I had no other choice," Inoichi concluded, staring at the floor with disdain his actions. Sarutobi reprimanded the penitent father, who stood up abruptly, the chair clattering to the floor behind him. "You should have mentioned something to someone, anyone. That little obsessive behavior has turned into cult-like behavior centered on Sasuke Uchiha. She nearly killed her proclaimed best friend over a petty spat of who Sasuke liked more. Kami knows what she would do to others, and if it comes to that, the blame will be squarely on your shoulders, Inoichi." He halted and clamped a hand on his shoulder, his angry expression replaced by one of thunder. "Shut up, you would have done the same if it was your child," he cried. Inoichi turned and walked away, not daring to look at his Hokage's face again. I'm sorry, Lord Hokage," I spoke out of turn. "I shall rectify the mistake made." As he addressed the last member summoned to his office, Hiruzen thought out loud, maybe I was too harsh on him. Inoichi has been loyal for as long as I can remember, and I suppose his accusation does have its merits. He then shook his head out of his thoughts. Sarutobi sat back in his chair and waited for Hiyashi to calmly respond to his concerns. "Hiyashi, I wanted to talk to you about both your nephew and your daughter. During the preliminary stages, Neji and Hinata had to fight each other, and Neji won. But during the fight, I noticed that Neji-chan seems to have quite a grudge against the main branch. He seems to hold them in contempt for that incident. It never materialized." As a picture of his deceased brother flashed through his mind, Hiyashi said calmly, "And well he should. The main branch is, after all, to blame for my brother's death, myself in particular. It only makes sense that he would use my child in place of myself. However, I seriously doubt that he would go so far as to use lethal force against Hinata." With a frown on his face, the Hokage abruptly jumped out of his chair and came to a halt just inches from Hiyashi. A kunai clamped around the Hyuga's neck. When the clan head saw how close the sharp edge was to his neck, he began. "Hokage. Sama," he began, but the fire shadow withdrew his hand, concealing his hands and the kunai inside his robe's billowing sleeves. Taking a seat back, the elderly man reached under his desk and took out a saucer and a small bottle of sake. That was how close Neji came to finishing off young Hinata. In fact, I doubt we would have been able to stop him in time had Naruto-chan not stepped in. That being said, I don't think you should keep the truth of the matter hidden from him. I'm not going to order you to tell him anything, as it is technically a clan matter, but I'd recommend you tell him soon." The door opened as a young Chunin stormed into the meeting. Hiyashi said, "I will take it under consideration, Lord Hokage. However, I felt that telling him during the training session would be counter-productive, the same as telling him during the finals. But, if I feel that he can hear the truth and it won't worsen his skill, I will tell him." As soon as the presiding Anbu aimed the tip of his katana at the perspiring Chunin's neck, she realized that her life was in jeopardy. But as she held out a file to the Hokage, she appeared unfrightened for her life. The young woman exclaimed, This just in, Lord Hokage. Mera. Shisho confirmed the results herself. With a mixture of excitement and fear, if that's possible. But she gazed expectantly at the Hokage as the manila folder of notes slipped from her grasp. The elderly Hokage stroked his beard as the room's occupants perspired. "Oh yes, Beaver. Let Orihime-chan go. She was under my orders, I suppose." The girl fled the room with her lab coat fluttering behind her, but the Anbu still gave in and let her go. Hiruzen opened the folder and fingered through a number of documents before saying, "I was meaning to also speak with you about this, Hiyashi-san." The Hokage said, "As I'm sure you noticed earlier, Gakenjo-san was rather furious due to his daughter's condition. I lied when I said there wasn't any evidence as to her diagnosis. Medics on scene examined her, and said she had little to no wounds on her body, which makes sense considering she fought a Hyuga, your daughter. However, they also reported that they were unable to use medical jutsu to see what was wrong with her, which did confuse me, so I had a specialist examine her. Mera-chan is clinically blind, with no hope of ever receiving a cure, which posed a major problem considering she dreamed of being a great shinobi. However, my student, Tsunade, you remember her, helped her through the difficult time. At the time, we assumed that if anyone could fix Mera, it would be Tsunade. We were wrong. But the two bonded, and Mera found that despite a disability that prevented her from ever fighting, she could still help defend our blessed village," the man said, turning the page while Hiyashi listened attentively. Hiruzen had a notorious tendency to ramble when distracted. Hiruzen concluded, his eyes slowly rising from the sheet of paper as he handed the page to Hiyashi, leaning back in his comfortable chair, his arthritic fingers steepling in front of his face. Since she obviously couldn't learn taijutsu, or ninjutsu, she devoted her life to medical jutsu, becoming a prodigy in the field, acknowledged by Tsunade herself. Tsunade was famous for being able to fix any problems with the body, like a master puppeteer fixing his puppets, while Mera was unparalleled in diagnosing patients. The third said, turning his chair around to gaze out the window over his village, taking in the picturesque surroundings. "Now Hiyashi, I'm going to ask this one time, and don't take my rambling as the early onset of some mental disorder. Do you know of any technique in the Hyuga repertoire that can do what is listened on that page? Because depending on your answer, one of two things await us. If so, I would like to applaud your clan's skill as the perfect assassins. If not, then I would like you to find out just how Chan came to create such a technique, and if possible, replicate it, given the potential damage it can do. He didn't need to see Hiyoshi's response because he could tell by the sharp slam of a door, the sound of fluttering papers, and the dead silence. Team 7, one of you can use his mind to start fires, but I suspect it goes much deeper than that. Your second member is the last of his clan, but the same goes for the first, and he harbors a dark hatred that is growing inside of him, similar to the darkness that once blossomed in Master's rival. Now I find out that your last member has the power to completely destroy those. I worry about Konoha's future if even one of you loses it. When Hinata exhaled, she attacked Hanabi with the words, 8 trigrams. 32 palms. Her younger sister effortlessly sidestepped the blow and hit her older sister's exposed side, but Hinata saw it coming and was unable to stop it in time, allowing her to fall to her knee. Breathing heavily from the intense and frequent sparring between the two sisters, Hanabi said, "You lost, sister, again." She extended her hand to assist her sister in standing up, reopening her chakra points as they each took their respective sides and assumed the Juken stance. Hiyashi watched them carefully, walking purposefully towards Hinata, who bowed at the waist, as a stern voice called out, "Wait." The sisters froze as their father entered the sparring grounds, but they relaxed when they realized he appeared to have a message. "You're fired, Hanabi," Hiyashi said. "Your sister and I have something to discuss," but his youngest daughter gave him a curious look. Yes? If it were any other time, he would be proud, but he had business to attend to, and Hanabi wouldn't just say anything without permission, demonstrating her ability to recognize authority. Hiyashi sighed, a sign that should have warned both of his daughters given his habit of hiding his feelings. Hanabi said, "I would like to hear what you have to discuss with Hinata. Chan, and besides, we're in the middle of sparring and it would be counterproductive for me to leave, only to be called back minutes later." "All right, but just watch and keep quiet," Hiyashi remarked. "It will be helpful for you to observe how to engage with the clan when you become clan head." His daughter nodded and moved to sit beneath a shade tree. "Now, Hinata, tell me where you got the idea for the method you employed on the civilian girl during the preliminary round." Hiyoshi's tone was so severe that Hinata had no choice but to comply. "It looks like our Juken, but it doesn't match any of the techniques taught." Hanabi watched in silence as Hinata defended herself, saying, "What do you mean, 2.san? Of course it is one of the Juken techniques, it has to be. I found it in the clan library." However, her shifting eyes betrayed her, as Hiyashi grabbed her shoulders and held her in place, forcing her eyes to meet his. "I can tell you're lying by the look in your eyes. Now, who taught you that technique and where did you get it?" Hinata attempted to escape his hold, but her father's hold was unbreakable. This time, her eyes met his evenly, and he was taken aback by the intense stare, briefly thinking of his late wife. "I told you, father, it was in the clan library, and I taught myself it from the scroll." "At least you think you were telling the truth at the time. The fact that you located it, though, is what separates your first response from the second. This only leads me to believe that someone else led you to it. Since they had to be well versed in our clan structure, tell me, Hinata, who guided you to the scroll? You are aware of the regulations for spies and intruders." Hiyoshi's tone sounded almost imploring, even though he pictured it in his mind. Hinata sobbed, and Hiyashi, who was now her clan head rather than her father, had to resist the urge to wipe away her tears. "I cannot tell, father, you would think me foolish. It's better to be stupid than a traitor. You are aware that those who conceal spies will also be held accountable." The clan head calmly remarked, "You will force my hand, but I would not wish that upon my own daughter." He watched as Hinata's eyes darted around in fear. "Chan," Hinata muttered, seeing no other option, and at last she appeared to get some relief as her father's hold relaxed a bit, probably in shock. "What did Hinata do?" he asked reassuringly. "Chan informed me. In my dream, I saw her and she directed me to the right place. She even told me that Hanabi, Chan and I are the only ones who can find the blood seal. After declaring her love for me, she vanished." With tears streaming down her cheeks in torrents, Hinata suddenly broke free from her father and attempted to flee, but he grabbed her by the wrist. "Hinata." With the oldest daughter still sobbing and letting out muffled sniffles, her father said sharply, "If you are so adamant on being difficult, fine." He pulled his daughter for an embrace, but she pushed him away. "I'm sure you will be forgiven if you hand over this scroll," he assured her. "No, I can't. There's a reason, Chan locked it away. That won't be trampled underfoot by those worthless elders." Between the confession and now, Hinata's tone had changed, and Hiyashi could see the look of complete defiance in her eyes. He recognized it, as well as the day his wife had looked at her father in that manner, when the man had attempted to thwart their marriage. Please, Hinata. Chan, pay attention to your father. Hinata's defiant expression abruptly disappeared as Hanabi interrupted. He's trying to help you, why can't you see that? Hiyashi had a twisted idea, but the needs of the clan came before those of a father. All right, Hinata, I won't press you, he said, slowly approaching Hinata, but at least teach Hanabi. You said she could have opened the seal just as easily as you, so surely it should be okay to teach her. However, the girl saw right through his plan, her eyes set in a glare of rage. No. You only want her to know so you can get her to tell the elders and instruct the rest of the clan. Even though I would teach her. Hiyashi was shocked by the unexpected animosity before a fire ignited in his own eyes. Hinata screamed, settling smoothly into the well-known position of her clan. You would engage in combat with your own father for the sake of this absurd cause? Okay, since you want to fight so badly, let's come to an understanding. Have a final fight with your sister, Hanabi. Hanabi took his place, albeit reluctantly, and Hiyashi said, if Hanabi wins, you will teach her that technique, but if you win, you can go free, and I'll not bring it up again. Hinata, on the other hand, appeared unimpressed. Hinata said, if that is what it will take to deter you father, then my path is already set. If Hiyashi had been sane, he would have questioned the serious tone and level expression, but instead he took a step back and observed how Hanabi was trembling a little while Hinata remained motionless. It made him think of a rabbit being hunted. Hajime, don't hold back, Hanabi. He gave a sharp bite, and even though she was frightened, she nodded yes. She then assumed the Jukan stance, and Hinata stood up with her hands hanging limply at her sides. The younger Hyuga spun around, her back to Hinata, as Hinata moved like lightning and knocked Hanabi's hand across her chest as Hanabi charged at her sister, thrusting an open palm at her chest, aiming for a quick finish. Before anyone realized what was happening, Hinata hooked her foot around Hanabi's ankle and pulled her feet out from under her. The heiress was then pushed forward by Hinata's sharp open palm strike, which sent her younger sister to the ground. I'm sorry, Imoto. Hanabi was terrified to be so completely outmatched when she was typically the winner of their spars, and when she turned to face her sister, all she saw was Hinata's single finger touching her forehead. Hinata stood up, staring at Hiyashi as though he were daring him to question her decision. As Hiyashi hurried to his daughter's side and assisted her in standing up, she said calmly, I didn't use any chakra in that strike, but I believe the purpose still stands. To prevent your clan from possessing this power, you would go to this extent, going against your very nature? When Hiyashi called for Hinata, she froze and turned to face her father. No, this power is a curse. Nobody should be able to judge and execute at the same time. Chan knew I wouldn't abuse this curse, so she trusted me with it. Staring down at Hiyashi like a sulky child, Hinata screamed. Yes, since the right justification is to use it on a civilian as retaliation. How does the clan using to establish our dominance differ from you using for retaliation? Unaware of what was going to happen, Hanabi glanced between the two as Hiyashi spoke. Even though I never requested this curse, I will still have to live with it. Would you rather see your beloved daughter blessed than me? Our clan's failure? I wouldn't, because I wouldn't want anyone to be cursed with the ability to shatter the 8 gates like mirrors. As if it could conceal her suffering, Hinata girded herself in Naruto's orange jacket, which appeared in a puff of smoke as she began to walk away. All right. The clan will repay you because you have consistently refused to assist them. To help you get ready for the finals, find another person. This is your opportunity to train yourself. Let's see how strong you are, daughter, when Neji confronts you with the entire strength of the clan behind him. Hiyashi screamed, but Hinata didn't publicly acknowledge his curse. But after a few steps, she stopped and turned to face her father and sister with the expression of a professional killer. If that is what has to be done, she said. Every power has a cost, and I agreed to pay it. She turned and drove off, moving more quickly than Hiyashi had ever seen her do. I am glad it shall be so light a curse to bear, she said. A shadowed figure, meanwhile, was observing from the trees above, leaving no trace of its presence other than a single tear that fell and broke into fragments as it hit the ground. That closet pervert left me to train, even though he left me this awesome looking jutsu, stupid Kakashi. Sensei. All he wants to teach me, really, is how to walk on water or how to control my chakras, which is amazing given my condition. But he doesn't think that's good enough. As he walked down the street, his body filthy in several places and his hair dripping sweat, Naruto complained. I hope he rots in some dank cell in the INT unit. He could honestly say that he had the jutsu Kakashi had left him, along with several others that he'd gotten from the library, albeit under an ingenious henge. Naruto always felt a bitter after turning into the duckbit of Konoha, but Sasuke had even worse trouble. Additionally, he had nearly finished the jutsu he was working on in private, with only minor adjustments needed to get the mechanics just right. He still had 3.5 weeks to iron out the kinks, and at the moment, he wants to soak in the hot springs and release all of his tension. With a weary sigh of relief, he entered the spring and sank into the water, leaving only his node above it. Naruto observed with some curiosity that, in the absence of his headband, his bangs hung low enough to dip into the water. All right, now that I'm unwinding, I can prioritize and make a mental list of the things I need to work out for the finals. Practice my Fuinjutsu first. Secondly, enhance your ability to sense chakras. Third, complete my style of taijutsu. Fourth, obtain an animal summoned. At last, complete that jutsu and complete my general skills. Naruto thought, unaware that he had drifted to the side of springs and lost himself in his thoughts. He was awakened from his meditation by a low giggling sound. Huh? He asked rather foolishly, looking around, but unable to identify the source because of the heavy steam. He turned to his other sight and closed his eyes. A figure crouched beside him, peering through the wall and laughing twistedly at something. When Naruto noticed a second chakra signature that he recognized on the opposite side, his eyes widened. Hinata-chan, he thought frantically, but then he became enraged at the perverts who were hiding there. He smirked as he instantly came up with a new jutsu to practice, sneaking up behind the peeping Tom, which was easy enough considering the cover and his target's obsession. He took the position and muttered, 1,000 years of blistering pain. He thrust into the man's back and, as a precaution, added a tiny cone of fire. The man froze for a moment before launching himself into the air, the fire behind him resembling a firework. The giggling next to Naruto cut off his gloomy laughter. He had his sensors open and should have been able to sense anyone nearby, but his eyes widened in shock, unless. He waved away the steam with a small application of wind chakra to his hand, revealing a laughing man writing something in a notebook. The man had long white hair pulled back in a ponytail, a red coat, and get sandals on his feet. Naruto hissed, "Jiraiya of the Sannin," before listening to the Sannin's words. Naruto rudely interrupted him by punching him across the cheek, sending him back into the water. "Oh, there are some real beauties out today. The backside on that blonde, and the jugs on that delicious brunette. Oh, and the curves on that Hyuga," he exclaimed. Naruto screamed, "Arrow! Sannin! Stop peeping!" Jiraiya emerged from the water on top of a big toad, which croaked in time with the crickets chirping. "I said Santo!" Naruto started to yell, but the same Sannin he was attempting to curse out covered his mouth. Naruto attempted to escape as he whispered, "Shut it Gaki, and I'll let you peek too." But Naruto couldn't break the pervert's iron grip any more easily than he could have broken Orochi. Pedos, and the pervert wasn't a Sannin for nothing. "MMHHMMPH," he exclaimed, his tirade muffled by the sage's hand. Jiraiya remarked, "Oh, the Hyuga girl's your girlfriend, well why didn't you say so? I'll make sure to include you in the book too." However, Naruto broke free and attempted to use his righteous outrage to pry the notebook from Jiraiya's hands so that it could be burned. He would normally have done that without removing it, but in the extremely humid atmosphere, he would have needed to make physical contact in order to burn it without resorting to his more explosive techniques. The women surrounding Naruto yelled, "Eki!" as he was launched through the thin bamboo wall and crashed into the water on the other side. But Naruto's reflexes were inherently fast, allowing him to transform into a fox. The blonde was suffocated as he passed away in a pervert's wet dream, which meant that his death was much more enjoyable because the women seized him and cradled him in their breasts. A rare occurrence for the perverted Sannin, Jiraiya managed to escape unscathed amid the commotion of cuddling and kawaii. Jiraiya cornered the blonde, who had returned to normal after Naruto had managed to escape, but he had only gone 3 houses. But now his damp hair was hanging down, and his headband was in his pocket. "He looks just like Minato," he muttered under his breath when the toad sage stopped him. "What do you want, Arrow? Sennin?" I asked, after learning that he was a self-proclaimed sage of toads. Although Naruto still considered him more of a toad than a toad sage, such validity was expected given the toad in the bath. "Here's the deal, Gaki. We had a good thing going in there, so I'd like to offer a temporary partnership. I have a fast approaching deadline, and need some help gathering inspiration. I'll train you, and in return, you use that fox form to attract all sorts of hotties, okay?" Jiraiya suggested, and Naruto glared at the unbeknownst to the blonde. The Kyuubi was waiting for his response inside of him. Angrily, Naruto tensed his legs and leapt onto the roof, away from the Sannin, saying, "I don't need training, even from a Sannin. I've made it this far on my own, and I'll make it all the way to the Hokage chair by myself. Find someone else to indulge your perverted wishes." As Jiraiya appeared beside Naruto, the blonde sighed as he abruptly stopped. "You know, Gaki. It's not every day that a Sannin offers to help train you. I don't feel that you properly understand the gravity of the situation. He said, then how about you explain it to me then, Sannin? Dono. Jiraiya stopped across from the genin, who bore a striking resemblance to his father, and mirrored his solemn expression. He began by saying, I'm well aware of the fox inside of you, for starters. He paused, waiting for Naruto to scream, but he never did. And because of this, the village, the civilian council in particular hates your guts. I'd also bet on the fact that Danzo Shimura wants you to be placed under his command so he could turn you into an emotionless tool for Konoha. He continued, and Naruto's brow furrowed. While the majority of what you said is true, there are some on the council that like me. Also, from what I've heard, betting isn't exactly good where the Sannin are included. That said, what is your point? He said with a voice of annoyance. He smirked knowingly, and Naruto turned to gaze at the Hokage monument with longing in his eyes. First, wrong Sannin. Second, my point is, even though it goes against what I feel, the Hokage isn't always the strongest person in the village. Sometimes, the shinobi that comes out alive is the one that brings backup. If you want to be Hokage, then let me be your backup. I have a good track record, after all. Naruto matched his appearance with his tone, saying, you're saying that even if I could beat everyone else in the village blindfolded, the guy that has the support of the village will still get the hat. The Sannin turned back to Jiraiya, pleased to see the look of acceptance in his eyes. All right, I think we can work this out. The fourth definitely trusted you, and who can challenge those outcomes? But know this, Jiraiya of the Sannin, Naruto said, moving toward the Toad Sage, who resisted, sensing no animosity from the blonde before him. Then Jiraiya's coat was singed by an explosion that sent him through the roof in a flash of red. Only the genin above him, with his legs hanging over the side of the hole and a notebook in his hands, sitting as blasé as possible, caught his attention as he searched for the source of the surprise attack. He turned through the notebook slowly and deliberately, and when he reached a particular page, he tore it out, cutting it into squares and folding them carefully. Then, with one dyed black to the other's white, he flung them all into the air. While sniping at the black paper plane, Naruto summoned tiny fireballs, but he was able to move a blank one into the way by manipulating the wind. But after a while, he reduced them all to ash before carefully catching the black one and crushing it, turning it into ash as well and throwing the ashes into the wind. He threw the notebook at Jiraiya, who caught it, but when he turned back to face the blonde, he was gone, leaving no evidence that he had ever been there. Sometimes, all backup means more casualties to the superior fighter. And eventually, the shinobi or kunoichi will have to decide whether to cut the dead. Wait, or take one on the chin. Hinata Hyuga's repeated cries, HYA, 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 echoed with her resolve as she slammed into the tree in front of her, leaving several handprints etched into the bark and the underlying wood where the bark had started to fall. The blue net spun on her heel, hooking her finger in a kunai as she threw it into the shadows of the woods. Her eyes narrowed as a low chuckle returned her aggression, and she wiped the perspiration from her eyes and made a perfect 3-point combo on the tree, a large piece of wood falling off. Tenten said amicably, twirling the thrown kunai around her ring finger before throwing it back at Hinata, who leaned to the side and barely avoided the return fire. You keep up with accuracy like that, and I won't be the only expert markswoman in the village, at least among the genin. Reaching down to unzip Naruto's borrowed jacket, Hinata apologized, saying, sorry, Tenten-san. I'm working out some issues. I didn't intend to actually hurt you. If I'm being honest, I was kinda hoping it was someone else. Tenten trailed off, turning away as Hinata gazed bewilderedly at the weapon's mistress. Every time I see you with that jacket on, you act like such, Tenten said. The hard lines of her face returned to their softer counterparts, and her eyes softened as she laid the jacket aside in an attempt to cool down. Unaware that her fingers were prodding one another, she asked, what's that Tenten-san? Old habits seem to die hard. Tenten blushed and turned away, saying, I was going to say you act like a real live kunoichi, but I realized that sounds insulting to your usual demeanor. I guess I'm just used to Neji Sama to think of you as any relation. Hinata looked up at an apple and said, oh, that's okay. Speaking of Neji, why are you here and not helping him train for the finals? Well, I remember how Neji treated you during the preliminaries, and since Lee can't exactly find you to do this, Guy Sensei is busy actually training Neji, and Neji would probably die before he apologizes. I wanted you to know that Guy Sensei is sorry, as are the rest of Team 9 for his actions. Tenten replied, bowing only to hear a dry chuckle above. She noticed Hinata sitting on a tree branch, sharply biting into a bright red apple, as she looked up. After noticing Tenten's irate expression, Hinata threw her another apple and remarked, you talk about me not acting like a true kunoichi, but here you are, Worrying about my feelings. Now who's not acting like a kunoichi? Tenten snapped back, well, I'm sorry to worry, but I'll just let you handle it on your own the next time. Hinata trailed off as she fell, her whip encircling a tree branch to support her. I didn't say I don't appreciate the concern, Tenten-san. Just that you shouldn't always be concerned with how people perceive you. After all, females can't compete with males in a contest of strength, so sometimes, she said. Hinata acted as though she had injured herself and said, as girls have to get them to drop their guards. She then collapsed to the ground. Even the sides of her pearlescent eyes were leaking tears. Tenten was by her side right away. What's wrong, Hinata? Only to be abruptly restrained by Hinata's whip, which had snagged her neck and stopped her breathing. Hinata stood elegantly and gave Tenten a playful glance before letting her go, saying, case in point. Tenten was taken aback by her feisty demeanor until she noticed that she was wearing the same sunset jacket. With a sigh, the panda genin turned to face the weapon that had just moments before restricted her oxygen supply. Without waiting for an answer, Tenten exclaimed, wow, cool whip. Can I see it? And took the whip from Hinata, rubbing her hands over it, tugging on it, and giving it a few test cracks. Tenten rattled it off, her eyes glazing over as she gave it a few twirls before sending it tip first through a tree, the crystal easily shearing through the wood. High-quality material, most likely domesticated deer, rather than wild, strong tensile strength, crystal tip for fighting rather than control, doesn't conduct chakra though. Tell you what, I hate seeing such a beautiful piece not at maximum potential. My father runs a high-end weapon shop. I bet he could fix this up for you, maybe teach you a few jutsu to go with it, and we'll call it even. Think of it as my way of investing in the better Hyuga. Tenten said arrogantly, and Hinata giggled. A blonde genin, thanks to his perverted teacher, was dancing around many attacks in Konoha. However, Naruto would hardly move his body out of the way while still keeping the target in sight, regardless of how the sage's attacks appeared to pin him in. Jiraiya compared Naruto's agility to that of his former teammate, which made him shudder. Jiraiya had come up with the idea after finding out that Naruto was up against a Hyuga prodigy. It looked like a straightforward exercise that Naruto could have come up with on his own. He just had to balance a bowl of fresh ramen on his head while avoiding all of Jiraiya's kunai and shuriken. He was not allowed to hold the ramen in his hands for the purpose of the exercise, but that didn't stop him from juggling the divine treat without spilling a drop. However, Naruto altered the rules about halfway through. He had set his own victory condition, arguing that Neji would eventually exhaust his stamina. He was forced to finish the ramen before Jiraiya forced him to drop it by introducing a pair of chopsticks into the mix. Not that he'd made the blonde drop the bowl, but at least Jiraiya had kept him from eating ramen so far. All he received from the blonde was vile looks and the occasional fireball, even when he made crude remarks in an attempt to make her lose his temper. However, Naruto's most impressive comeback occurred when he threw the bowl into the air like a pizza and used the chopsticks to catch multiple kunai and throw them back more accurately than Jiraiya had been able to do thus far. Since Jiraiya was unable to make Naruto give up his divine treat and Naruto actually refused to eat the ramen when it became cold, they ultimately declared it a tie. Even though the game was over, Naruto still showed off by balancing the two chopsticks end and spinning the bowl on top, all of which were supported by his chakra. The boy's control actually impressed the Toad Sennin. Although it wasn't as good as, say, Tsunade or pretty much any medic.nin, it was impressive that the boy with chakra reserves could compete with the Hokage. Jiraiya asked, so, how goes your progress with the summoning jutsu? And the other jutsu I taught you? While Naruto gazed incredulously at his partner. Naruto grinned as he said, I'm Naruto freaking Uzumaki, and you think I'm having trouble getting some toads to help me? I'm not you, Arrow. Gamma. The accusation was made without malice. Naruto smirked at Jiraiya, who opened his mouth to respond, only to have an Anbu appear out of nowhere. If you exclude the fact that I can summon Gamabunta simply by pouring in as much chakra as possible, then I can summon up to Gamashi at will. As for the Toad Oil Flame Jutsu, progress has been made, although very little. I can summon the higher level toads that can use the oil, but I'm not familiar enough with them yet to use it. Other than Bunta, I haven't used it with any others yet. As for that other jutsu, lands have fallen with greater ease. The bear. Masked Anbu droning, Lord Jiraiya, Lord Hokage has requested your immediate assistance. Jiraiya jumped away as the Anbu trailed him, saying, sigh. Well, I guess today's lesson will be a bit short, Naruto. I'll see you later. Naruto began to leave the training grounds when he heard a familiar grunting sound. Silly Jiraiya, thinking he could teach me anything of value. Although, the summoning jutsu will come in handy should I require assistance on the field. Naruto grinned as he went to find his girlfriend and female teammate training hard, thinking, it's 3 days until the finals now, and she's still going at it. Since he had last seen her at the prelims, she had barely changed in appearance. He wasn't avoiding her. In fact, he had made multiple attempts to locate her but had failed. As she spun around and slammed a chakra infused palm into him, causing him to double over in agony, Naruto whispered, "Hey Hina-chan." When Hinata saw who it was, she instantly dropped to her knee in front of him to check on him while opening his chakra points once more. Naruto-kun, I sincerely apologize. You caught me off guard because I didn't see you. Are you okay? She blushed scarlet as Naruto stroked her cheek and grinned at her, which alarmed her. I'm okay, Hina-chan. I was just a little taken aback. She fainted into Naruto's arms, who shared her blush but remained conscious. Yep, I still got it, Naruto muttered, lightly rubbing his knuckles over her cheek as her blush spread. But you look so cute when you're worried. Upon awakening from her spell of fainting, Hinata saw Naruto leaning against a tree, slicing and peeling an apple with a kunai. He put a piece in his mouth and then cut off another, which she accepted, scrambling to her feet while staring at Naruto in bewilderment. I assume you're wondering why I'm here. I want you to spar with me, using only taijutsu, Naruto said, continuing after she nodded. I realize this might sound like an odd request, but I need your assistance to finish a taijutsu style. Simply come at me, use only taijutsu, and do whatever it takes to defeat me, no holds barred. Standing there waiting for her response, Naruto posed the question. Hinata confidently said, okay, I'll do it, for you, Naruto-kun. Naruto grinned and threw the apple aside as the kunai pierced it completely, skewering it against a tree trunk covered in tiny palm prints and one black palm mark in the middle. Hinata then assumed her stance and activated her glowing dojutsu. The pair smirked in their own unique ways as they charged at one another after exchanging a word without sound. Jiraiya, meanwhile, was listening to the elderly Hokage explain his summons while perched on his sensei's windowsill. Jiraiya condensed the previous 15 minutes of meandering into 8 words, so, you want me to track down Tsunade? Hiruzen nodded, and the Toad Sennin sweat fell. Alright, so I was anticipating Naruto's Chunin finals, but this seems to take precedence. Another nod. Well, if I want to see how much the Gaki is holding out on me, I guess I better hurry up then. Jiraiya left after one last nod. Breathing heavily, Naruto recalled the 2 days of non-stop, intense sparring with Hinata, who was mimicking his erratic breathing. His fingers grazed the tree to pull himself up, passing over the familiar scars carved into the tree. Naruto 1. Hinata 102. I completed it in the style of my taijutsu. Welcome to my battlefield, where I developed my vision and opened my eyes. Naruto grinned slyly. A third of the available shinobi were tasked with patrolling the village and wall. Normally, it would have only been a fifth, but after Naruto had stopped the attack on his partial sensei, Hayate Gecko, the third had stepped up security. Hayate was still in the hospital, but he would survive, after reporting that the Sand and Sound were planning something during the finals. According to some, the Chunin finals caused mass hysteria in the village of Konoha, as evidence of how despicable the village was, as evidenced by the fact that they would abandon their shops and duties to watch some kids beat the stuffing out of each other. Naruto's thoughts drifted back to the day the finalists were paired off as he watched the pragmatic procession of people making their way to the stadium. He had one last task to complete before the butt kicking could start, but his match against Neji was first, and he was eager to remove that arrogant expression from the egotistical Hyuga's face. 8 genin, 3 from Sand, and 5 from Leaf were lined up across the stadium floor, waiting for the finals to start. When they heard footsteps, a few turned to watch the newest competitor enter, raising eyebrows as they took in Hinata's appearance and the confident expression on her face as she strode over to Genma, the finals referee, and introduced herself while being directed to her position in the line up. With just 3 spots remaining, the 9 genin waited for them to arrive, the minutes passing before the show began. Since no new competitors had arrived by 9 o'clock, a certain Hyuga began to perspire a little as he wondered where Naruto was. Naruto was always on time, so it didn't make sense for him to be late to such a significant event, especially after boasting all week about defeating Neji. Now is the moment to start. As they waited for the match to start, Genma urged the gathered genin to head upstairs, saying, if all the finalists except Neji, Hyuga and Naruto Uzumaki would make their way to our specially prepared viewing box. Genma started the introductions by projecting his voice outward using chakra. Neji Hyuga vs Naruto Uzumaki, the first match, will start in 5 minutes. Both competitors will be forced to withdraw from the tournament if they are not present at the time. Although Hinata had prepared herself for this day, Naruto's assurance that he would be by her side was what had ultimately won her over. She started to tensely press her index fingers together. Genma shrugged his shoulders and directed chakra to his vocal cords to project his voice outwards once more as the 5 minutes flew by, with only a handful of stragglers managing to find seats in the arena. Naruto Uzumaki is not here, and as such, I am forced to acknowledge the winner as... Oi! A loud voice yelled as Genma was startled out of his speech as he looked around for the source of the voice, only to find it on the roof, a shadowed figure pointing accusingly at him. The hero always arrives at the last second. The figure yelled and leapt 3 stories up from the roof, landing silently with a wide smile on its face. A second body was visible across the figure's back. Tenten was shocked to see Naruto, but she quickly cleared the side next to her of all her snacks so her third teammate could sit down. Naruto apologized, jumping up with ease and using chakra to run straight up the wall. Sorry, had to pick up a friend for festivities. Naruto grinned kindly and began to jump back down, but he gave a thumbs up with a gleam in his teeth, then leapt back down to face Neji. Watch closely, Lee, and see how a genius of hard work thrives. Uzumaki, I'm not sure why you bothered to come at all. Neji crossed his arms over his chest and said, you are destined to lose to me today. My eyes have seen it. Naruto smirked rather than growled at the enraged Hyuga. Like he was announcing the day's weather, Naruto said, you seem awful confident in those eyes. I almost pity you for just how blind you are. Neji froze, glaring at Naruto, who seemed to be oblivious, more focused on searching for Hinata, but he was unable to find her anywhere. Oh well, he'd find her after he beat this prick at his own game. Well, it appears that we still have a match. If both competitors are prepared, great, if not, it's your fault. Hajime. Genma yelled and leapt back, clinging to the wall with his chakra as he ascended to a tiny overhang and perched like a hawk. If you give up now, Uzumaki, I'll forgive you. I don't enjoy taking down a weak fighter like that. Return, put in more training, and perhaps you'll have a chance to compete against me the following year. Naruto gazed at Neji with longing as he said, but for now, a failure like you can have no hope against me, a prodigy. Naruto said evenly, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. His body seemed to tremble a little as 2 clones materialized at his side as the 3 of them charged Neji, who ducked around their feeble attacks and hit their exposed areas. However, for every one he destroyed, 2 more appeared. What was meant by that remark? As more clones replaced the ones he had already taken out, he was forced to start using the Juken to swiftly and effectively eliminate the clones, with none taking their place this time. Neji asked, in fact, escape the superior number of clones by using one to push himself away, throwing kunai at the advancing horde. You can always see the shortcomings in other people, but you are blind to the fact that you are completely broken and that your facade is cracked. It's similar to seeing a bird with broken wings that can only grouse and irritate but is unable to fly out of its cage. Naruto taunted, tell me when I've hit a nerve, bird boy. Neji appeared in front of him more quickly than he had anticipated, his open palm aimed directly at his heart. Fortunately, Naruto was able to barely dodge the blow, which struck his left shoulder as he flipped backwards and landed on his feet as he slid to a stop, grinning. I believe that clarified my query. Bird boy, how about you try to beat me now? Once again, Naruto taunted, and Neji responded. This time, though, Naruto was prepared and barrel rolled under Neji's attack, advancing behind the Hyuga as he attacked his bare back. Nevertheless, Neji was able to get a kunai at him, forcing Naruto to back off long enough for Neji to confront him again. Uzumaki, you can't run from these eyes. When this failed, Naruto paused for a moment as multiple clones poofed into existence around him, confusing Neji because he couldn't tell the difference between the clones and the real Naruto. Neji yelled, he said, his clan's dojutsu activating as he tracked Naruto perfectly, deflecting the numerous kunai thrown at him. Neji had to face a swarm of Naruto clones once more, as they quickly surrounded him and jumped at him from all sides. But Neji just grinned and started spinning, a blue shield encircling him as the clones collided with it and dispelled it. As Naruto watched him closely, searching for the opening he needed, Neji called out the name of his technique, 8 trigrams. Kaden. He saw it and raced at Neji, who stopped spinning due to dizziness, only to be struck in the face by Naruto a split second later, giving the haughty Hyuga no time to react, as Naruto clubbed him in the face, sending the cocky Hyuga rolling backwards. Naruto looked down at his bloody knuckles, and a flash of flame shot across them, instantly cauterizing them. You mentioned that I couldn't hide, right? Neji forced himself to stand up and glared at Naruto, who was crouching and running at the Hyuga once more. Apparently, I don't need to hide if I can just walk up to you and punch you in the face, Naruto said matter of factly. Seconds before Naruto arrived, Neji had an idea. He concentrated a lot of chakra into his palm and thrust it forward, where Naruto's chest should be. However, the blonde turned his body in midair, catching him off guard as he leaned back on his hands to support his body while his leg shot straight up to catch Neji under the chin. Neji, however, had anticipated it, having seen the move in his spars with Lee, and he followed the momentum, leaning back as Naruto's heel just missed his chin by a few centimeters. His eyes widened, though, when he saw that a jet of flame erupted from Naruto's foot rather than his heel landing in an axe kick as the move was finished. Neji was forced to roll backwards as Naruto went into a spinning headstand, a wave of fire flying from his foot as it flew over the Hyuga's head, and it was so close to his face that he had to hold his breath to avoid sucking in any flames. Both fighters executed a back handspring in perfect unison to put some distance between themselves and their opponent. "How did you accomplish that? I shouldn't be pushed this far by a failure like you," Neji cried out, and Naruto grinned as he looked up into the crowd and saw that, coincidentally, Hanabi and Hiyashi Hyuga were seated there.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.